In 2035, a real revolution took over the world, caused by the emergence of a unique virtual reality game called Walberry, in which unexpected events erupted every day. Exciting adventures unfolded, and new opportunities appeared for those who dared to immerse themselves in this virtual world. However, this world was far from perfect, and was plagued by numerous vices, the greatest of which was treacherous betrayal. Hundreds and thousands of people sought to find only one, a mysterious man named An Jae-hyun, whose figure was overgrown with legends. For the sake of this search, one of the most influential figures in the world issued a cruel order to kill one of those who belonged to Hyun's entourage. The executioner, without a moment's hesitation, obeyed the order. His sword was already swung, ready to strike and take the life of the loyal knight. The knight, barely able to stand, bloodied and exhausted, tried with all his might to withstand the unbearable pressure that threatened his existence. And suddenly, as if from nowhere, a figure appeared. Moving faster than the world itself, it stood before the blow, protecting the knight. Like lightning, he struck a devastating blow with his weapon directly into the attacker's stomach, preventing the massacre from taking place. And it was at that moment that everyone present, stunned and filled with horror, realized the truth. Ji-hyun himself stood before them. But suddenly, the Knights of the Kingdom realized that it was Hyrkan standing before them, and immediately rushed to grab him. However, he turned sharply, and his eyes flashed with rage, intertwined with cold seriousness. The next moment, he unleashed his power, destroying almost all of the kingdom's knights with a single move. A moment later, they were lying unconscious on the stone floor, scattered like helpless dolls. With a confident, even defiant smile, he said that attacking him with a whole crowd was futile, because they would never be able to overcome him. His men, overcome with guilt, began to apologize profusely, believing that it was because of them that this skirmish had occurred. They could not even imagine that the Knights of the Kingdom would be lying in ambush. But Ji-hyun sincerely didn't understand why they were apologizing, because it wasn't their fault. He just held out his hand to them, helping them up from the cold floor, and, looking them straight in the eye, he quietly assured them that everything was fine with him and there was nothing to worry about. In response, his people wept loudly. But Ji-hyun did not consider them guilty and accepted their tears as a manifestation of genuine humanity, not weakness. He thought it was better to let others blame everything on that loser who was always lagging behind and couldn't keep up with everyone just because of her lack of skills. But suddenly, Ji-hyun turned sharply and stared at the main woman of the kingdom, whose presence darkened the hall. At that moment, their eyes met. Cold determination against burning devotion. She was amazed by Ji-hyun's such ardent friendship with his people, and couldn't understand why he was so sentimental in a world where there was no room for feelings. Then she majestically rose from her chair and confidently moved forward, for she was convinced that defeating him was a trivial matter for her. Her name was Sire, but her real name was Chae Sol-yeon. She belonged to the Thunder Hunters and bore the formidable nickname of the Queen of Thunder. Arguments and duels constantly flared up between her and Ji-hyun, each of which left a mark on the memory of both. He saw in her only the one who, every time, gritting her teeth, got up again and gained strength after defeat, even from those weaker than herself. And just now he began to activate his combat slot. In an instant, a mysterious mask appeared on his face, and a weapon materialized in his hands. His body was clad in the finest armor, and he exuded such power that the very atmosphere around him seemed heavier. But Ji-hyun believed that only the weak argued, those like the Thunder Queen herself, who were unable to prove their strength through actions. His arrogance and unwavering confidence irritated her immensely, so she coldly gave the order to kill him. But he only smiled, because he had no idea that she could truly believe that someone could take his life. But at the same moment, he felt an icy pain from the blade piercing his back. He couldn't believe his eyes. These were the same knights he had saved more than once, those he had considered reliable and loyal, who should not have stood aside. As Ji-hyun began to slowly fall into the darkness of death, they, their eyes downcast in embarrassment, muttered apologies, admitting that they had betrayed him on purpose. They begged not to be angry with them, explaining that they simply had to earn a living and had no choice. But Ji-hyun's heart was breaking with disbelief and pain. He couldn't comprehend that those to whom he had given so much strength had turned their backs on him. At this time, the Thunder Queen laughed loudly and cruelly, her laughter rumbling through the air like real thunder. She enjoyed the spectacle, believing that his belief in friendship was just a pathetic childish fantasy that had no meaning in a world where everything was decided by money. Her true and main goal was the complete destruction of Hyrkanus in this particular game, because all her actions, every step, and even the smallest detail of strategy were aimed solely at putting an end to his existence and proving her own superiority. She knew very well that if she killed him every time he entered the game, he would never be able to move forward, leaving him with no progress. She remembered that he spent almost all his time playing this game, and it seemed to her that he had nothing valuable outside of this world. That's why, her face contorted into a terrifying expression, she coldly delivered her verdict. He's not even worthy of this game, because he's just a nuisance. At this moment, Ji Ho-yan clenched his fists and squeezed the ground in his hands, and anger flared in his eyes. With the last of his strength, he rushed at her, trying to cause the least amount of damage. But at the same moment, several sharp sword blows pierced his body. These were the same knights he had once protected. Now, they stood in the way, preventing him from approaching the queen. His mind could not comprehend why they acted so cruelly, for he had sacrificed so much for their guild. But the knights ruthlessly demanded only one thing from him: to die, because they had been paid hundreds of millions for his death. Ji-yeon didn't put this betrayal into his head. They were ready to kill him just for the money, ignoring everything he had done for them. After all, they have repeatedly emphasized that they are united by an indissoluble bond, that they are one big family. But now, for the sake of a few bags of gold, his own family has cold-bloodedly betrayed and murdered him. After dying in the game, he woke up in a harsh reality. His chest heaved convulsively from heavy breathing, as if he were trying to break free from a nightmare. And it was then that he realized the worst thing. He had lost absolutely everything. After all, this game has become a global phenomenon, garnering millions of views on social networks. Its foundation was virtual reality, which controlled people's destinies and brought huge amounts of money to anyone with power and talent. For him, this game was his only refuge, the only thing he was truly good at, because in real life, he was considered a nobody. Trash. He created a guild himself, and only there did he feel his own significance. That's what he thought. Until today. Crippled by pain and resentment, he stood up and put on his jacket, and with gloomy thoughts in his head, he went outside. His steps quickly turned into a run, and in his heart there was only one thought. He would find every traitor and kill them all. He could not understand why fate had put him through so much suffering. Is it just so that others can live carefree at his expense? If he had only known in advance that everything would turn out this way, he would never have sacrificed himself for them. He wouldn't fight or worry about people who eventually turn their backs on him. Lost in his own thoughts, he didn't even notice as he stepped onto the roadway at a green light, where a giant truck was racing straight at him. The impact was inevitable, and he got into a terrible accident. Even as he was losing consciousness, his mind painfully recorded a detail. Of all the machines in the world, it was the garbage truck that took his life. But he didn't want to die. Just not now. For the burning desire to take revenge on those who betrayed him still burned in his chest. He sought revenge on everyone who had once despised and humiliated him, and he swore that, despite everything, he must carry out this revenge. At this moment, reality darkened. The process of connecting to the game began, and the user verification sounded. And it was then that Hyrkan opened his eyes. A new scene unfolded before him. A test where he had to survive the fight against the Lord of the Labyrinth, the formidable Minotaur. He was stunned and couldn't understand what was happening because he was on a learning quest, but the knights beside him shouted for him to come to his senses and pull himself together. After all, now they had to join forces to destroy this giant monster. Each of them understood. Alone, there was no chance of winning. Only together could they survive. But Hyrkan was confused, because he remembered well that this training boss had been removed 5 years ago due to excessive complexity. However, the knights looked at him with a puzzled look and claimed that the game had only been created 10 months ago. Their words made him think. He couldn't understand why he found himself in the past, as if time had rewound. Without thinking twice, he tried to get up, while the knights still did not understand what was happening around them. But despite their confusion, they knew. They needed to gather their thoughts, and someone had to give the signal for a joint attack. But unexpectedly for everyone, when Gintar finally got to his feet, he resolutely headed straight towards the giant monster. The next moment, he abruptly jumped up and rushed at a frantic run straight at the enemy. Everyone present watched in shock. They thought he had lost his mind. Even the giant monster, frozen in place, looked at him in amazement, and his eyes burned with rage and hatred. It seemed that the monster himself understood. This battle would end in his death. However, there was no fear in Gintar's gaze, only unshakable confidence in his own abilities. And in an instant, his blades swiftly cut the monster into countless bloody pieces. The young man's eyes shone with cold determination and anger, intertwined with inner hatred. They barely had time to recover. The monster was already lying cut open on the floor, bleeding from its wounds. The knights, who a moment ago were preparing to fight to the last, looked at the boy with undisguised shock. He had single-handedly killed the monster with one blow. Stunned, they looked at each other. then smiled faintly. Deciding not to miss the chance, they called Gintar to make him an offer. This battle showed them that they had a warrior with incredible talent, and they wanted to see him in their guild. But at that moment, memories flashed before Gintar's eyes. The same ones when his comrades once offered him to join the guild. A chill ran down his spine. His heart clenched with rage, and hatred and resentment flared up in his eyes again. Without thinking for a long time, he replied that he had recently made his own decision. The knights asked with smiles which one, confident that he would agree now. But without saying another word, Gintar swung his sword sharply, and his blade entered the bodies of those who had been inviting him just a moment ago. At that moment, he swore to himself that he would never trust people again. From now on, his path was different. The path of someone who kills heroes and takes revenge on everyone who had ever hurt him. After removing the game helmet, he began to regain consciousness. But when he turned around, he tried to understand where he was now. There were crowds of people around, players, and many game capsules lined up next to them. And only then did he realize it was a gear store. Memories came flooding back. 5 years ago, he couldn't afford his own equipment and had only played on a demo capsule. The realization hit him. He was in the past. Slowly taking off his helmet, he concluded that there was no time to waste now. Standing up abruptly, he rushed forward. After all, if fate really gave him a second chance and he returned to the past, he has 5 years of future knowledge and experience at his disposal. By using them correctly, he will be able to carry out his great revenge. Running up to the girl working at the reception, he confidently asked for one standard set of gear. The girl, surprised and even a little scared by his tone, immediately began processing the payment. In his head, he was already happy and began to make a plan, pondering where to begin his new path. But his thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the girl at the reception, who informed him in a cold voice that there were not enough funds on his car. This news stunned him like a blow to the chest. Barely holding back nervous laughter, he sighed and smiled bitterly. He remembered, if he had ever had money, he would have bought this capsule a long time ago. But now he wondered, why was he so eager to play if fate constantly put obstacles in his way? A new plan quickly emerged in my head, to raise the necessary funds, even if it took up invaluable time. But suddenly, he heard a familiar, hateful voice that seemed to permeate everything around him. The voice that had always irritated him to the point of madness. That voice mocked. The strong were never afraid of trials, and on the real battlefield, indecision was a deadly luxury. Raising his head, he stared at the store's large screen and saw the image of the Thunder Queen there. The same one who had once killed him in the game. It was an ad that said, "Start playing World right now." He stood silently, his eyes fixed on the screen. A memory flashed back to her mind, her distorted face, full of hatred, as she told him he was nothing but trash. Gritting his teeth, he turned and resolutely walked out of the store. The decision had already been made in his heart. He would take revenge on everyone who had hurt him. And now he had no right to choose between methods. A few hours passed and he was already home, having ordered the delivery of a game capsule. Soon, couriers brought it right to the door. The installation took some time, but eventually everything was completed, and the master, having said goodbye, left him alone with the capsule. Hyrkan sat and looked at the credit card he had just received. This was the only quick way to get the equipment because he wanted one thing: to make money and gain power as quickly as possible. To do this, he had to turn to a familiar lender, from whom he borrowed 10 million won. But along with the money, he accepted a difficult condition. As his fingers touched the card, the creditor suddenly plunged a knife into the table between his palms. And, full of malice, he hissed that if Hyrkan did not repay the debt within the specified time, his life would turn into a real hell. Hyrkan understood that he had no choice but to agree to these inhuman conditions. He just sighed. A cold drop of sweat rolled down his cheeks, and he swallowed a lump of fear in his throat. But despite everything, determination was already shining in his eyes. Because all this was an unimportant trifle for him, compared to what he had planned ahead, he himself will now have to crawl through the very depths of hell, accept pain and suffering in order to make his way to the end. He did all this for one purpose only: to take revenge and smash the faces of those who betrayed him and abandoned him in his darkest moment. He could no longer find peace even in his dreams. Every time he closed his eyes, a terrible image appeared before him, their treacherous faces etched in his mind like a brand. Full of determination and confidence, he began plugging into the game, which had now become an arena of retribution for him. In a moment, the system confirmed the login, and his consciousness found itself inside the game world. Looking around, he suddenly caught himself thinking how much time had passed since the first moment he had set foot on this virtual path. The moment came to mind when the woman who had greeted him after completing his studies was supposed to appear. It was Ariadne, A guide called upon to help him choose his class. She stretched her hand forward, and a warm yellow glow began to pour from her palm, like living energy. The light symbolized the beginning of a new stage. It was time to choose the main class, on which all further fate in the game depended. 3 possibilities presented themselves to him. 3 paths, 3 skill sets that would define not only his fighting style, but the very essence of his future. The first was the warrior, a fighter wielding melee weapons and capable of deciding the outcome of a battle with the power of his own hands. This was the path for those who loved the feeling of battle, the thirst for battle, the taste of victory won in a bloody clash. He had already followed this path in the past, rapidly advancing in level, but he knew very well that it would be too difficult for a warrior to do it alone. So this time, he deliberately refused this choice. The next class was the cleric, a conduit of light and healing, capable of supporting allies, healing their wounds, and granting them strength. But he immediately rejected this possibility. He did not want to waste his time helping others instead of following his own path. When the other options fell away, it became clear that only the last choice remained, and Ariadne, smiling, blessed him with good luck. At the same moment, the space around was illuminated by golden threads, similar to the radiance of the sun, woven into a bizarre web. They gradually enveloped his body, marking the completion of the selection and the birth of a new class. At the same time, his body began to dissolve in streams of light, transporting him to another place. As the vision cleared, he saw a majestic tower, the sacred place of his new class, where his mentor was already waiting. This was Golko, the guide of the magical path, one of the greatest magicians of his time. The old man's gaze was full of strength and wisdom when he asked what branch of magic the new student was choosing. And without hesitation in his heart, Gilkin made his choice: dark magic. After these words, there was silence, and they stared at each other for a while, as if in silent confrontation. Golko pretended to mishear and began to talk about the magic of the earth, but Gilkin firmly confirmed his choice. He was not dreaming. He sought to master the darkness itself. The magician was sharply indignant, wondering where he could have heard of such power, because dark magic was considered the most dangerous in the world. It was stronger than any other school and mercilessly devoured the soul of anyone who dared to call upon it. But Hyrkan, full of steadfastness, declared that he had come for this very knowledge and demanded to be taught it, because it was dark magic that he sought above all else. Such a decisive and firm answer caught the magician by surprise. The next moment, he shed the illusion of a living body, revealing his true form, a bony skeleton, and suggested that he begin his training without delay. After all, it had been a long time since he had seen any of the young daredevils choose such a difficult and dangerous path. An ancient book materialized before Hyrkan, and the skeleton mage declared, if he was truly ready, he must lay his hands on this grimoire of skills. However, he warned that this path is treacherous and insidious, and for the weak-minded, it will become a trap that will cut short their lives. But Hyrkan, without even listening, resolutely placed his hand on the book, without a shred of hesitation. He wanted to start immediately, for he was certain that his heart was far from weak. The skeleton mage laughed a loud, eerie laugh that echoed off the walls of the tower. And the very next moment, dark energy began to envelop Hyrkan's body, penetrating every cell, as if trying to absorb him completely. The mentor was only happy. Finally, a student appeared, curious and brave enough to touch the forbidden. At that moment, Hyrkan remembered that once in a past life, there had been only one truly famous video, the story of a necromancer player who single-handedly destroyed the main boss. And now, he needed exactly the same strength that would not betray. The system confirmed his choice. He received the title Undivine Necromancer and obtained his first artifact, a skeleton fragment. A small skull bone emerged from his hands, radiating ominous energy. Hyrkan threw her to the ground. The skull began to expand, grow bones, and gradually take on the shape of a warrior. He watched as the silhouette came to life, imbued with dark magic. At that moment, he finally decided. His path was to become a necromancer, and now he was ready to immediately train and raise his level. But suddenly, a heavy crash was heard from behind him. Looking back, he saw that the newly created skeleton had its head fall off. They both froze for a moment, staring at each other, not understanding what was happening. But soon the space before them distorted, and a portal opened, leading to the Dungeon of Skills. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and entered a new world. In the dungeon, he carried the skeleton's skull in his hands, wondering at the strange behavior of his subordinate, because this warrior he had created was completely unlike the cold and soulless servants he remembered from his past life. Hyrkan assumed that the reason for his low level of skill was that without proper development, his skeleton remained weak and unstable. so he decided to raise his level as quickly as possible. At that moment, a terrifying roar was heard from behind. These were coal wolves, training monsters known for their agility. Although they were not very powerful, they were fast enough to be a great test for beginners. Hyrkan threw a fragment of the skeleton at them. The skull shattered into tiny fragments that exploded in bright light, and from this radiance emerged the figure of his skeleton warrior. He immediately sensed the presence of the enemies and took up a fighting stance. And a moment later, emitting a loud battle roar, he rushed forward. The wolves, frightened by this eerie sound, howled, retreating back. Hyrkan, full of determination, ordered his warrior to destroy them all. The servant obeyed the order and launched an attack. The skeleton, without stopping, rushed towards them. Hyrkan felt that things were going even better than he had expected. At this rate, he had a chance to quickly reach a high level. But suddenly, after one blow from the wolves, the skeleton shattered into pieces. This sight shocked him. He definitely did not expect such a result. When he came to, he noticed how the skeleton's head rolled straight to his feet. The skull stared at him with empty eye sockets, and from within, it seemed to be coming a soft moan, like a cry. He was afraid, ashamed, and powerless. Hyrkan felt rage boiling in his heart. He opened the characteristics window and saw that his servant had the lowest indicators. This cooled his anger a little. He realized that he simply had not set the combat mode settings. Having fixed this, he activated mode number 1, defense. Looking at the skeleton, he saw how it, covering itself with its hands, tried to resist, while the wolves gnawed at its bones. He couldn't believe that this was even possible. It all seemed so unreal and absurd. Feeling his heart beating faster, he decided not to waste any time and activate the third special action mode, the one that was intended only for extremely critical situations, when any delay could cost his life. But when his gaze fell on the skeleton, it suddenly began to dance wildly, as if mad, and this absurd scene threw him even more off balance. Immediately after that, a wave of despair swept over him. He wept bitterly, realizing that he was in an absolutely hopeless situation. The image of the Grand Mage who had once warned him of possible dangers flashed through his memory, and at that moment it seemed to him that he was about to lose his mind. The worst part was that he couldn't even delete this character or change his class, and yet the loan payments were about to start. A dark thought kept coming into his head. To go and get hit by a car again, to get rid of all this. He couldn't understand why nothing was working out for him, why the world kept crushing his hopes just when it seemed like everything was about to get better. He even felt like he was angry with his own skeleton, the very one that was standing next to him and didn't even try to help him. Finally, he waved his hand in exasperation and ordered the skeleton not to even move. He didn't understand how the previous necromancer had ever dealt with such a subordinate, but suddenly a message flashed before his eyes. The skeleton is learning in battle, and he remembered that even when he was killing coal wolves, the skeleton had been closely watching his actions. It turned out that, watching his fight, the skeleton gradually adopted his techniques. Realizing this, he suddenly smiled. Then he called the skeleton closer and said that it was extremely lucky because he was now its master. He realized that he always looked different from others, but people still called him a genius. After all, he had once trained all the members of his guild, and they became the best among the others. So he decided to teach the skeleton one main truth of combat. Remember, if you don't dodge, you're already dead, he said, and he was the first to attack the skeleton. From the unexpected blow, the skeleton immediately fell to the ground unconscious. But he didn't stop. He repeated the same movements several times in a row, as if trying to imprint them in his charge's memory. And finally, the skeleton rose and was already standing in the same fighting stance that Ji-hyun himself was standing in. Ji-hyun didn't give him a second's rest. He pounced on him again and again, ruthlessly checking how he was learning his lesson, and the skeleton was defeated again and again, falling under his blows. But with each new attempt, Ji-hyun taught him another rule. If you get hit, you can't just stand there and suffer. You need to immediately think about what to do next. Look for an opportunity to dodge or strike back. After another fall, the skeleton rose from the clouds of dust that rose around it. He took the same fighting stance again, this time with a sense of seriousness and determination. And at that very moment, a new pack of coal wolves rushed at him, roaring, ready to tear him to pieces. But this time, the skeleton no longer stood still, was not afraid, and did not tremble. He resolutely rushed into the attack, began to defend himself and strike back at the same time. Time and again, he tore through the pack, attacking wolf after wolf until they all fell defeated. As the last enemy crumbled into black ash, the skeleton looked back, full of hope that Ji-hyun would praise him. But he just nodded dryly and said, "Your last move was not bad, but don't be distracted from the fight, because this is only the beginning." Suddenly, the skeleton's body glowed with a bright yellow glow. The system reported, The skeleton fragment skill is increasing, and with each new message, the glow only grew stronger, heralding new achievements. Along with the increase in the skeleton's level, Ji-hoon himself grew, feeling his own strength gradually increasing. After that, he headed to a newbie village called Castle of Figures, a place where like-minded people were sought to form a guild, a real family for further adventures. It was there that each player had to find a companion with whom he could pass the upcoming tests. But before they could get to the real challenges, they had to reach at least level 10. However, Ji-hoon was distracted by an unexpected encounter. One of the knights brazenly blocked his path. He, along with his friends, began to defiantly demand an apology for Ji-hoon allegedly touching his shoulder. But Ji-hoon wasn't even going to waste his time on them. Every second he had was too precious, and he mentally decided it would be easier to just kill them and move on. But while he was thinking, the chief knight mockingly raised his hand to strike him, and at that very moment, a stranger appeared in front of Ji-hoon and calmly stopped the blow. The man spoke firmly. "Just because you are stronger and have a higher level, doesn't give you the right to go around and beat people for no reason." A heated argument began between him and the knights, who tried to prove that the truth was on their side. Ji-hoon, looking at his new ally, suddenly recognized him. From his appearance, a powerful torso, sculpted muscles, and distinctive clothing, he immediately guessed who it was. It was impossible to confuse those broad shoulders and that unique style. Before him stood Matador Cheb himself, a legendary warrior of the highest rank, whom Ji-hoon remembered from his past life. However, he could not understand what such a fighter was doing in this place and why he was interfering in his affairs. Meanwhile, the enraged knight spat directly on the ground, issuing an open challenge. He started to get even angrier and growled at Matador not to interfere, saying he didn't know the whole story. After all, it was Ji-hoon who hit him first. But the Matador only rubbed his neck and smiled awkwardly, as if the situation even amused him. And at that moment, he released a wave of his incredibly powerful energy, along with the glow from his weapon. The force was so immense that the air around her began to sway, and surrounding objects were literally blown aside by her breath alone. This incredible power truly amazed everyone present, from ordinary students to the knights themselves, who were watching the events. The Matador smiled calmly and said, "If you want to hit me, you can. It will be fair. You will get the same." His words sounded confident and decisive, and everyone around felt that the real Matador Cheb was standing in front of them. His aura of energy and power was clear. He was a warrior without equal, the guildmaster of the Red Bulls, one of the 30 most powerful guilds. He was known as a man who loved battle and was never afraid of a challenge. The knight could not understand why the Matador decided to protect this particular boy. Without letting the knight finish, the Matador patiently waited for his answer. The boy shivered in fear, not knowing what to do. His feet seemed to be glued to the ground. He just wanted to run away. So he apologized profusely and ran away from them. The Matador just smiled. He was pleased that the conflict had been resolved with words, without bloodshed. Then he turned to Ji-hoon. "Pay no attention to them, and people like them." But Ji-hoon didn't even listen to the advice. He abruptly pushed his hand away, removing his shoulder. The Matador calmly looked around, nodded in understanding, and said that next time he wouldn't interfere. And he just went his own way, not taking offense at Ji-hoon's coldness. He knew well. Ji-hoon was always cold and reserved in his interactions with others. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon rushed forward, filled with anger, but not at Matador, at himself. Because his anger arose from the fact that the Matador was much stronger. His strength was so immense that Ji-hoon was truly scared and felt how big the gap was between them. He promised himself that when they met again, he would be much stronger. A completely different person. Back in the novice cave where the training was taking place, Ji-hoon was winding himself up, feeling this difference in strength. After all, Matador and Cheb were on the same level of skill, and in order to one day surpass him, Ji-hoon had to become stronger. But suddenly, a huge black tiger rushed at him from behind. Ji-hoon didn't even pay attention to him. The skeleton immediately got down to business. He defeated the tiger very quickly and painlessly, demonstrating lightning-fast efficiency. At the same moment, the system reported, "The skeleton warrior has completed the hunt for the coal tiger. Level up." Looking up at Ji-hoon, expecting praise, the skeleton was disappointed. The skeleton didn't even glance at him, thinking only of his own progress. Escalating was upset again. He longed for recognition, but his efforts went unnoticed. However, each new achievement brought him closer to his goal, and finally he reached one of his most important goals. It received the long-awaited War Watch, important game features that included status, quests, a map, an inventory, and an internal messenger. All these tools were designed so that the player could effectively navigate the game, increase their level, and plan their next steps. This was his first loss of stat points, and Ji-hoon was well aware that now he would have to seriously think about how to proceed. After a short thought, he decided to spend all the accumulated points on strength, because it is this that determines the effectiveness of the battle and the effect on the skeleton. All points instantly turned into strength, which increased by 50 units. His overall strength was now 53, a significant increase that was noticeable even in his aura. The skeleton was left in shock. He did not expect such a decisive act from his master. He even thought that Jihyun would just abandon him like their former necromancer did. But Jihyun wasn't going to give up necromancy. He still needed to teach the skeleton real combat gameplay. If he only pumped mana and intelligence now, it would change almost nothing in the gameplay. But pumping strength made it possible to teach the skeleton everything that he knew most effectively. His life and progress now depended on how well the skeleton developed, as it would become his apprentice and ally in battle. In any case, it was always possible to compensate for the shortcomings of some characteristics later. After that, they headed to the Castle of Figures, the headquarters of the Raider Association. They offered a fresh quest there, so desirable that everyone was willing to give everything they had for it. Every player dreamed of getting it. Some had been waiting since yesterday. Jihyun walked over to the table with the quest cards to choose his own. The salesman said that he could, of course, take on the tasks, but only difficult ones with low rewards remained. Things that no one wanted to take on. However, Jihyun was confident in his abilities and decided to see what was left. It turned out that only the worst quests remained, but he couldn't back down. His confidence wouldn't allow it. He understood that if you want to find gold, you have to start with even boring tasks. So he set off to the cave of Mount Beima. His task was to destroy low-level mobs in the vicinity of the mountain. He was sure that if he completed these boring quests, he would get to level 15. This will allow him to obtain the rare title Promising and increase his characteristics. The Promising title gives a percentage increase in stats, making him more effective in combat. In other words, it was a jumpstart for his new career. Without wasting a single minute, Jihyun set off to complete the quest. It's time to prepare your equipment. After some time, he arrived at Mount Beima, serious about raising his level in prospects, but his outfit consisted only of a clown show costume. He looked ridiculous and even a laughingstock in the eyes of his enemies. When he realized what he was wearing, he felt a slight awkwardness. There was no money left after purchasing the equipment for the skeleton, so we had to buy what was available. All he had to do was quickly complete the quest and earn some decent equipment. Jihyun is determined that nothing will stop him from leveling up and getting the title, not even a ridiculous costume. Jihyun realized that every second was worth its weight in gold and began to run quickly uphill, not paying attention to the little things. But as he raced, strange rustlings came from the bushes, which alarmed even him. Suddenly, a bloody hand shot out of the thicket, and before his eyes, he saw one of the players, covered in blood, begging for help. But Jihyun was already too far away and couldn't stop to help. Meanwhile, someone was dragged back into the bushes. 3 unknown players appeared, stronger than the wounded man. They quickly dealt with the poor man, showing cruelty and ruthlessness. Soon, another player arrived on the mountain, full of enthusiasm and desire to start a new adventure on Beima. He was confident in himself and his abilities, but he did not yet understand that dangerous traps and enemies awaited him. He thought he was a great player, but his pace of development could easily have made him a victim of stronger players. Suddenly, he heard cries for help. Running closer, he saw 2 boys. One was injured, and the other was trying to explain that they had been attacked by an unknown monster. They barely escaped and had no healing potions. The player began searching his inventory for a potion to save the wounded man. The guy sincerely thanked him and couldn't even hold back his tears. But suddenly, a huge enemy appeared behind him and tried to attack the savior. He was suddenly struck on the body, knocking him off his feet. Looking up, he saw the same 3 strong players laughing and declaring that they would use his stuff to the max. The poor player, already on his last breath and covered in blood, could not understand why he had been so cruelly deceived. From the attacker's perspective, he was just an idiot who fell into an easy trap. They finished him off, and he died on the spot. His body abruptly dissipated, leaving behind only a few fragments of time in the game. The 3 attackers laughed at his death, as often happened with rookies. After that, they were already looking for their next victim, wanting to continue the bloody fun. Meanwhile, the skeleton continued its work, killing coal wolves without stopping. One of the wolves rushed at him. The skeleton instantly activated attack mode. He responded to the attack with lightning speed, delivering precise blows. One by one, the wolves fell under his blows, completing the hunt and gaining experience and points in the process, which strengthened his skills. Jihyun noticed that now that the skeleton was armed with a sword, even the wolf attack seemed like a small thing to him, and he really started to feel more confident. Then Jihyun realized that the right decision was to buy the tools first. After all, equipment is more important than appearance. He began to feel proud of himself. Now he was only concerned with effective equipment, not a ridiculous costume, and he felt like a real gamer. The skeleton, turning around, thought that Jihyun was crying because of his condition and because of his funny clothes, but he was wrong. Ji-hyun was determined. Ji-hyun said, "If you're done here, follow me. We need to level up as soon as possible to clear the area." The skeleton ran after him, but did not notice an arrow flying from behind the bushes. And suddenly, the same arrow hit him right in the head. Ji-hyun didn't even have time to understand where she had come from. Voices appeared nearby and began to apologize. These were the same 3 players who had recently killed one of the newcomers and were now trying to justify themselves. From a distance, the skeleton looked like a monster. One of them began to apologize in a mocking manner, trying to seem sincere. Ji-hyun immediately noticed them and suspected something was wrong. One had traces of blood on his shirt, and the other had a bloody weapon, signs of a recent fight. Instantly, he understood what was happening. Ji-hyun stated, "I'm willing to forgive you, but only if I get compensation in the form of a mana potion." They first started making excuses that they didn't have a mana potion, but later admitted that mana automatically replenished when leveling up, so they could level it up themselves. They agreed to this, believing that it was their fault, and they had to fix the situation. But suddenly, monsters started appearing from behind, and there were so many of them, they appeared too often for Ji-hyun and the skeleton to relax. The players suggested, "We'll weaken them, and you, Ji-hyun, just finish them off." When Ji-hyun left, the 3 players began to carefully work out their usual plan, which they had used many times to kill the newcomers. The plan consisted of several stages. First, they had to distract the aggressive monster to create the illusion of chaos. Then one of them had to apply an attack buff to the monster, increasing its threat. And finally, one of the players had to pretend that he was pushed by accident to make Ji-hyun seem helpless and weak. In their imagination, the monster would simply eat Ji-hyun, and he would die instantly. They were sure that the plan was perfect, because it had worked many times before, including on other players. But they didn't take into account one thing. Ji-hyun turned out to be not as simple as they thought. In a moment, they destroyed the monster and watched as Ji-hyun gently but firmly reprimanded the skeleton for moving slowly. They couldn't understand why such a seemingly weak guy had such a powerful calling, and silently decided to leave the place. "Is his level much higher than we thought?" one of them thought. So they decided to implement a new plan. Throw as many monsters at him as possible and try to kill him when he loses his vigilance. They expected the chaos to play against him, and then the attack would become effective. One of the players took a swing, confident that his shot would hit the target. He hit with all his strength, confident that Ji-hyun wouldn't dodge the blow. But to his surprise, Ji-hyun instantly dodged, so quickly and imperceptibly that the attacker didn't even realize at first that he had missed. This movement was so natural and fast that it seemed impossible for an ordinary player. After that, Ji-hyun himself hit him with all his strength in the stomach, ramming in the direction of the skeleton. Those who watched were shocked and could not believe what had happened. Then Ji-hyun snapped his fingers at the skeleton, giving a wordless command. The skeleton, as if under an invisible spell, instantly obediently prepared to attack, ready to carry out its master's order. Ji-hyun, along with the skeleton, instantly rushed towards the 2 players who were trying to kill him. The 2 attackers were terrified, not knowing what to do next. Before they could even say anything, Ji-hyun and the skeleton attacked them both at the same time. The impact sent them flying several meters back, not even having time to orient themselves. An attempt to jump in the opposite direction did not save them. Ji-hyun resolutely rushed at them, recognizing them as insidious fraudsters. He instantly realized that such people only betray those who trust them, taking everything they have. If Ji-hyun remained the same old naive self, this tactic could work against him. One of the attackers tried to plead, offering to give up all his belongings in exchange for his life. But Ji-hyun was determined. No more trust in people like that. He struck with all his strength with his sword, and both players were destroyed. 8 valuable items fell from their bodies, which greatly surprised Ji-hyun. Without wasting time, he decided to take advantage of the situation and began collecting their belongings. Then he turned around, watching the skeleton continue to finish off one of the players. Ji-hyun offered the skeleton a share of the loot, rewarding him for his diligence. After a fierce battle, Ji-hyun used his power to heal the skeleton. In an instant, all of the creature's wounds disappeared, and he felt renewed, as if he had just been created. Ji-hyun felt happy about his new look and tried to ask the skeleton if he liked his new look, but he quickly added that appearance doesn't matter if the main thing is to play the game effectively. And while the new equipment was satisfying, Ji-hyun understood that true strength was not determined by appearance, but by skill and determination. Perhaps most interestingly, Ji-hyun had chosen a new suit for himself, a true state-of-the-art one that shimmered and shimmered in the light, and the skeleton, watching, didn't even say a word. His silence was like silent approval, and it added to his sense of power and confidence. Ji-hyun felt like Warwatch had become a real jackpot for him, as if the game itself was rewarding him for his patience and intelligence. After all, in this game, you could sell another player's watch and get a random item from their inventory. It was always a surprise, always exciting, and kept you in suspense. It could be any rare item with a choice, and the chance that something unique would fall out made the moment incredibly valuable. The items ranged from plain black pants that seemed mundane, to a sword made from the essence of an ancient tree that sparkled with magical energy. Even rare skill books with a demon's curse could drop, tools of power that no one could easily obtain. And sometimes ordinary money would fall out, which, although it didn't look valuable, meant freedom and opportunity in the game. This was called a real jackpot. Because of this, Ji-hoon could do practically anything he wanted and felt a real sense of control and power. And he even accidentally knocked out a precious relic faster than he could have imagined, and it boosted his excitement and confidence. Now he could record his gameplay, analyze every move, because building a character's reputation and history became key to his strategy. Suddenly he remembered the same traitor from his memories, who had once uttered the same words, which now took on a different meaning for him. He said that if everyone in the guild wore a ha-ho mask, it would make them popular and give them magical authority. So Ji-hoon decided to name his guild Ha-ho Mask, and this decision filled him with a sense of new beginning. Looking at the mask and remembering the past, he even thought of another name that could better convey his ambition and power, but his inner feeling told him to leave Ha-ho. In his hands, the mask seemed to burn with blue fire, and it wasn't just light, it was symbolic of his determination, his strength, and his control. He changed her appearance because he no longer wanted others to steal his things or undermine his authority in the game. He used this change as proof that he was always right in his actions and decisions, even in the face of rivals. Putting on the mask, he and the skeleton moved forward, feeling powerful energy and confidence in their abilities. After a while, they were at the top of the mountain, and the wind blew his hair, bringing a feeling of freedom and grandeur. They passed through the portal and entered the cave dungeons of Mount Beima, where darkness and the unknown awaited them from every corner. And Ji-hyun was ready for any challenge, for now he felt that his strength and strategy had reached a new level. Ji-hyun expected to encounter blue shapeshifters here, which according to legend only appeared in cave dungeons. However, this dungeon turned out to be much more difficult than he had thought. But thanks to the new, better equipment that gleaned on him, it became a relatively easy test for him. Aiming for a speedrun that was supposed to take about 10 minutes, he and the skeleton rushed forward, feeling adrenaline and excitement with every step. They ran for several hours straight without stopping, every second filled with speed and concentration. Ji-hoon felt tired, but he didn't fall to the ground because he knew that weakness was not allowed at such moments. Standing up abruptly, he wondered, why weren't there any monsters in this cave? His gamer instincts signaled that something was wrong here. He thought it was some kind of strange error, because usually a message appeared when someone had already cleared the dungeon. Looking at the skeleton, he noticed how it was simply pounding the wall, as if it was searching for something or preparing for something important. Suddenly, a small portal appeared in front of them, glowing with a cold, unusual light. A moment later, the portal became enormous, radiating dark energy that seemed to pull even the air inward, making everything around it oppressive and heavy. Then it dawned on Ji-hoon why there weren't any normal monsters here. This was an instance, a one-time dungeon that would spawn randomly among regular dungeons. When the instance was active, regular dungeons would become inactive until it was cleared. Instances were more difficult than standard dungeons, but the rewards were much better. The problem was that you either cleared the instance or died in it forever. From a rational point of view, Ji-hoon shouldn't have taken the risk. 2 days after dying in the game, he wouldn't be able to play. It would have been much safer to leave everything behind and pursue other quests that didn't threaten his life. But without thinking twice, he and the skeleton entered the portal, deciding to clear the instance and prove to himself that he could pass any test. A moment later, a bright, scorching sun shone down on them, and the feeling of darkness and danger was immediately replaced by a sense of grandeur and scale. They realized that they were in a huge coliseum, which immediately caused admiration and anxiety at the same time. The Colosseum looked eerie, huge, abandoned, worlds forgotten, with shattered stone and shattered arenas that bore witness to ancient battles. The atmosphere was heavy with silence, conveying the sense that real power and blood had once been fought here. They hadn't even had time to say a word when Ji-hoon felt the ground beneath his feet suddenly begin to tremble, as if the Colosseum arena itself had come to life, and the air around him became thick and saturated with a heavy energy that seemed almost physical, squeezing his chest and making his heart beat faster. A moment later, a huge monster appeared before him, a werewolf. Its size exceeded anything Ji-hyun had seen before. Its skin was covered in ominous dark spots. Its eyes glowed with a red light, and a dull roar swept across the arena, announcing the beginning of a dangerous game of life and death. It was an infected wolf of an unknown level, so powerful and aggressive that the ground trembled beneath its paws. Ji-hyun felt fear. This monster was not just strong, It was dangerous on a level he had only seen in legends before. Hyun froze for a moment, feeling a chill of fear run down his spine. Why was he infected? What power did this animal hide? He understood that there could be no mistake. Otherwise, it would be the end of him. But while Ji-hoon was trying to formulate at least a plan, the monster attacked sharply. A powerful rush and fury, and Hyun flew into the air, hitting a stone wall several meters away, feeling a sharp pain throughout his body. His back hit the rough surface, barely keeping his balance, and for a second, it seemed as if time had slowed down. Dust hung in the air, and his heart was beating wildly. Meanwhile, the skeleton tried to assess the situation, but the monster had already appeared before him, ready to destroy any enemy with lightning speed and without pity. In a second, the skeleton became combat ready. The sword gleamed in its hands, the shadow from the blade seemed huge, and all its muscles were tense, ready to react instantly to any movement of the enemy. And then Ji-hoon, despite his fear and danger, suddenly laughed loudly at the entire Colosseum. It was not a laugh of fear, but a laugh of excitement, joy, and unwavering confidence in his abilities. He felt incredibly lucky. Infected monsters were always connected to the main quest, which meant great progress, valuable achievements, and new opportunities for growing in power. Turning to the skeleton, Ji-hoon spoke with a confidence that strengthened both of them. If we don't destroy this wolf, we won't have dinner tonight. The skeleton, understanding the seriousness of his master's intention, immediately took up an attacking position, and their gazes merged into one common understanding of the goal: to defeat the monster at any cost. Together, they charged forward, both moving with incredible speed. Hyun's thoughts working like lightning, assessing the enemy's every move, planning maneuvers and counterattacks. They were determined and serious. Victory was not just desirable, it was necessary, vital, like breathing for survival. Even the skeleton hadn't expected such a maneuver when Hyun jumped away from his own sword, instantly changing trajectory as if his body was moving according to a different, more efficient algorithm. He lunged upward, leaping to the top above the monster, feeling the wind flowing around his body and adrenaline coursing through every nerve. The monster, watching this maneuver, froze in its terrifying roar. It had never seen such control and confidence in such a young warrior. At that moment, Ji-hoon began to concentrate energy, creating a demon's curse on his hand, a dark symbol that gradually flared up and trembled, as if alive. This curse, which he implanted into his sword, gradually formed, gathering strength for a blow capable of piercing even the strongest enemy armor. Ji-hoon was ready to attack, and the monster froze in shock, feeling an invisible force closing in on him, as if the darkness itself had come to life to destroy him. Ji-hoon began to mercilessly destroy the monster, blow after blow piercing through its armor and body, each move honed and deadly, as if he were performing a fight choreography he had long honed in his head. Unexpectedly for the monster, Ji-hoon jumped back, dodging the enemy's counterattack, moving so fast that his silhouette almost blurred in the air. A message immediately appeared. Skill activation, Demon's Curse, effectiveness reduced by 10%. Hyun was not confused, because he understood that this was his first time using such a powerful curse. He was proud of himself, because even in this state, the Demon's Curse dealt with the monster better than he expected. The blow was effective, the energy hit exactly on target. The monster was incredibly angry. Its eyes were blazing with rage, its teeth were gnashing, and its muscles were tensing, preparing for a furious counterattack. He suddenly rushed at Hyun. His movements were lightning fast, and the force of each blow could destroy entire walls of the arena. At this moment, a new message appeared. Werewolf in the tier. All status effects are nullified. Hyun realized that if this wasn't an instance, the battle could have turned into a disaster. But now he had the opportunity to test the full potential of his skills. He cast aside his doubts and decided to act with full force. There was no more time for reflection. With burning eyes, Hyun activated the slot, feeling the power spread throughout his body, filling him with an energy he had never known before. His body began to be enveloped in a dark, almost living energy that trembled and shimmered, creating the impression that the darkness itself had become his armor. Energy hovered above him in the form of black snakes that coiled around him, forming a huge spherical shield that reflected and accumulated the monster's power. A huge, powerful energy began to radiate from this spherical shield, tearing the air around it, amplifying Hyun's blows and making every movement deadly. Slot created armor form that was much more than just protection. It became a force field capable of reflecting attacks and amplifying his own. The black energy filling the armor was vast and almost alive, shimmering in dark, barely noticeable hues that shimmered against the Colosseum light. The use of the slot was a unique feature of this game. The player does not just activate a skill, he combines his own power with the energy of the world, gaining supernatural power. After all, when a player uses a slot, he receives additional power from the game world itself, as if the world itself obeys his will. And along with this immense energy, he endowed himself with an enhanced form capable of destroying any enemy, even one as powerful as an infected wolf. This form differed from regular players, not only in appearance, but also in strength, speed, and maneuverability, turning Hyrkan into a nearly invincible fighting machine. She had individual characteristics that varied from player to player, depending on inner strength, fighting style, and skill level. That's why most users simply called it an ultimate, a maximum unique form that could change the course of any battle. The ult gave the player incredible power, and the confidence it instilled in Hyrkan made him determined and invulnerable in battles. That's why he resolutely activated it and was ready to show what a true master of the game is capable of. The monster had no intention of backing down, its eyes blazing with rage and its teeth gnashing as it charged at Hyrkan with another furious attack. With incredible speed that exceeded expectations, he began to attack Hyrkan, moving so fast that the air around him trembled with each leap. Its huge claws, like curved blades, fell on Hyrkan with incredible force, leaving scars in the air that disappeared in an instant. He continued his furious attack, delivering blow after blow, trying to grab Hyrkan and break down his defenses. All the while, the monster tried to find a weak spot and catch Hyrkan, straining every muscle and using all of its immense strength. But Hyrkan skillfully dodged each attack, his movements planned and honed, as if he read the monster's intentions before they became reality. The monster did not stop. Its attacks did not cease, and with every second, they became more cruel and unpredictable. As expected from a true boss, his speed and strength were shocking, leaving Hyrkan on the verge of reaction. Hyrkan understood that if the monster landed at least 4 hits, even 3, the game would end in disaster for him. Fortunately, he had a trump card up his sleeve, a hidden strategy he had been practicing for a long time. He activated his ultimate, allowing himself to combine the power of his own armor with the dark energy of the demon's curse to somehow harm the monster. His blows cut through the air, and the monster felt a powerful barrage of damage that combined the power of the ult and Hyrkan's accuracy. For Jihan, it was a moment of real excitement. It was these kinds of fights that made the game interesting and unpredictable, but the joy was short-lived. The monster, despite all his wounds, made a dash and grabbed him by the hood, trying to pull him closer. Its fury and incredible strength were relentless. The monster continued to attack relentlessly, even after being damaged by numerous blows. Hyrkan realized that the monster was in a state of enraged boss, which he had completely forgotten about during the attack. The monster suddenly attacked from behind, trying to catch Hyrkan by surprise. Hyrkan turned around deftly and, with a smile of confidence, asked the monster, "Didn't you forget anything?" Hinting at a prepared maneuver, a skeleton appeared behind the monster, ready for its next joint attack, its eyes glowing with determination and precision. Together, they charged at the monster, Hyrkan and the skeleton's blows combining into a powerful chain of deadly energy, dealing him even more damage than ever before. Hyrkan suggested to the skeleton to perform an attack that they had been constantly practicing, and which could now be deadly to the enemy. The monster didn't understand what was happening, his mind confused between the sudden coordination between Hyrkan and the skeleton. As he tried to understand what had happened, the blows from the two allies sounded like thunder, each piercing and precise. As a result of this combined blow, the monster suffered fatal damage, and its huge body fell to the ground, forced to submit to Hyrkan's skill and the skeleton's precision. The monster began to fall apart, its huge body cracking, bones breaking, and black energy flying through the air, creating the effect of a terrible catastrophe. Immediately after that, a message appeared on the screen stating that the hunt for the infected werewolf was over, and the slot they were using began to slowly deactivate, leaving behind remnants of dark energy. Along with this, they received a golden reward, bright, shining like a ray of sunshine in a dark dungeon. The message of the wealth received emphasized their victory. This was the reward for the cave of Mount Beima, where they destroyed all the monsters and cleared the area, which had previously frightened newcomers. The skeleton also received a reward. For his outstanding participation in the battle with the monster, he was promoted in rank and received additional resources for further training. They made a huge amount of money, and along with it, they received the skull of an infected werewolf and its skin, which could be used to create unique armor or weapons. To top it all off, they also received the Infected Tracker Necklace, which significantly enhanced the wearer's stats and added new bonuses to strength and endurance. It was a unique story reward. Even if they traded items, its level would exceed the standard unique items, making it a true rarity. Hyrkan couldn't believe that this particular reward was the Infected Tracker he had long dreamed of receiving, as its rarity made it a true legend of the game. Along with this, 3 new titles were registered: Promising Newcomer, Hero Candidate, and Infected Pathfinder, which were immediately added to his profile. The title Infected Tracker became the introduction to the first chapter of the main quest, which was of decisive importance for the entire storyline. The main quest was the main storyline that shaped the entire game world, and its rewards were always exclusive and valuable. Every player dreamed of participating in this content, as it was considered the flagship and most important in the game. In his past life, Hyun barely made it to the 4th chapter, but now he had already unlocked the first, which gave him a unique chance. He realized that this wasn't just luck, it was a real jackpot, and his persistence paid off. Evening came, and Hyun, tired but satisfied, sat down in front of the computer and turned on the game news, hoping to learn about current events in the world of players. It was reported that the Hydra Guild had officially entered the final chapter of the Infected Count scenario, and their goal was to complete it within 3 months. Hyun paused the video and thought, understanding the scale of what was happening. The finale of this scenario was approaching. At that very moment, he felt disappointed, because someone had already beaten him to the punch and entered the final chapter of the script. If he tries to participate now, he risks getting nothing. Even the effort spent on cleaning the cave will not bring him the final reward. Hyun's heart sank a little, but he understood. To overtake the others, he would have to put in even more effort, train his skeleton, gain levels, and prepare for the main challenge. After all, the game had just begun, and the real test was yet to come. After the fight, Hyun thought long and hard about whether to abandon this round and focus on the next chapter, weighing all the possible risks and rewards. An interesting thought occurred to him. Suddenly, this wasn't just a random quest, but a real opportunity that couldn't be missed. He began to realize that this could be a great opportunity for him, a once-in-a-lifetime chance. After all, right now, the whole world is following the events with the Infected Count, and this is the first main quest in the game, which is on the verge of completion, and it could go down in the history of the game. Hyun realized that now he could release a video related to his adventures in the Infected Dungeon, and it would attract the attention of players and fans. He was sure that such a video would gain a huge amount of views, make him incredibly popular, and help him quickly repay the loan he still had. Then he realized that it was a good thing that all his gameplay was being recorded. He would be able to edit the video, add effects, and upload it to YouTube so that it would become a real hit. Editing is key, and Hyun knew that entrusting this process to anyone else would be risky, as it was important to convey all of his emotions and victories. Then he remembered a man who in a past life was called the God of Editing, and decided to contact him for professional video editing. He wrote a message to the legendary Romani, asking her to edit his video, hoping that her skills would help make the video truly incredible. This was the legendary Romani herself, a famous freelancer whose editing always impressed and inspired others. Romani looked through the message and saw a request to edit a video from the Hyrkan dungeon, where the action took place on level 15. At first, she thought it was just a rich newbie trying to show off on social media, but something about the video captivated her. She couldn't take her eyes off it and jumped from her seat in surprise, because it was the first time she had seen such a video. The video literally amazed her. She began to tremble with delight, because she finally found her muse, an energetic, talented player who single-handedly defeated the infected monster. It is known that Romani was a freelancer and often sought inspiration for her work, and now she finally felt it. That same evening, she edited the video and sent it out. It instantly spread around the world, gaining popularity among players and fans. It even reached a famous lady who is known for her influence and desire to gather talented players for her own projects. She shouted to one of her servants that a video related to the Infected Count had just appeared, and that it was very interesting. This video showed a level 15 solo character defeating an infected werewolf, a feat that impressed even the strongest players. One of the servants said that they had already checked the video, and the level of this monster was not very high, so formally, it was not worth taking into account. But the lady just smiled. For her, what mattered was the player's talent and strategy, not the level of the enemy. She said she wanted this player for herself. His abilities and fighting style were invaluable to her plans, and in a moment, she ordered the servants, "Bring him to me," definitively identifying Hyun as a special player worth fighting for. This was the famous Mrs. Cho Sol-yeon, the #1 businesswoman in the world, the chief receptionist of Thunder Group Corporation, also known as the Thunder Queen Grey. Her authority was unquestionable, and her influence extended throughout the game world and reality. The next morning, Hyun decided to check the views of his video, hoping for the first signs of popularity. He was stunned. The video he had uploaded only yesterday already had 6,000 views, a number that in a past life he would have only received after a few months of hard work. This result made him feel true satisfaction and confidence in his actions. At that moment, Romani was the first to get in touch. her message appeared on the screen. Hyun was surprised for her popularity. She always seemed mysterious and claimed not to seek much attention, but now her interest in him was obvious. She asked when Hyun was planning to release the next video, her voice sounding interested and enthusiastic. Hyun thought about it because he didn't know what to make the next video about yet. He was unlikely to be able to find a monster on the level of an infected werewolf so quickly. He understood that it would be best to create videos after reaching level 50. Then the content would have maximum impact and captivate viewers. But Hyun was not one to give up easily. He immediately jumped into the game, ready to strike while the iron was hot. He decided to find a monster that would surprise everyone and make the video unforgettable. Meanwhile, his video had already reached Matador, who was carefully watching Hyrkan's fight from the Ha-Ho mask. Although the Matador didn't miss a move, he was incredibly impressed by Hyun's skill. He looked more closely, trying to figure out where he had seen this player before. The face seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember. He was approached by an impressive woman named Yale, who represented the Red Bulls Corporation and had considerable influence in the gaming world. The Matador said to her, "There's this guy Hyrkan, who's trendy right now, but seeing him so often would be strange not to recognize him." He reasoned that the game was so realistic that newcomers often froze in place with emotion. But Hyun showed no signs of fear or uncertainty. The Matador was very surprised by how he trained his summoned skeleton, a completely different level of skill than that of ordinary necromancers. He wondered what a direct duel with Hyun would be like, because he probably doesn't accept challenges from random players. But Yale abruptly stopped the Matador, reminding him that now was not the time for unnecessary chatter. The broadcast would start in 5 minutes, and he needed to go inside. The Matador appreciated her concern, but remained confident that she would still find a way to control the situation. Yale firmly stated, "If you truly value this, don't be offended or distracted on the stream today." After all, over 200,000 viewers had already bought tickets for his live broadcast, and his every action was under the sights of the entire audience. They held their breath, seized by the anticipation of an incredible spectacle, impatiently awaiting a grand performance and a fierce battle that, as they hoped, would forever remain in their memory. The participants eagerly awaited the appearance of the outstanding, almost legendary leader of the Red Bus team, who in their eyes was a symbol of strength, inspiration, and invincible confidence. In the Mazadora Sheva game, special attention was focused on the best player, who, despite his exceptional skill, was currently only ranked 9th in the overall ranking. His performances were a real spectacle, and many believed that he had the potential to break through. Meanwhile, news came. The majestic and ominous gate of the dungeon was about to open. A countdown of time echoed across the space, cold, inexorable, such that it squeezed the hearts of the warriors. With each second, with each new number echoing in the silence, the tension in the air grew. It seemed that even the air around them became thicker and heavier, as if the sky itself was waiting for an inevitable clash, and only the Matador remained surprisingly calm. His gaze was cold and confident, and his posture was firm, as if there was not a drop of doubt in him. He was fully prepared for the coming battle, determined to show everyone his skills and prove that his strength was unmatched. At the same time, Hyun arrived at Figure Castle, the main citadel of the Raiders Association, but what he saw there, frankly, disappointed him. After carefully examining the task lists, he realized that there simply wasn't a single worthy quest that would allow him to level up. Hyun, of course, assumed that the situation might not turn out too well, but he did not expect such disappointment. After all, there was literally no valuable task. At that moment, he had a thought that perhaps it was time to postpone creating video content for a while and take his time with new recordings. Suddenly, a local merchant recognized him. He immediately realized that he was the man who had managed to clear out Beima's cave. Hyun also, after a quick glance, remembered this salesman without hesitation. The man introduced himself. His name was Kotan. He politely asked Hyun to give him some time to talk. They went into one of the castle's offices, where Kotan reported that he had heard the story of the events in Beima's cave. He wondered if Hyun really had encountered a mutated monster there. Hyun confirmed. He really saw a terrifying werewolf with strange, almost inhuman eyes. After these words, Kotan was convinced that his guesses were correct and looked closely at Hyun. He explained that the monster he encountered was most likely influenced by the mysterious power of the distorted. Who exactly was the bearer of this power remained unknown, but one thing was clear. Infected creatures became extremely dangerous and caused enormous damage. After that, Kotan grabbed Hyun by the hand and told him that the Raiders Association had announced a large reward for this person connected to the power of the distorted. Hyun was willing to do anything to catch this mysterious enemy, but having only heard part of the task and not even interested in the reward, he only sighed, but decided to give the task a chance. Khotan noted that if successful in this task, Hyun would have the opportunity to meet a man named Ahimbri, who resides in the eastern castle of Bansu. Ahimbri could teach him a multitude of unique fighting techniques and issue a letter of recommendation. And this letter was of immense value, because it was thanks to it that one could obtain the Book of Learning, a priceless artifact for a warrior. After talking with Khotan, Hyun left the room and set off on a new mission. As soon as he closed the door behind him, he couldn't hold back his emotions. He screamed loudly with joy and started laughing. After all, right now, he received a quest that opened the way for him to become a disciple of the great Ahimbra himself. And this alchemist was no ordinary wizard. He was one of only 7 disciples of the legendary archmage Bogan, the one every magic class player dreamed of meeting. Because it was through Ahimbri that one could obtain rare books of learning, artifacts worth their weight in gold. In other words, he was an extremely important NPC, and the fact that his title Eastern Star overlapped with the main quest, which came from the Count, was the reason why Hyun got this unique opportunity in the first place. If he manages to pass the test, he will no longer have to worry about video content. After all, the rewards for the quest were worth any effort. But before he went any further, he remembered that there was one more thing he needed to do. So Hyun went deep into the dense forest, away from prying eyes. After making sure that there was no one around and that he was alone in the territory controlled by his gaze, he began to act. Hyun summoned one of the skeleton fragments. Although he never had time to sort out the spoils from the last battle, the need to improve his servant was more important. First, he took out the werewolf skull, which he still hadn't sold. A system window appeared before his eyes, asking, "Do you really want to use the werewolf skull to enhance the skeleton warrior?" Agreeing, he saw the skeleton take on the features of a werewolf, and its strength increased by 2 points. After that, Hyun decided to equip the skeleton with a tracker amulet. When he used this item, the creature's characteristics doubled, and its strength increased significantly. The preparation was completed. Taehyun pulled out 2 more skeleton fragments, which greatly surprised his warrior. He threw these fragments behind the main skeleton. They began to gradually form into 2 new, full-fledged bone figures. The skeleton warrior was shocked by this turn of events. He didn't understand what was happening and felt almost helpless. But Hyun calmly said that from now on, they would act together, and therefore, they must learn to live and fight side by side. Although Hyun was upset by his skeleton's disobedience, he did not linger long. The road lay ahead. Together with his skeletal servants, he set off into the depths of the forest, where danger lurked at every turn. Soon, they came across one of the many high-ranking monsters, a huge, level 25th brown bear. Its eyes glowed with rage, and its body radiated ferocity and strength. With a roar that shook the trees, the beast rushed at Hyun, attacking with all its strength, as if it were trying to tear him to pieces. However, Hyun moved with incredible agility. Each of the bear's paws only hit the air because he dodged the blows in time. Blow after blow rained down on him, but Hyun did not even think of retreating. His face expressed only cold determination. He didn't even try to defend himself, because he was preparing for a single, decisive attack. Hyun patiently waited for the moment when the beast would finally get angry. And then he activated his hidden technique. From the sky, as if from a dark abyss, his skeletons appeared and rushed at the bear from above. But the monster turned out to be too clever. It grabbed one of the skeletons by the skull and threw it sideways with all his might, breaking the trees standing nearby. Hyun was furious. It was a predictable attack, doomed to failure, because it was necessary to enter from the blind spot, not from the front. But the very next moment, another skeleton burst into the battle. As his master had ordered, he tried to attack from the blind spot, also from above, hoping to catch the beast by surprise. But the bear reacted easily this time too. It grabbed the attacker and threw him away into the bushes. With each of their failed attacks, Hyun's anger grew. He shouted at them not to jump from above, but to act from the blind side. But the skeletons kept repeating the same mistakes. The moment has come for the last, 3rd skeleton. He seemed to radiate a confidence that even his host felt a strange sense of relief. Hyun saw in him a reflection of himself. The same firm gaze, the same determination. Does at least one of you finally understand my words? He thought, watching his warrior. Deep down, he was sure. This time, everything would work out. But his hopes were instantly dashed. The bear repelled the attack of the 3rd skeleton with the same ease, throwing it back to the previous 2. Hyun sighed in disappointment. Even the one he had the highest hopes for had failed. The forest shuddered at his shout. "You can't even carry out a simple attack! You idiots!" When the battle was over, he began to reprimand the skeletons like naughty children. His despair bordered on anger. "Do you have any brains at all?" he exclaimed. "Not even a drop of thought?" He began to explain in detail. When they attack, the monster always turns in the direction from which the attack comes. They need to act more cunningly, not stupidly rush forward. That's why you need to come in from the blind spot, he explained, suppressing his anger. If you attack a monster from the side where it's looking, you immediately become easy prey. But the skeletons seemed to understand almost nothing. Their empty eye sockets glowed thoughtlessly, and this indifference infuriated Hyun even more. On the one hand, he was happy. His skill rank had increased, and now he could summon 3 skeletons at once. But on the other hand, the problem was obvious. They absolutely did not know how to work together. Each of them repeated the same mistakes he had seen before, attacking at the same time, imitating the first, like mindless copies. They didn't know how to work as a team because they never learned how to. Worse, this haphazard coordination meant they were spending 3 times as much mana as they should have, which only made the situation more difficult. Hyun sighed heavily. Although I reached level 20, as I wanted to, but it looks like I'll have to forget about video content for a while. After that, he ordered the skeletons to rise, and they moved on, training as they went, until they reached Bansu Castle. Deep down, he felt disappointed. He had dreamed that one day he would be able to rely on his skeletons in battle and sit back in the rear, as befits a true necromancer. But the reality was different. He definitely would not be able to avoid the role of a warrior on the front lines. Finally, they headed together to Bansu, the majestic castle of the raiders. It was one of the most grandiose fortresses. Tall towers rose into the sky, and massive walls shone with power and majesty. It was at this time that a gathering of raiders was held in the castle. One of the most famous and strongest players came out of the main gate. The crowd instantly came to life. Everyone around them was glowing with joy at the sight of him. People rushed to him, showering him with questions. "What quest did you get this time? Tell me, share your secrets!" And it was at this moment that Hyun entered the room. His gaze swept over the crowd, and he immediately realized that these people were like hyenas greedily pouncing on prey. People like them were found everywhere. They didn't even think about self-development, but only sought to profit at the expense of others. This deeply disappointed Hyun. He felt a cold disgust for the society around him, which, instead of growing, only drained the strength of those who actually worked. One of the players approached Hyun and began to intrusively offer him cooperation, hinting that if Hyun had a good quest, they could work together. But the response was sharp and cold. Hyun immediately pushed him away and made it clear that he should stay away from him. Deep down, he knew the reason for his reaction. He couldn't let others know his true path, or let anyone know that he was on Ahimbra's errand. It was his secret, and he had to keep it. He then approached the guard at the stairs and handed him the registered letter he had received earlier from Khoten. After verifying the authenticity of the document, the guard allowed Hyun to go up to the 2nd floor. At that moment, the other players standing behind went crazy. They started shouting, demanding to be let through because they wanted to go there with Hyun at all costs. They were uncontrollably curious about what kind of award he would receive and what secrets this meeting might hold. Hyun himself, deep down, hoped that he would receive not just a reward, but a hidden quest of a much higher level. He saw in this event an opportunity to establish a long-term relationship with the great alchemist, and therefore crossed the threshold of the office with particular excitement. Looking around, he froze in surprise. He was struck by the incredible number of books scattered everywhere in chaotic disorder. It looked like a real library of a genius who was a prisoner of creative chaos. From the depths of this chaos came a harsh voice, full of discontent, asking who dared to enter here. It was Ahimbri, the great alchemist himself. His expression was unfriendly, for he was certain that he had no appointment scheduled for that day. Hyun politely introduced himself and explained that he had come on Khotan's recommendation. Ahimbri looked at him carefully and noted that although Hyun looked like an inexperienced apprentice of a black magician, his level of training was quite adequate for the tasks at hand. After that, the room was filled with a sense of magic. The space around it thickened, and a glow appeared in the air. At this point, Hyun received his rewards, the bone armor training book and the madness helmet. Hyun's surprise knew no bounds. He did not even expect to receive 2 rare books at once, which were of enormous value. Thus ended the quest to study in Ahimbra. The great alchemist only reminded him to take care of himself, but inside, Hyun was angry. It seemed to him that everything had ended too quickly. He couldn't understand why there wasn't a sequel, because he had put in so much effort and wasn't just trying to gain a few skills. There was only one thing on his mind. He was ready to do anything to unlock the next secret quest. And, unexpectedly for Hyun himself, Ahimbri came closer and put his hand on his shoulder. He looked closely into his eyes, and Hyun felt that he was trying to understand his true intentions. checking if he was really ready to go to any lengths. After that, the alchemist briefly thanked him in advance, as if hinting that the real test was still ahead. After a short pause, Ahimbri issued the next quest without any explanation. The gist of it was that Hyun had to bring an egg from some dangerous nest. The alchemist promised no reward and did not even respond to his surprised expectations. Meanwhile, a new player has solemnly entered the city, a giant warrior completely encased in massive and extremely expensive armor. His gait was majestic, and every detail of his equipment was striking in its elegance and strength, causing passers-by to stop and stare at him in amazement. But this guest had not come here to display wealth or power. He had only one real purpose. All his attention was focused on a single task, and he was determined to complete it. His goal was to meet the one called the Mask of Haho. At this time, Hyun himself left the Ahimber premises, feeling deeply irritated. He felt like he had been tricked and given a task that had nothing to do with the important main plot. He expected a major breakthrough, a task of immense importance. But instead, he was ordered to find and bring back a simple egg. What was even more unfortunate was that he was not promised any reward even for this dangerous task. Hyun understood perfectly well that he would still be forced to do it because he could not refuse. But suddenly, his path was blocked by an angry player who tried to ask for details about a new quest. Others began to cling to him, grabbing his arms and shoulders because they realized that he had been given a unique task. Only now did Hyun remember that he had completely forgotten about these obsessive companions, and he no longer understood how to get rid of their intrusiveness. A disturbing thought appeared in his head: how to proceed without getting into a big and unnecessary mess. And at that very moment, all the pursuers were thrown in different directions by one powerful wave of force. It turned out that the same man in heavy armor had intervened. He coldly and calmly turned to Hyun, asking if he would find a moment for it. It seemed that this mysterious warrior had an important conversation that he wished to have only in a quiet and secluded place. Hyun was confused and had no idea who this person was or what he was asking of him. A strong desire arose in his heart to push the stranger away and get rid of this obsession, but the armored giant was extremely persistent. He confidently uttered words that stunned Hyun. He called him the Mask of Haho. Leaving him no choice, the stranger led him into a dark alley in the city. Only there did he apologize for disturbing him too rudely, explaining his action. He deliberately chose this secluded spot because he believed that in a crowded place, they would never be able to talk frankly. After all, when there's a crowd around, any conversation becomes too difficult and dangerous. Judging by his appearance and equipment, Hyung knew that he was clearly a high-level ranker. However, he couldn't figure out how this person knew him, as he himself didn't remember ever meeting this mysterious warrior. Hyun was extremely curious about who this warrior in heavy armor was, and why he was so eager to meet him. His fingers involuntarily clenched into fists, hidden in the pockets of his cloak. He understood that the situation was extremely dangerous, and the best option right now was to pretend that he knew nothing. He kept repeating to himself that he had to play the role of an ignorant newcomer who had just happened to be here and didn't understand the meaning of the words about some Haho mask. At the same time, he was worried about something else: why he had to explain himself to a stranger and follow him into the dark corners of the city. This situation irritated him and forced him to be on the alert. He began to act like a complete fool, pretending that he had nothing to do with the things that were being discussed. Deep down, he wondered how this warrior would react to such acting, and whether he would be able to deceive his watchful gaze. But the knight was silent. His eyes studied Hyun coldly and intently, as if he were trying to peer straight into his soul. And only after a long pause did the stranger suddenly extend his hand. Instead of threatening or reprimanding, he calmly apologized for being too persistent. It was so unexpected that Hyun couldn't help but sigh in relief. His impromptu performance had really worked. He took the outstretched hand, feeling a brief but firm handshake. After that, the knight let him go and turned around without any explanation, leaving Hyun alone in the middle of the dark alley. Only his gaze followed the necromancer for a while, as if he were trying to remember his every move. And at that moment, a mysterious woman appeared from the portal. She glanced at Hyun, but there was no certainty in her eyes. It seemed that she thought that this could not be the one they were looking for. The knight remained steadfast in his opinion. He was faced with a newcomer, and it was obvious. He knew perfectly well that an experienced player would never show the Warwatch artifact to anyone. Such behavior could only betray an inexperienced beginner. Therefore, both the knight and the woman began to doubt whether it was worth relying on quests from Ahimbra at all, because their internal calculation showed that the main storyline was almost approaching the next important stage. The task with the egg that Hyun received could turn out to be much more important than it seemed at first glance. But they didn't want to take any chances just like that. Eventually, they decided to leave and went their separate ways. leaving the alley empty. However, they did not even suspect that they were being closely watched. Hyun himself was watching from one of the upper windows of the house. His gaze was cold and cautious. He saw the two of them talking, and he was already starting to form his own guesses. It was obvious that they were part of some kind of organization that acted in a coordinated manner and pursued its own goals. If they were just ordinary hunters or independent adventurers, they would have offered him a simple deal long ago, or at least tried to test him in a more obvious way. Their actions clearly indicated ulterior motives. This piqued Hyun's genuine interest. He wanted to know who they really were and why they were paying such close attention to him. However, he quickly pushed aside the unnecessary thoughts. There was no time for such entertainment. He needed to focus on training and preparation because the forest and new challenges awaited him ahead. While the skeletons practiced their strikes and moved in chaotic but gradually more coordinated training, Hyun was lost in his own thoughts. He couldn't help but feel that the quest he had received with the egg was far from an ordinary task. He sensed something hidden in it, something more important than it might seem at first glance. The thought kept coming to mind. Those strange people who showed interest in him must have seen his video on the internet. Hyun knew perfectly well that moving forward with the story meant repeatedly encountering those who sought to exploit or hinder him. It seemed that his life was constantly being complicated by some crazy fanatics, and only Cho Sol-young was enough for him to understand how dangerous possessed people can be. Meanwhile, Sol-Leon herself was in her office. Her faithful secretary entered, bringing another report. She politely asked how the guild entrance exam went. However, Sol-jin coldly stated that all the participants turned out to be complete worthless. She didn't understand how, among such a huge number of players, there wasn't a single one who deserved even a shred of her attention. Her irritability grew even more when she asked if there was any news from the mysterious Mask Ha-ho. The secretary answered cautiously. There were rumors that he had already joined some guild, because no contact had been received from him so far. This news angered Sol-leon to the point of rage. However, she noted that this was unconfirmed information and ordered her assistant to return only with accurate facts. After that, the woman went behind the screen and began to calmly change clothes, as if preparing for the next stage of the game. She also asked if the president had spoken out about this, but only heard a denial in response. Sol-leon wasn't surprised. She herself had predicted that he would remain silent as long as she continued to make progress in the game. Nervously tapping her heel on the floor, she allowed herself a rare display of emotion. She felt bad that if she had opened up to the president earlier, telling him that she was actively gambling, she would have avoided a forced marriage. Therefore, she ordered the secretary to announce another recruitment for the guild and report the results the next morning. The secretary dared to point out that the deadline was too tight, but the lady didn't even listen to her, abruptly leaving the office, leaving a heavy atmosphere behind. At this time, Hyun received the following task. His new quest was to find a mysterious egg in a swamp of lizards. Since Ahimri was based in Bansu Castle, it was clear that the errand needed to be carried out somewhere in the immediate region. The egg could have belonged to a bird, a reptile, or perhaps a strange insect-like monster. Due to the level limitation, there wasn't much choice, so he decided to start his search in the lizard swamp. If there were no results, he would move on. Before the battle, he warned his skeletons that the local monsters might be much stronger, so they had to use all available resources. He ordered them to put on the symbols and begin the ritual. As soon as the spell was cast, one of the skeletons began to emit an unprecedentedly powerful energy. Horns even sprouted from his head, which amazed Hyun. He decided to check the result and ordered the skeleton to attack him. Even his aura changed. It became denser, darker, and more threatening. The attack happened so quickly that even Hyun didn't have time to react immediately. The force of the blow stunned him, and he realized that he had received a truly dangerous reinforcement. Focusing, he struck the skeleton's skull sharply. The creature's head flew high into the sky, separated from its body. All that remained on the ground was a headless body, still swaying, not falling immediately. He himself was to blame because he allowed himself to be attacked, but he did not expect his subordinate to actually obey the order literally. Hyun began to analyze, suspecting that he had witnessed a system bug. He didn't even want to hear the idea that his new skill might be corrupted or petrified. But at that very moment, a level 30 lizard man jumped out at him. Hyun felt confident in his own abilities and decided that now was the time to test his charges in real combat. He put a helmet of madness on one of the skeletons, which increased strength by 12 units. He also used armor that enhanced the protective properties of summoned creatures and provided an additional level of endurance. The reinforced skeletons moved forward, obeying his command. The monster froze for a moment, as if shocked by the very sight of this lifeless army. Hyun did not hesitate and gave the command to attack. The skeletons, like a well-coordinated unit, simultaneously rushed at the enemy. They used the knowledge gained during training to bypass the enemy's blind spots. The attacks came one after another without pause, like a hail of blows. In a short time, the skeleton warriors destroyed 3 lizard men at once, bringing their master generous experience points. Hyun was extremely happy when he noticed that his strength had increased. This increase not only gave him confidence, but also filled his heart with a feeling of joy and pride in his own achievements, as if he had crossed another important milestone in his development. After that, he emphasized that they would have an important task ahead of them throughout the week. They had to decide on their role, because in reality, it was about becoming real monster hunters, capable of withstanding any challenges. After that, they moved forward, not looking back and thinking only about the task ahead of them. But none of them even suspected that they had been watched from behind for some time. That observer turned out to be a female dancer of astonishing beauty, known as Ilya. She was so in love with her own beauty that she herself considered it unquestionable, and to everyone around her, her attractiveness was obvious and undeniable. Despite this, Ilya rarely showed off, but there was no point in it. Even without any effort, everything she did always aroused admiration and love from those around. Her life was surprisingly successful. Every time danger arose, loyal subjects rushed to her aid, saving her from the slightest trouble. But that day, luck turned away from her. Deep in her own thoughts, the girl carelessly caught on a stone, lost her balance, and began to fall. The next moment, she found herself in a puddle of dirty mud. Angry and outraged, she felt disgusted by this place, which already caused her only revulsion. The reason she appeared here was that one of her slaves assured her that this was where she could easily level up and gain immense power. But the plan collapsed because this slave died, and she was left alone, effectively trapped. Dangerous, extremely strong monsters lurked around, and the woman was afraid to take a single step, realizing that she desperately needed at least one brave boy who could protect her. It was at this moment that Hyun appeared nearby, who was training here, honing his skills with the skeletons. Elijah, seeing him, took it as a chance, even as an opportunity to find a new victim who could serve her. She suddenly screamed, trying to get his attention. She began to throw herself in different directions, feigning helplessness and pleading for help. To finally move the boy, she tried to charm him with her beauty, adding that she could not go any further because she had allegedly badly injured her legs. Ilya was sure. One look at her, suffering, was enough for Hyun's heart to be filled with pity and compassion. She believed that he would not be able to resist her and would definitely help her. But instead, the guy simply turned around and calmly walked away. Her indignation knew no bounds. She could not understand how such a beauty could be left to her own devices. After all, in her opinion, such an exceptional woman should receive assistance by default and not remain ignored. Anger filled her, her teeth clenched in resentment. Ilya refused to believe that there was a person who dared to ignore her. Meanwhile, Hyun and his skeleton calmly continued their training. However, ignoring Ilya turned out to be more difficult than he thought, because she stubbornly followed him literally on his heels. Her intrusive presence increasingly irritated the boy. Hyun continued to stubbornly ignore the girl, not because he didn't hear her words or notice her presence, but because of his own unwillingness to waste precious time on idle chatter. He had other goals and understood that every minute of training was valuable, but Ilya did not lag behind. She followed him step by step, almost stepping on his heels, not allowing him even a moment to feel calm or concentrate. Her stubbornness seemed endless. A thought flashed through Hyun's mind. He seemed to have found himself not in the harsh world of the game, where danger and the struggle for life reigned, but in some strange circus. He longed for everyone around him to play seriously, without unnecessary spectacles and senseless scenes. Finally, to put an end to this strange situation and stop the endless chase, he decided to speak up and asked in a cold tone what exactly she wanted from him. Ilya replied that she had supposedly lost her sword while hunting, wandering through the swamp. With feigned tenderness, she asked him to help her find the weapon without which she could not continue her journey. Hyun, wanting only one thing, for her to stop following him, agreed. He didn't care. The main thing was to fulfill the request, return the lost sword, and finally get rid of the obsessive company. Ilya, in her self-confidence, decided that the boy had succumbed to the charms of her beauty and took his consent as proof of her attractiveness. However, the real reasons for his actions were completely different. A few minutes passed, and Hyun did indeed find the lost blade. Without undue emotion, he held the sword in his hands, preparing to return it to its owner. In his mind, he clearly decided, he should keep his word, surrender his weapons, and immediately go his own way to avoid further problems. Not wanting to even touch this woman, he ordered one of his skeletons to take the sword and take it to Elijah. The obedient puppets, without asking any questions, obediently set off for the swampy area to carry out the order and bring the blade back. Ilya, having received her weapon, hypocritically thanked the boy, but in her heart, she was already making other plans. Her hand was gripping the hilt, and she was secretly preparing for an attack. In her mind, necromancers were powerless without their creatures, and that was what gave her confidence. All she had to do was destroy the puppets, and he would be defenseless. A desire for revenge boiled inside her. She dreamed of punishing the boy for the humiliating disregard she had endured all this time. A murderous desire was born in her heart. She wanted to wipe him off the face of the earth, just because he dared not notice her and be indifferent to such a beauty. But at that moment, Hyung raised his head, a cold expression on his face. The air around him seemed to tremble as he said with icy calm that she was too slow. Suddenly, he grabbed her by the collar with a force she had not expected. Ilya didn't even have time to realize what was happening. It all happened so abruptly. The next moment, his hand clenched even tighter, and with all his strength, he threw her away, like an unnecessary doll, wanting to get rid of her once and for all. The trajectory of the throw turned out to be unsuccessful for the girl, as she flew straight into a muddy swamp, where she immediately got dirty from head to toe. She screamed at the entire forest, hurling insults and calling him vile and mean, her voice harsh and full of hatred. She exclaimed arrogantly, with despair and anger, that Hyun was in vain thinking that she would leave everything so simple, because all he had to do was shout, and her numerous supporters would tear him to pieces in an instant. Instead, the boy just laughed. His laugh was loud, almost mocking, and he calmly noticed that something interesting was already happening behind her. Looking back, Ilya froze, gripped by panic and horror. Right in front of her stood 3 giant lizards with sharp teeth and fiercely shining eyes. Their bodies radiated menace, their every movement making even the bravest tremble. Hyun said with a cold smile that if she really wanted to deceive him, she should have tried much harder. He made it clear that he saw through people like her and didn't believe in the cheap tricks that seemed to work for her. But as he said this, he looked down for a moment, and there was a note of weariness in his voice. He was tired of constantly being confronted with deception, trickery, and endless attempts to divorce him. Hyun realized that all this time spent on Ilya was useless and completely pointless. He was left with only a feeling of wasted time and useless trouble. So he ordered his skeletons to move on, paying no more attention to the girl or anything that could distract them from their true goal. But observing Ilya's behavior, the skeletons also seemed to have learned something new. They seemed to understand how the woman's seduction and flattering gestures worked, even though it was obvious that they were just cheap tricks, not worth paying attention to. But Hyun was well aware that even if his skeletons took on such dubious skills, it would be of no use. After all, he could destroy them at any moment and create new ones, without any unnecessary habits. After a while, he received a system message. The girl who had been stalking him so much had been killed. Hyun even wondered for a moment if he would get experience points for her death, even though he didn't consider her a worthy opponent. Remembering her words about fans, he only chuckled skeptically. It was completely incomprehensible to him how someone like Ilya could have admirers. It was beyond his understanding that anyone would willingly give their heart to such a treacherous and narcissistic girl. He couldn't understand what made someone fall for such people so easily. It made no sense to him, because there was nothing real behind the outward beauty. Meanwhile, Hyun and his skeletons continued to make their way through the swamp. Their footsteps sounded heavy, the mud crunched underfoot, and the atmosphere around them grew increasingly gloomy. That swamp road wasn't just dangerous because of monsters. There were also other players lurking in these places in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to attack. It was among them that Hyun encountered Ilya's fans, those who sincerely wanted to avenge her death, without even wondering if there was any point in doing so. Upon seeing them, Hyun asked each of these people the same question, trying to understand their motivation. He didn't understand why they would go so far for a girl who didn't bring them any benefit, because there was no reward or real benefit in their actions. He was even more surprised because he was sure that even if one of them risked his life, Ilya would still never agree to meet or date anyone. So why such a sacrifice? One of the fans suddenly started laughing loudly, and this laughter sounded so strange and unexpected that even Hyun was surprised and wary for a moment. In response, this fan passionately declared that he sincerely and devotedly loved Ilya, as if she were the meaning of his life. But Hyun didn't even want to listen to any more nonsense. He dealt with that player instantly, without wasting any words or emotions. In his eyes, such behavior seemed senseless and ridiculous. almost comical in its hopelessness. After all, for him, Elijah had no value at all. She was just an empty shell, worthless. Moreover, she also tried to deceive him, and so clumsily and ineptly that it only hastened her end and became the cause of her own death. He didn't kill her directly, but simply threw her into the swamp, and that was enough, because nature itself did its job, completely depriving her of any chance of survival. But as it turned out, her dying cry had already spread. She, cornered, had still found a way to influence those around her, and now the consequences were becoming tangible. She began to pretend to be a victim, complaining to everyone that she was supposedly very sad and in pain. In her stories, she insisted that she had only asked for help, and the insidious necromancer had attacked her for no reason. These fabrications of hers incited the rage of her fans, made them uncontrollable, and they began to perceive Hyun as enemy number one. It was because of her stories that this group of fanatics chased him every day like madmen, giving him no peace. And Hyun was already irritated. He couldn't find the mysterious egg he had been looking for so long, and now he had to constantly fight off crowds of psychos ready to kill him for the sake of someone else's illusory honor. At some point, he was even ready to find Ilya again, kill him again, and put an end to it. But he knew full well that this would only create even more problems and enemies for him. But after destroying several of her fans, he received a good reward: gold coins, sturdy boots, and barbarian armor. It was a nice compensation for the nerves spent on this whole pointless story. Hyun was actually waiting for more than just random coins or armor. He was hoping to get a special trophy, the legendary Necklace of Promises. It was an extremely rare item, found once in 1,000 battles and worth over 500,000 won. For him, this could be a real turning point. But even without the artifact, he and his skeletons were happy with the loot, gold, equipment, and experience. It was a good reward that outweighed all the troubles with Elijah's fanatics. But the peace did not last long. Soon other players appeared on his path again. They were convinced that they were facing an enemy of Elijah, the one who, in their opinion, had destroyed their goddess in cold blood. And instead of apologizing, Hyun only mockingly greeted him and openly declared that it was he who killed their Elijah. He didn't even realize right away how large a crowd had gathered this time, because they emerged from the thickets one after another until a whole crowd had formed around them. In such a situation, he had no choice but to turn around and run, because fighting against such numbers was tantamount to suicide. And the fans, full of anger and determination, raced after him without stopping, with the sole goal of catching him and brutally killing him. And again, Hyun found himself thinking that he couldn't understand. How could someone like Ilya have so many fans? He saw nothing in her except selfishness and deceit. Together with his faithful skeletons, he continued to flee, making his way through the swampy thicket. The mud clung to their feet, but speed remained their only chance of survival. Realizing that he could not break away, Hyun decided to direct his servants against his pursuers in order to buy at least a little time. He gave a sharp order: "Attack the enemies! Destroy anyone who dares to come close!" And the skeletons, without any hesitation, rushed forward. But the players quickly realized that they were dealing with a necromancer capable of summoning more and more puppets. So they made a decision: to focus their power on destroying the skeletons one by one to deprive him of his protection. Their intentions were serious. They wanted not only to win, but to kill everything that belonged to Hyun, and then get to him himself. Strong blows rang out one after the other, and within seconds, the entire front line of his skeletons was on the ground, shattered to bone. One of his servants died in an instant, and it was then that Hyun felt the cold breath of danger. Now the threat was too close, and he understood that he himself was on the verge of death. His level was still not high enough, so the only strategy was to run forward. And gritting his teeth, he promised himself one day he would return here and exterminate them all, without exception, when he became strong enough. After a while, he finally managed to break away from the angry crowd of fans, although his heart was beating fast and his legs were almost giving out from fatigue. But even after breaking away, he knew that this was no real escape. The difference in level was still too great, and he would still be pursued. There was only the path forward. He ran so fast that at one point, he didn't even realize where he was running to. His steps led him into an unfamiliar area that was dramatically different from anything he had seen before. This city was unlike any other. It looked mysterious, almost unreal, as if created from a different material than ordinary settlements. He tried to remember if he had seen anything like it before, but it was in vain. Even days of searching his memory had yielded no answers. And then he thought, maybe this is where the thing he had been looking for so long was hidden. He couldn't even believe it, but his heart told him that he was finally approaching a place that could be the key to his future story. But the peace did not last long. Ilya's fans did not give up trying to find him. They roamed these lands, looking for his traces in order to deal a painful blow, and very soon they encountered a new obstacle. Skeletons sent by Hyun appeared before them. However, this time his servants behaved differently. They began to move in a strange rhythm, as if dancing, distracting their enemies with their bizarre disco. Seeing this strange scene, fans were stunned. They did not expect to see something so absurd in the midst of a chase. For them, it was a triple humiliation. Not only had Hyun wounded their Lady Ilya, he had also mocked them, making a mockery of them. One of the fans couldn't bear the insult. His heart was burning with anger, and he shouted that he would never forgive this, vowing to destroy Hyun at any cost. He rushed forward, trying to attack the skeletons, but suddenly a huge monster emerged from the ground right in front of him, blocking his path. The player who had attacked first was instantly stunned and terrified, having never seen such a huge monster in his life. His eyes widened, his heart sank, and his hands trembled with fear. It turned out to be a giant reptile. Its tongue, like a sticky whip, shot out with lightning speed, grabbed the unfortunate man, and in the same instant lifted him straight to its own mouth. Other fans, witnessing this horrific spectacle, froze in place. One word rang in their heads: the end. Before them stood not just an enemy, but something almost legendary, for it was none other than a giant swamp dragon, the boss of the local lands, a level 40th creature that struck terror into even the most experienced raiders. Realizing the scale of the danger, the players scattered, each trying to save his own life, without even thinking about honor or fanatical devotion to Elijah. Hyun, watching all this, felt a cold sweat run down his back. He had no idea that he would accidentally stumble upon the nest of the location boss himself. The dragon had a huge health pool and extremely high defense. To defeat such a creature, you needed a real raid, at least 20 level 20th players. And even then, there was not much chance. And there were also rumors that a recent raid had already eliminated this monster. So, by all accounts, the boss shouldn't have reappeared so soon. However, there was one condition. If someone entered the boss's territory with a corresponding task, the monster would be reborn again. This meant only one thing. The quest Ahimbri began right here, and there were no coincidences in what happened. And then Hyun felt his blood run cold. It turns out that Ahim had deliberately sent him here so that he would face this monster and get the legendary egg from its nest. Realizing this, he became so angry that even his fists clenched on their own. He was almost torn apart by rage at whoever had dragged him into this deadly scenario. But strangely enough, he managed to turn the situation to his advantage. It was Ilya's fanatics who got to the monster first, distracting him. Their courage quickly evaporated as they realized they were facing a creature far beyond their strength. And now, all they wanted to do was escape. However, Hyun stopped them abruptly. He understood very well that if they were allowed to slip away, the dragon might turn its attention back to him, and he couldn't let that happen. Therefore, he placed his strongest skeletons at the exit, who created a real blockade and prevented the fanatics from breaking through. Then the pursuers realized the last path to salvation was blocked. They found themselves trapped with no way out. However, even in such a situation, they did not give up, and, overcome by despair, tried to break through at any cost, because their lives depended on it. But just then, the dragon caught one of them in its paws, threw it high into the air so that its silhouette momentarily overlapped the sun, like a dark shadow in the sky. And at that moment, the rest of the fans saw that the necromancer himself was not going to stay with them until the end. Hyung took advantage of the moment and started to run away. In his thoughts, he even ironically thanked the fanatics for their involuntary sacrifice, and promised himself that he would never forget their bloody contribution. While the boss was completely occupied with the slaughter, Hyun decided to act. It was time to move on to the main objective. And so, without wasting a second, he set out to search the empty nest, hoping to find the legendary egg there, for which this entire quest had been started. Therefore, without a moment's hesitation, Hyun jumped deep into the nest with incredible speed, like a shadow dissolving in the darkness. Once inside, he felt a strange sense of relief, and even mentally thanked fate, hoping that this was where he would find the egg he had dreamed of. However, when he looked up, his heart lurched with surprise. There was no egg in the nest that would be the key to completing the quest. The emptiness hurt his eyes and made him doubt his own sanity, but he knew very well that this couldn't be the case. The task wouldn't have appeared without a reason. The egg had to be somewhere nearby, and indeed, his gaze fell on a strange stone covered with an ancient seal, emitting a dim glow. Hyun leaned over and began to examine it carefully, trying to figure out what exactly he was holding in front of him. The stone seemed extremely suspicious. At first glance, it was ordinary, but it gave off a faint magical echo. It looked more like a crystallized spell than a real egg, but he had no choice. There was no other contender for the role of the egg nearby. At that moment, the silence suddenly disappeared. He heard heavy breathing behind him, as if the very earth was shaking. The dragon, sensing the intruder, was returning to the nest. There was no time left. Looking sharply over his shoulder, Hyun met the gaze of the monster itself. The dragon's eyes burned like hot embers. He barely had time to react. He jumped up and hid behind the debris of the rocks, but the distance was critically short. Another moment, and he would have become prey. Hyun understood that continuing to search for the real egg in his presence was simply pointless. It would be suicide. In such a deadly situation, he had only one way out. And that path is to grab the stone egg with the seal, even if it turns out to be a fake. It is better to take a chance with dubious prey than to be left empty-handed and with your life hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, all the fanatics who had come here with him were already lying dead. One by one, they had been torn apart by the giant dragon. Hyun approached one of the wounded fanatics. A sly smile curved his lips. An icy indifference flashed in his eyes as he greeted the one who was still alive. For him, everything that was happening was more like a game. An interesting game, but even without it, he was well aware. There is no freedom in the world without fanatics and freaks ready to sacrifice everything for the sake of a ghostly idea. Hyun calmly raised his weapon, intending to finish off the last one, as if it were just a technical task. But before his death, the fanatic managed to speak. His voice was weak, but full of despair. He admitted that he had long endured the taunts and insults from Hyun, but now the game had changed. Now, not only his life depended on this confrontation, but something much more. And, almost bleeding, he warned the necromancer one last time, never to stand in the way of their goddess again. It was the only thing he could still challenge. His words made the fanatics, who had still managed to see something, fall silent in horror. They did not know what to say, for they sensed the truth and doom behind them. Hyun just smiled. The next moment, his figure dissolved into thin air. He jumped so quickly that he disappeared from their sight. And as he disappeared, he swore to himself, if these fanatics dared to pursue him again, he would no longer hold back and destroy them all. His thoughts had already shifted to something else. He needed to figure out how to turn the situation to his own advantage. Money had always been the main incentive. So going to the guild forum, he posted information about the swamp dragon's lair he had found, a location hidden deep among the swampy lizard swamps, and immediately wondered how to most profitably sell this discovery. Returning from his dangerous journey, Hyun immediately brought the found egg to the professor, hoping that it was indeed what the quest required. Inside, he doubted. The stone with the seal didn't look like a real egg at all, but he had no other option, so he gave it away as it was. Deep down, he almost prayed that this item would turn out to be the right one, for the thought of wandering the world again in search of that cursed egg made him disgusted and tired. The very idea of spending weeks on new journeys across a dangerous map was unbearable for him. When the professor began to speak, Hyun felt his heart pounding. He didn't even listen to the meaning of the first words, but only mentally prayed to fate for a positive outcome. His body seemed to freeze, his breath caught. He was awaiting the verdict. A drop of cold sweat rolled down the necromancer's forehead because everything depended on the professor's answer. And then, finally, the moment came. The professor smiled with satisfaction and said that this was exactly the artifact he had been looking for. He praised Hyun for his brilliant work. The relief was so strong that Hyun felt a real triumph, as if a mountain had fallen from his shoulders. The professor honestly admitted that he didn't even expect the task to be completed so quickly, because he thought it would take weeks. Hyun replied that he had given all his strength to cope, and immediately asked for the next task, realizing that he could not lose momentum. But before giving a new quest, the professor asked if he understood what kind of egg, or stone, he actually brought. Researchers have long noticed similar artifacts in places where mutated monsters lived, and described them in their records. They were called pest stones, symbols of a dangerous force that spread chaos and mutations. Hearing these words, Hyun suddenly remembered those strange people who had relentlessly followed him during his search, and everything fell into place. They knew about the significance of this stone and tried to control its path. The Plague Stone turned out to be more than just a quest item. It was a key item directly related to the main storyline of the world. The enemies wanted to make sure that the appearance of other participants in the main quest would not affect the final outcome and would not ruin their plans. Hyun suspected that the entire task might be a trap, but he had no idea that he had stumbled upon the true central plot branch. The professor, as if sensing his doubts, apologized, admitting that the assigned test might indeed be too difficult. But every adventurer had to face the unknown sooner or later. It was a test not only of strength, but also of will. And then he asked directly, is Hyun ready to join the fight against the infection itself? The necromancer couldn't believe he had this opportunity. It took incredible willpower to do this, as it involved joining the world's main quest line. But for him, it was a unique opportunity to prove himself. And so, without hesitation, he agreed with cold determination and inner fervor. The professor looked at Hyun carefully and asked if he really realized how strong the monsters he would face in the quests ahead were. He leaned in a little closer, radiating seriousness and wisdom from years of research, and added, "Don't you think it might be too risky to set a promising newcomer a task of this magnitude?" His words were not only a warning, but also a test, as the professor wanted to see if Hyun was capable of assessing the danger and accepting responsibility for his own actions. Hyun thought, his gaze reflecting inner turmoil. Is my level really too low to continue the main quest? Am I ready to engage in combat with creatures whose level and strength surpass anything I've encountered so far? His heart began to beat faster, and thoughts of potential traps, dangers, and unknown forces frightened him, forcing him to reassess his own preparation. But at the same time, deep down, Hyun felt curiosity and excitement. If he admitted his weakness and turned to the great master Alchembry with the words, "Please take me as your student so that I can learn and become stronger," the professor would gladly agree to pass on to him the knowledge, the secrets of ancient alchemy, and the mysteries that could radically change his life. This thought ignited an invisible fire of ambition in him. After that, Hyun left the professor's office, feeling both pride and trepidation. He had received the title of Disciple of the Great Alchembry, but with this, a new responsibility fell upon him, and he understood that real trials awaited him ahead, which would test not only his strength, but also his intelligence, strategy, and endurance. Leaving the office, Hyun received the official title of Alchembry's apprentice and a new task: to undergo training, master complex magical techniques, understand the nature of the Plague Stone, and learn to use its power without harm to himself or the world. The new title was a sign of trust, but also a symbol of the enormous burden that now rested on his shoulders. However, the professor didn't let him just leave without an explanation. He made Hyun repeat that he was ready to accept the task. This little test angered Hyun because he believed that he had already proven his ability in action, and forcing him to confirm his readiness again was unnecessary and annoying. At that time, the last players also did not stand still. They actively pumped their level, trained combat skills, selected equipment, discussed strategies, and each tried to outdo the other in the speed of progress. Their victories stimulated each other, creating an atmosphere of friendly competition and team spirit. The battles between them ended very quickly. They completed even the most difficult tasks efficiently and immediately moved on to a new quest. Every day was filled with action, trials, and danger, and the lack of time made their actions even more intense. Players congratulated each other on great achievements, shared advice and resources, and helped each other in critical situations, creating a sense of community and mutual support that far exceeded the usual social interactions in the game. One of the players approached Hyun to thank him personally. He felt that Hyun's help had made their success possible, and he wanted to express his sincere gratitude. Hyun listened silently, rubbing his hands, and only nodded. For him, this was an everyday occurrence, because he understood that the real work was done by them themselves, and his intervention was only an additional factor that increased the chances of success. He believed he had done nothing extraordinary. The victory was the result of their own skill, and his support was merely ancillary. However, the players had a completely different view of the situation. Without Hyun, they would not have been able to cope without significant losses. At first, they were skeptical about helpers participating in raids for money, but now they understood how critical his presence was. So they collected some money and decided to give it to Hyun as a reward for his help. It was a symbol of gratitude, albeit a small but sincere gesture. Hyun was a little irritated. He had been promised different conditions, and this increase seemed insignificant to him. His principles did not allow him to tolerate the violation of agreements. He always followed the rules and was against any injustice, even if it concerned trifles. Therefore, the player who made the false promise apologized, understanding that Hyun strictly adheres to his own principles and does not tolerate violations. It was strange for the ranker to see such a newbie participating in low-level raids, and he began to wonder who this guy was, where he was from, and how he ended up among them. Then Hyun remembered their words. They believed he could take the stone from the nest, but some of them doubted that there was anything valuable there at all. Hyun felt relieved. He was lucky. The opportunity to retrieve the infection stone had come at just the right time, and he couldn't afford to miss such a chance. As soon as he realized that the swamp dragon had reappeared in the location, his heart beat faster. He was worried that the Haku Ha-Ho mask might complete the quest faster than them, beating him to the punch and taking the valuables. However, if the dragon was still alive, it meant that it had already been attacked and possibly destroyed. The tension was growing. Every second could change the course of events, and Hyun understood that from now on, any mistake would be costly. He finally realized that it was impossible to defeat the boss monster by relying only on his summoned creatures. Hyun analyzed the situation for a long time, realizing that the boss had enormous health, high defense, and incredible attack power, and all his skeletons were just small pawns that could not change the outcome of the battle. This thought angered him, and at the same time made him appreciate his own abilities and the need for strategic thinking even more. He was confident in his advantage. If he did everything right, the Stone of Infection would remain his, and Ha-Ho's mask would never have time to complete the quest and collect the reward. His mind was working at full speed, planning every step, but the tension of anticipation made his heart beat faster. But when Hyun finally arrived at the location, he didn't see any of the eggs he needed. His eyes widened in surprise and irritation. Had all this effort, all the risk and dangerous fighting been in vain? A real storm of emotions flared up inside him. He felt anger, disappointment, and even a little despair. It seemed that fate was mocking his efforts. Feeling completely desperate, Hyun shouted loudly to the entire forest. His shout made the trees tremble, and the forest seemed to respond with the cracking of branches and the rustling of leaves. His shout was not only anger, but also a release of the tension accumulated during all the dangerous adventures. Meanwhile, he pondered what he really needed: peace, rest, and a chance to regain some strength before moving on. His thoughts revolved around strategies, remaining resources, and plans for the near future. He was sure the time for action had come. Until now, he had suffered, balancing on the verge of hunger and danger, constantly monitoring the surrounding situation, and finally decided it was time to receive a well-deserved reward for all the hardships. After all, for so many days and nights he had held himself together, firmly convincing himself that just a little more would make things right, that just one more step would make him reach his goal. His patience and determination had been tested to the limit. The time has come to end the suffering, remove the burden of worries, and allow himself at least a little pleasure, which he had long postponed due to the constant lack of resources and the need to save. Firmly determined to do this, he ordered himself beef, delicious, hot, and nutritious, something that had been put off for a long time, because Hyun always tried to save even on the most necessary things. He had long restricted himself in food, counted every one, planned his diet in such a way as to survive, but now, after completing the main quest, he decided that he deserved a little holiday for his stomach and soul. He thought he could afford a small reward and turn the profits from the quest into real money to feel the results of his efforts and enjoy the fruits of his labor. This time was special for him. He could just relax, enjoy the peace and sense of accomplishment, and try delicious food without thinking about danger and constant pressure. But suddenly he noticed that his account was being debited and only 800 won was left. It was a real blow. He had worked so hard, and in the end, he was left with almost nothing. He felt a mixture of irritation and despair. So much effort, so much worry. And here he was, on the verge of starvation, with a penny left in his account. And then he saw a message from Romani, which distracted him a bit and gave him pause for thought. Then he remembered that he had completely forgotten to tell her what was happening, because he couldn't record a video because of the constant hunting for him by fans and the danger around. As Hyun began to type the message, he suddenly stopped, feeling an inner enlightenment. Why should I save myself from stupid people if I myself am starving? He realized that it was not his fault. He was just an ordinary player enjoying the game's mechanics. He became completely indifferent to his pursuers, their claims, and the danger. He decided to act as he saw fit and not be afraid of anything. Free from any restrictions, he headed for the territory of the Forest of Death, full of determination and confidence that now he himself controls the course of events and no one can stop him. He took his skeletons with him, ready to help him not only in combat, but also in creating content. Every movement, every battle could become part of his video and story. He was serious, more determined than ever. No danger, no trap or monster could stop him from achieving his goal, and he felt like the master of his path. His every step was thought out, every action strategic, because the Forest of Death hid dangers at every turn. Cunning traps, aggressive monsters, and even unknown players ready to attack. But despite all the preparation and cold calculation, every time he came here, his heart clenched as if it were his first time. The forest seemed as huge, dark, and scary as on the first day, and Hyun felt the same adrenaline, a mixture of fear and excitement that made him be on the alert every second. But it was the only place that was suitable for two things at once. It was a place where you could quickly earn a huge amount of experience points, and the eerie atmosphere of the Forest of Death made his videos extremely effective. The dark shadows of the trees, thick fog, rustling of old leaves, and echoes of unknown sounds created the perfect backdrop for streams and content that could captivate viewers and increase views. Therefore, Hyun realized that he needed to act quickly and in a coordinated manner. Gather, adjust equipment, check summoned creatures, and prepare a strategy. Every minute counted, because not only the success of the battle, but also the effectiveness of the video for his content depended on it. At this point, new allies, replenishment, were to join them. Their magic would now become part of the overall strategy, and Hyun understood. It was better to establish contact right away, to show that he was the leader and coordinator, so that no one would be scattered and everyone would act in unison. They were joined by the skeleton Mach, a creature whose skill was inherited from Alchemist himself. His skill level far exceeded that of a normal skeleton, and the advanced spells he could use made him a deadly ally. This greatly increased Hyun's chances of success in battle against powerful monsters and increased the safety of his team. However, the skill was not only powerful, but also gluttonous. It consumed a huge amount of mana, and Hyun's supply of magical energy was already limited. This meant that he had to act carefully, think through each spell move, and save resources for critical moments. And today, their task was to hunt skeletons, practice fighting creatures that could threaten even the strongest players. Every strike, every strategic move could be a lesson and a test of their teamwork. Suddenly, skeletons began to emerge from the ground, creating huge waves of magical energy around them. Mana surged, raising the tension and causing the ground to crack with power. These creatures were not only numerous, but also dangerous, capable of overwhelming weak opponents in an instant. These were level 33 skeletons, experienced, strong, armed with both spells and physical strength. Their appearance created a threatening atmosphere, and even Hyun felt a slight unease, but he quickly pulled himself together. The skeletons he summoned were terrified. They didn't understand how their leader had been enough to throw such a powerful evil to death. Their bony jaws sighed, and their eyes shone with fear and incomprehension. Hyun calmly, without any tremor in his voice, asked, "Why are you just standing there?" His cold but confident tone made the skeletons understand that there was no time for doubt. Any moment could be fatal. Then he ordered them to attack, destroy the enemies, and show that their determination and discipline were stronger than fear. His commands were final, and even the skeletons were forced to react. They were angry and indignant, but deep down, they understood that without the leader's action, their fate would be decided by the enemy. Hyun watched them, confident that they would understand their duties and distinguish these evil spirits from ordinary monsters. He saw fear turn into determination, and the chaos of thought into strategic logic. Looking around, he noticed that some skeletons had hidden behind trees and old graves. He could guess what they were doing, hiding, analyzing the situation, waiting for a signal. But that didn't bother him. He understood that there was no time to waste. They didn't need to waste time because the task was urgent, and Hyun had a huge amount of things to do. Videos, quests, monsters, strategy, every detail was important. Therefore, Hyun ordered to act quickly. Move forward, attack the enemy with all his might, not let fear hold the team back. He knew that only decisive action could guarantee success. And the skeletons, although they were following orders, were filled with fear. They were literally crying, feeling the horror and tension of their first serious battle. But at the same time, deep inside, they felt the excitement and joy of being able to become part of the great and dangerous world of Hyun. One of the skeletons, frightened by the chaos of the battle and the excessive aggression of the enemies, sharply struck another, breaking its skull and arm. It seemed that everything was over for the injured skeleton. He fell, barely holding on to his bones, his eyes shining with pain and shock. However, it didn't happen at all as Hyun or the others had expected. The skeleton, despite being seriously injured, gathered all its will to live, strengthened its bones, and slowly but surely continued to move forward towards its enemies. Its determination was so strong that it seemed to have gained a new life, as if the bones themselves had come to life. Hyung just nodded, confirming his opinion. They're not that easy to kill. Ordinary blows, simple attacks, or chaotic actions could not overcome this resilience. A methodical, strong, and precise approach was needed to finally subdue such opponents. So he took out his magic hammer from the storage room, a rare artifact, the strength of which exceeded +35. Its handle was carved from dark oak, and on the head shone magical runes that glowed in the darkness, radiating energy capable of destroying the bones and spells of the enemy. Hyun directed the force of the hammer at the unyielding skeleton, demonstrating its effectiveness. The blow was precise, and the magical energy pierced the enemy's bones, leaving him no chance of recovery. The head of this terrifying skeleton flew several meters, hitting the ground with a dull thud, while the body remained motionless. The forest was filled with the echo of the impact, and the other skeletons shuddered as they watched this example of destruction. Hyun felt the satisfaction of a successful, powerful strike. He felt like he had demonstrated a masterclass for his subordinates, showing them how to properly combine strength and magic for maximum effectiveness. Looking around, he asked the skeletons, "Does everyone understand what needs to be done?" His voice was calm but commanding, leaving no doubt about the necessity of carrying out the order. Looking at their contorted faces and trembling jaws, Hyun couldn't understand what was happening to them. Fear and indecision mixed with excitement and the desire to act, creating a chaotic kaleidoscope of emotions. In short, their task for today was to destroy 100 skeletons in 100 minutes. Complete concentration, speed, and coordination were critical. However, there was an alternative. If they failed, Hyun planned to leave them here to rot until they died, as a lesson in discipline and strength, showing that cowardice or indecision was punished severely. But the skeletons did not want to remain in this state, and immediately sprang into action, gathering their will and energy to carry out the leader's order. It was far better than being condemned to an eternal inactive existence, and even in their fear, they felt elation. Life and action were better than helplessness. Hyun thought it would take them much longer to get used to the new weapons and tactics they had never used before, but they were doing even better than he had expected. Their progress was both impressive and inspiring. Suddenly, he felt an incredibly strong energy beneath the ground. The vibrations passed through his bones, making the hair on his neck stand on end. The force was extremely powerful and palpable, like a signal of great threat. It was a force that surged right under his feet, making his heart beat faster and his mind work at its limits. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready for an instant reaction. Hyun realized that this energy belonged to a being of incredible power, one that could turn the tide of battle and test even the most experienced player. He felt both fear and excitement, for something extraordinary lay ahead, and only his determination and strategy could determine who would survive. Suddenly, from cracks in the dark, damp earth, amidst the mists and the smell of the swamp, a level 35 skeleton warrior leapt out. His bones cracked under the weight of cursed energy, every step echoing in the surrounding forest, and his eyes blazing with a red light, as if prophesying death to anyone who dared to approach. The magical aura around him glowed and wavered, creating the feeling that the earth itself was holding him for great and brutal battles. It was an extremely rare monster that would spawn randomly, completely unpredictably, and the appearance of such a creature always signaled disaster for even the strongest players. Its appearance was a symbol of danger, and Hyun instantly felt that now all the previous calculations of time, plans, and forces made sense. He would have to adapt on the fly. Upon closer inspection, one might imagine that this skeleton had once been an ordinary cow, transformed by magic into a creature of death, now subject only to its own aggression and desire to destroy. Hyun couldn't help but smile, and at the same time shudder slightly, as he told himself, even in the virtual world, appetite and fear have strange limits. All the players and skeletons under his command rushed at the enemy at the same time. Their movements were fast, synchronized. Every blow, every attempt to attack was part of a carefully thought-out strategy, because even the slightest mistake could cost their lives. And now they were competing for a trophy that dropped once per game. Hyun was already thinking about the culinary side of things, whether to grill it, bake it, maybe even make a virtual steak for his character. His fantasy of a virtual dinner was both humorous and terrifying, as the real danger was right in front of him. But everything turned out to be much more complicated than it seemed. The skeleton warrior turned out to be extremely strong and fast. His blows were accurate and dangerous, and Hyun instantly realized that simple attacks would not help. Maximum concentration and strategy were required. Right in front of him, the enemy began to attack with full force, bones clanging together and the air cracking with the magical impulse emanating from his body. Every movement of this skeleton created a sense of chaos and imminent threat that literally squeezed the air out of his lungs. Hyun jumped to the side at the last moment, avoiding the fatal blow. His heart was beating wildly, and blood filled his veins, giving him an incredible speed of reaction. It was a moment of pure concentration, where the body acted faster than the brain. He hadn't felt this fear in a long time, adrenaline literally bursting through his skin, making his nerves tense and his legs move in precise, instantaneous jerks. The danger was both terrifying and motivating, because in every blow lay incredible possibilities. Fortunately, the skeleton hit the arm, not the body, giving Hyun a chance to use objective analysis and choose the right tactics for his next strike. His eyes were shining with excitement and concentration. Immediately, Hyun decided to use his new weapon, the magic hammer he had received from the alchemist. Its hilt was carved from dark oak, and its head shone with magical runes, ready to break through even the strongest bones of the skeleton. He began to strike the hammer all over the giant skeleton's body, feeling magical power sprout through the bones, creating powerful bursts of energy with each strike. Each strike was almost a dance of destruction and control of power. Suddenly, strange and loud sounds began behind him, as if the earth itself was breaking open and warning of an even greater threat. Mist and dust rose into the air, and Hyun felt that the battle was only just beginning. After the battle, he checked the skeletons, whether everyone survived, whether they were ready for the next wave, because team synergy and readiness were the key to survival in such a dangerous location. Hyun realized that the next strike would be even more difficult, and each enemy would require complete concentration, speed, and a refined strategy, because any mistake now could be costly. Behind him, a new giant skeleton monster was already attacking, its bones glistening in the sunlight, and its magical aura reflected the dark rays of the forest, creating the feeling that even the air trembled from its power. Hyung immediately noticed him and assessed him as an impatient opponent, ready to attack instantly, without hesitation. His eyes were shining, and Hyung felt that a fight could not be avoided. He needed to act decisively. Behind Hyun, a new skeleton magical ally appeared, who began to create fire with his magic, preparing a powerful attack that could burn the enemy to the ground. The giant monster noticed this magician only at the last moment. Its eyes opened wide and its body tensed, preparing to dodge the deadly bullet. The mech skeleton launched a huge fireball that raced straight towards the enemy, piercing the air with a whistle, leaving a trail of hot dust and smoke. The bullet pierced through space, burning everything in its path and leaving a trail of hot, scorching air, the smell of burnt bone dust and decay that enveloped everything around. Hyung didn't expect such power from a magician, and his heart was beating wildly. But the joy of the prospect of the video and the views filled him with excitement and strength again. He was happy not only for his own victory, but also for the opportunity to shoot an epic video that would surely garner at least 10,000 views, which provided additional motivation for even greater achievements. But the skeleton's appetite and excitement ran wild. They began to think about how to cook the enemy, imagining delicious steaks and grilling, which enhanced the atmosphere of chaos and fun at the same time. Suddenly, a message came. The location boss had sensed the death of his subordinate, and his presence was already becoming real, tangible, and dangerous. A magical layer appeared, repeating the same thing. Location has detected an intruder, creating an atmosphere of fear, inevitability, and impending chaos that would engulf everyone present. A huge magic circle appeared before them, with ancient runes glowing, and the layer continued to repeat warnings, as if the magic itself was trying to warn of the boss's awakening. A new monster began to emerge from the center of the circle, huge and unseen before, radiating an aura of power that far exceeded the power of ordinary skeletons. His magical energy literally pressed on the surrounding air, creating a feeling of imminent disaster, and Hyun instantly felt that this was a creature of another level, more dangerous than all the previous ones. The boss of the skeletons emerged from the circle, a monster of gigantic proportions, its bones shining with a golden glow, and its eyes burning with an unwavering light, ready to incinerate all living things. Hyun's eyes widened in shock and fear, as the size of this monster exceeded anything he had seen before. It was a golden lich, a level 40 boss, a magical unit capable of spreading magic and inflicting deadly damage to all living things. He was known as a real storm for newbies, a boss that tests not only the player's strength, but also their strategic thinking, endurance, and determination. Come to think of it, this boss's awakening was a direct result of Hyun killing a bunch of skeletons, and he had no idea of the consequences that could prove fatal to him if he underestimated the enemy's strength. He knew perfectly well that the chances of defeating this monster were practically zero, and there were no guarantees. But if he managed to defeat such an opponent, he would receive a real jackpot. Not only rare artifacts and gold coins, but also immense fame among all players, which could radically change his status in the game. The plan was simple, but it required maximum concentration. You need to buff your skeletons as much as possible, strengthen their attacks, speed, and magic shield so that they can withstand the boss's onslaught. He knew that even the slightest mistake could cost you your life. Looking back, Hyun realized that none of the skeletons were left next to him. They had run away, frightened by the monster's power. The situation was becoming critical. Without support, he was left alone against a truly dangerous boss. The reason for the skeletons' escape was obvious. There simply wasn't enough mana to summon them again. Their magical energy had been depleted by previous battles, and they couldn't fully fulfill their duties. Hyun's heart filled with anger. He didn't like that his allies had abandoned him at the most critical moment. The feeling of hopelessness and the need to confront the boss alone made him clench his fists and make decisive decisions. He realized that his mana was still not enough, but he summoned 4 skeletons and tried to grant them the additional spells granted to him by the alchemist. Hyun knew that this was his last chance to increase the strength of his allies before the battle. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, Hyun decided to use the only weapon left in his arsenal, a special hammer of magical power, which could inflict enormous damage even to the strongest enemies. He thought it was time to act decisively, to use all his skills, experience, and agility, and perhaps even dance on the battlefield before his strength was completely exhausted. Hyun began to quickly put on special equipment that not only protected his body, but also increased his magical and physical attributes, preparing him for the boss battle. His body was once again covered in silver armor, glowing with magical runes, as if energy itself had concentrated around him, creating an aura of power and steadfastness. The feeling of being ready to fight the huge boss completely enveloped him. He understood that his life, reputation, and the opportunity to win legendary trophies were at stake. He launched lightning-fast attacks, moving at superhuman speed, dodging blows and counterattacking accurately to test the boss's weaknesses. The boss instantly used his powerful weapon behind him, and yellow lightning bolts instantly began to shoot from it, cutting through the air, leaving a trail of electrical energy. These lightning bolts destroyed literally everything in their path. Trees fell, the ground cracked, and dust and debris flew around, creating a chaotic, dangerous atmosphere that literally weighed on Hyun. Hyun instantly realized that a single blow from the boss could destroy him, and that the pace of the battle was becoming critically high, leaving very little time for thought or maneuvering. This pace of battle made his chances of victory minimal. Every second required maximum concentration, speed, and accuracy. He realized that he couldn't defeat the boss using conventional methods. He had to act globally, using all his tricks, cunning, and magical abilities at the same time. Hyun decided that he had to stop the boss at all costs. Every possible strategy ran through his mind, each one a chance for survival and success. The boss clearly did not expect such a turn of events, and Hyun used it to his advantage, observing the opponent's reactions and finding weak points. One of the boss's rings began to crack into small pieces, signaling his weakness. At this moment, Hyun seized the chance and delivered a precise blow, leaving the boss unable to cast spells with his hands. He decided to provoke the boss as much as possible, pushing him to take rash actions in order to find more weaknesses. The boss was shocked by each new turn of events. Hyun felt that his opponent was gradually losing control. At the same time, a threat message came from the location. It became clear to everyone that the battle was entering a new, critical phase. The boss was assessing Hyun's skill level and seemed to be trying to overestimate his powers, while simultaneously casting his own spells. An incredibly strong energy began to concentrate near the boss. The purple light pulsated, gathering strength for a deadly blow. Hyun instantly realized that the attack would be much stronger than the previous ones. The only way out was to react quickly and dodge. He jumped sharply to the side, trying to find a safe distance, because even the slightest mistake could lead to instant death. A new plan was running through my head. I had to adapt quickly, use jumps, dodges, maneuvers, and attack at the same time. The purple light attacked him mercilessly, but Hyun found weak points in the trajectory and tried to wait for a chance to counterattack. He realized that time was short, and every second mattered. He needed to find the boss's weak spot and deliver the most powerful blow possible. The skeletons, though exhausted, could not fall behind, but their presence gave him moral support. They remained his small army in the chaos of battle. Hyun looked back at them, checking to see if they were ready for the next commands, and coordinated every move in real time. At the last moment, with fear in his eyes, he managed to dodge the skeleton's deadly blow and save his chance at life. He jumped sharply to the side, feeling his heart beating wildly and his body filled with adrenaline and magical energy. Hyun realized that the previous tactics were not working, and he had to come up with a new strategy, using all his skills, knowledge of combat mechanics, and the boss's behavior. He couldn't remember encountering so many difficult bosses in his past lives, and he knew that this time things were really dangerous. Hyun tried to analyze what the catch was, what abilities the boss had hidden, and how he could use the weaknesses to his advantage. He realized that without any skeletons and knowledge of the boss's behavior, his chances were minimal. But he decided to fight anyway because there was simply no other way out. All he had to do was act as efficiently as possible, try all available tactics and abilities, so that even in a hopeless situation, he could find a chance to win. He began to actively jump around the monster, dodging attacks and looking for the smallest openings for counterattacks. Now, Hyun understood that even in such critical conditions, one could avoid blows if one quickly analyzed the opponent's movements. The problem was the limited time to prepare a counterattack, but he was willing to take the risk to find the boss's weak spot and deliver a powerful blow. But it was not an easy task to find the exact weak spot. But the boss did not wait for Hyrkan's attack and began to attack first. But Hyrkan was incredibly confident and easily dodged the attack. After that, with incredible speed and agility, he began to approach the boss. But the boss's magic laser began to attack him. Hyrkan understood that he did not have much time to attack. His every attack, every move was thought out, because even the slightest mistake could cost him his life, and the right decision could provide a chance for a decisive victory. Suddenly, he didn't feel the boss's huge, powerful hand appear behind him, enveloping the entire air with a dark energy aura, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow him up. The hand gripped him tightly, like metal claws, and Hyun felt the pressure of immense force squeezing every muscle in his body, making his heart beat wildly. The boss began to pull him towards him, creating a feeling of imminent death, and Hyun felt the mana in his veins boiling with adrenaline and fear. Looking at him, the boss growled loudly and ferociously, baring his teeth that gleamed in the light of magical energy, and making a menacing sound that seemed to split the air into pieces. Hyun instantly realized that he was in great danger, where his every move could be his last, and that not only his own life, but also the lives of the skeletons around him depended on his determination. He saw how many new patterns of behavior the boss had developed, how he instantly adapted to the situation, using combinations of magic and physical strength, which made his predictability minimal. But Hyun was no ordinary player either. He quickly analyzed movements, looked for weak points, prepared counterattacks and tricks that could turn the tide of battle. Suddenly, he cast a powerful spell on the boss, concentrating all the mana in his hands, feeling the magic tremble and ready to explode with a powerful blow. The skeleton's face immediately changed. The demon curse that Hyun had placed increased its characteristics by 13%, and the boss felt the sharp impact of an invisible force that disrupted his control over the attack. The skeletons released him, and Hyun began to fall downward, feeling the wind tearing at his hair and the fabric of his armor, his heart almost jumping out of his chest from the strain. As he fell, he thought quickly about how to find the moment to attack, and came up with a lightning-fast plan. The moment when the boss would be most vulnerable after the skeletons had been thrown away. Concentrating all his mana in his fist, he felt the energy build up, forming a bright purple light, ready to burst forth with tremendous force. With incredible force, Hyun punched the boss, a blow that broke through his opponent's magic shield, leaving cracks in his armor and magical aura. It was an extremely powerful, almost devastating blow that shattered the air around it and created a wave of energy that exploded in all directions. The skeleton's mask began to shatter into pieces, scattering around, and the golden fragments reflected the light of the magic, creating the effect of an epic scene. Hyun did not hide his joy. Finally, the boss was wounded, and the chance for victory became a reality. The boss began to fall downward, screaming loudly, and the air was filled with the dull echo of his mighty roar, mixing with the noise of the battle. Notifications began to fly from the sky. "You have killed the Golden Lich!" And Hyun received a huge amount of experience points and rare rewards that instantly filled his inventory. He was incredibly pleased with himself, because it was he, alone and without any outside help, who had overcome such a strong monster. However, Hyun showed no fear, because in reality, he was on the verge of death, and every blow from the boss could be fatal. He began to praise himself for his level and skill, realizing that he had already reached level 36, and this gave him some confidence for the upcoming challenges. He realized that by continuing at the same pace, one could quickly build up a dangerous combination of levels and abilities, and this could become risky if one did not control one's mana and powers. Up until this point, he had gotten by with his knowledge and rapid leveling, but now more skill and strategic planning were needed. With the advent of new abilities, he needed significantly more mana to maintain a constant level of combat effectiveness and control the skeletons. He had gained all the mana-related knowledge he could, and understood that he would have to carefully select equipment and resources, although the funds to do so were still lacking. However, Hyun decided to temporarily put these problems aside, because right now he was only concerned with one thing: sending the video and focusing on reaching level 40. He immediately prepared a recording showing off his skills and defeating the boss, and sent it to Romata, who was eagerly awaiting the result. She watched the video with great enthusiasm, her eyes shining with emotion, and a smile never left her face. She was impressed with the work done and could not hide her surprise at how Hyun was able to defeat the monster on his own, without taking any hits. She knew it was an incredible achievement, and the video immediately became a topic of discussion within the guild and among fans. Hyun received well-deserved praise, as his skills, strategy, and reaction speed allowed him to complete the task at an incredible level. Not only that, he defeated a high-level monster and at the same time suffered no damage, which made him even more outstanding in Romani's eyes. She believed that the video, although gray at first glance, was actually extremely dynamic and vibrant, and required minimal editing. She began searching for the perfect title for the video, trying out hundreds of options until she finally settled on one that immediately came to mind. She decided to call him the Salt Sprinkler King, emphasizing his solitary but effective victory. Meanwhile, Hyun returned to the Raiders Association branch in Bansu Castle, carrying out all of the professor's orders and preparing for further tasks. He had only one question for the professor, but he didn't want to waste time explaining it. He just wanted the reward. The professor handed him the promised reward: an important book of skeleton skills, a rare necromancer skill that cannot be purchased for any money. Hyun sincerely thanked the professor because this book gave him new opportunities and expanded his arsenal of abilities. Additionally, the professor gave him a ring of plague, created from a plague stone that Hyun brought back from the quest, enhancing his own power. He had not expected such a precious gift, as it was an extremely rare ring, usually only given to players who had completed a key story quest. When Hyun tried to take the ring, the professor abruptly closed his hand, hinting that he wouldn't give it away so easily. And this added to the drama of the moment. He understood that the professor wanted to test his resolve and prepare him for further trials before the ring became his full-fledged instrument of power. Hyun felt immense pride and satisfaction from the work he had done. But at the same time, he understood that even more dangerous and difficult tasks lay ahead. In Hyun's hands, the Ring of Infection began to glow with a faint green light, confirming its magical power and connection to the stone that had aided him in the quest. He imagined how he could use this power in future battles, empowering skeletons and bending enemies to his will. Hyun felt incredibly motivated and inspired, because now his capabilities had expanded significantly, and each subsequent battle promised to be even more epic. This was the moment when Hyun finally felt like a true necromancer, a master of skeletons, and the master of his own destiny in the game. His every step was now confident and deliberate, for he knew he had the support of the magic of the Plague Stone and a new, rare ring. But he also realized that the professor had not intentionally given the ring away, and Hyun would have to use all his skill and intelligence to fully master its power and earn the right to own it. Hyun stood there, not understanding what was happening. Everything was blurred before his eyes. His thoughts were confused, and his heart was pounding as if it wanted to burst out of his chest. It seemed to him that the very reality around him had begun to change, and even the professor who had just given him a rare ring now seemed mysterious and unpredictable. Suddenly, the professor, with a sly fox smile, suggested that Hyun catch him if he can, adding to the atmosphere of a game of cat and mouse, where every move was a test of agility and strategy. Hyun couldn't understand why the professor was complicating a simple matter. He had already earned the award, the ring, and the experience, but the rules of this game remained a mystery to him, and he couldn't predict the old alchemist's next move. But still, albeit with some hesitation, Hyun agreed to the conditions and began running after the professor, feeling his heart beating wildly and his legs carrying him through the air filled with magic and energy around him. He ran for a long time, almost without stopping, and each step resembled a marathon, where the surrounding landscape changed faster than he could perceive. Hyun tried to understand what was wrong with the professor. He was behaving strangely, cunningly avoiding obstacles, but it was impossible to kill him, because he was an NPC, and the game rules did not allow interference in plot events. In the end, Hyun managed to get the ring and receive the next quest, a reward for his agility and determination, which opened up new opportunities and strengthened his position in the game. He decided to let the professor go, but only this time, because he now understood that even NPCs could be part of a more complex system that was not always easy to predict. Sudu Castle at a low level was a dangerous place for lone players, so Hyun decided he would have to pump up some more and strengthen his strength before heading there. Suddenly, a message from Romani came to his phone. She said that she had uploaded his video to YouTube, and this instantly awakened a wave of anticipation. Upon opening the platform, Hyun saw a million comments, hundreds of donations, and messages from fans begging him not to end his career, which created both excitement and a pleasant shock. He clearly didn't expect such a scale of reaction, because he thought the video would be popular, but not this much. After that, exhausted, he fell to the ground, feeling the soft grass beneath him and a slight fatigue after all the adventures, but at the same time, receiving a wave of satisfaction from the success he had achieved. He began to count the zeros on the account, feeling each number become a reality that opened up new possibilities for pleasure and reward. He imagined what kind of food he would be able to afford with that money, feeling the aroma of the dishes in his mind and anticipating the incredible taste. This time, he could afford expensive delicacies that had previously been out of reach, and the joy of this filled his soul. Hyun was happy that he could finally enjoy what had previously been just a dream, and that hard work had borne real fruit. He understood that the video would definitely go viral, but he didn't expect that it would touch the audience so much and cause such a flurry of emotions and donations. Now was the perfect moment when he could relax, unwind, and order some food without thinking about quests or monsters. Suddenly, he noticed a message in the mail that made him slightly wary. It was an offer from the Thunder Hunters Guild, where the Thunder Goddess herself was based. In a past life, they had already given him a passage, chasing him almost everywhere they could, and Hyun couldn't believe that history was repeating itself. He had absolutely no desire to join the Thunder Hunters, realizing that it could limit his freedom and force him to act according to their rules. However, he thought about it, because in his past life he had also said no, and still faced the guild's intrusiveness. She was persistent and confident after so many rejections, because everyone was convinced that this was a great opportunity. The Thunder Hunters were among the top 30 guilds, and the leader was a girl from a wealthy family. Hyun understood that the high salary and prestige of the guild were not for him. He always wanted to work for his own guild and glorify himself on his own. He remembered the scary smile of one of his comrades and realized that the past could repeat itself. He could be betrayed. He was trying to assess whether playing with a guild was worth the risk, or whether it was better to remain free and develop his powers on his own. At that moment, Hyun felt that money and status were small things compared to the freedom he had gained, and the fact that he could choose his own path. He summoned the skeletons to him to test their loyalty and willingness to train even harder, because now it was obvious that the next challenges would be even more dangerous. The skeletons, seeing his determination, became serious, ready to listen and learn, which made Hyun smile and take pleasure in their discipline. He realized that this time, everything would be different. Now they would become stronger, wiser, and ready for any dangers. Hyun decided that their first big test would be an attack on Sudu Castle, where he would have to use all his new skills, skeletons, and magical artifacts. The attack on Zuryu Castle was planned with utmost precision and strategic preparation, as it was a key location for increasing their forces and obtaining rare resources. Hyun and the skeletons prepared for a long battle, trained to exhaustion, developed strategies to emerge victorious and not lose a single ally. All their movements were thought out. Each step depended on whether they would be able to capture the castle or lose under the pressure of the guards and magical traps. Hyun felt that this would be a serious test for him and his army of skeletons, and every moment of training prepared them for the difficulties ahead. He was determined, focused, because now their strength and skill were the main weapons against the enemies of Zuryu Castle. The skeletons obeyed every order, trained tirelessly, and Hyun felt proud that he had managed to raise a real team, ready for any danger. He realized that money is a trifle. The main thing now is strength, preparation, and strategy, because only they will ensure success in the future. The training continued, and every day Hyun watched as the skeletons became stronger, faster, more balanced, and ready for battle. He realized that the foundation of their power was being laid right now, and small victories in training were much more important than instant rewards. Hyun felt that every step, every decision, and every training session brought them closer to a huge challenge, Zuryu Castle, where new dangers, monsters, and trials awaited them. With this realization, he prepared his team, considered tactics, and was ready for the coming offensive, knowing that their strength and agility would be the key to victory. The assault on Sudu Castle was their next big goal, and Hyun was determined to make every one of his skeletons as effective as possible and victory undisputed. He understood that there would be trials, dangers, unexpected traps, and strong enemies ahead. But now he had an army, experience, and rare artifacts that gave him an advantage. Hyun was confident that with training, focus, and the ability to adapt quickly, they would be able to overcome any threat and emerge victorious in any battle for Tsuryu Castle. With this realization, he looked back at his skeletons, feeling proud and inspired, ready to lead them on an assault on the largest and most dangerous location they had ever seen. The training was complete, but the real test was just beginning, and Hyun knew that their entire future depended on their preparation. He felt excitement and adrenaline, because every second of approaching Sudu Castle made them stronger and more prepared for any unforeseen circumstances. Hyun smiled as he saw his team of skeletons move with confidence and determination, knowing that they were now capable of true feats. He was determined that they must become much stronger than they were now, and ready for whatever lay ahead. Their assault on Tsuryu Castle became their main objective, and Hyun was certain that this challenge would reveal who they truly were, and who could withstand the greatest pressure in a game where life, honor, and power intertwined in a deadly dance. Deciding not to waste any time, they began training right along the way, gradually honing their skills and preparing their bodies and minds for the challenges ahead. This workout was supposed to be easy and completely uncomplicated. Just a steady run all the way there, with no additional tasks or complications. And the one who suddenly stumbles and falls on the way will not receive help from others. He himself will have to collect his own bones on the rocky road with a heavy groan, feeling the cruelty of fate. After that, they slowly but surely moved on along the road that led them through dense forests and eroded paths, leaving behind the shadow of past adventures. At the same time, the Queen of Thunder sat thoughtfully on her high throne, lost in thought, as if her gaze penetrated the very heavens where clouds swirled and lightning flashed. One of her most loyal magicians approached cautiously, bowing, and in a low voice asked what his mistress, on whose shoulders lay the fate of entire kingdoms, was thinking about right now. Beneath her throne, in the depths of the hall, powerful dragons of various levels and colors stirred. From young and impatient to ancient ones, covered in scars that seemed to radiate the old power of the elements. Then a Hech, a seasoned warrior from the Storm Hunters Guild, approached the queen. His heavy footsteps echoed in the silence, his voice like thunder. He warned his mistress that a great gathering would soon begin. The queen, raising her head, asked him how the investigation was progressing, related to the quest about an unknown infection that was spreading throughout the world. But in response, she heard only disappointment. No new information, no hints of a solution. They had not even found the key that would open the way to the next part of the great task. They didn't want to believe her when she said that it was the Hydra who first started the real main quest line, but doubts only undermined their alliance. Still, most believed that things would soon change for the better. They hoped that things would soon be settled and set off for a meeting where the leaders of the 30 strongest guilds were to gather. The mysterious choir, which was always close to the queen, suddenly whispered a warning to her. She should be especially careful at that gathering. The queen only smiled a confident and proud smile. Full of strength and determination, she stood up and walked majestically away, leaving behind a flash of lightning. Meanwhile, Hyun, who had just received a large sum of money, made the first firm decision to pay off his debts. He wanted to pay off the principal in full, including all interest, so that he would no longer feel the heavy burden on his shoulders. And he did it. He paid off his loan to the last penny, feeling the oppressive stone disappear from his soul. The next step in his plans was to purchase rare and extremely valuable skill books that could open up new opportunities for him. When he had purchased these important volumes and paid off the loan, his heart finally calmed down, as if after a long storm. However, at the same time, doubts began to torment him. He was again left almost without money, and this feeling of poverty again weighed on his consciousness. Hyung had been preparing himself for this moment, but when he looked at his new balance, he felt almost physically hurt. To distract himself and quell his anxiety, he decided to dive headfirst into learning new skills. To do this, he purchased another special book, which immediately shone in his hands. All it took was a palm to touch its cover, and it lit up with a bright light, as if a living fire of knowledge had awakened within. Soon, a message flashed before his eyes. He had successfully mastered a new skill, the art of leather plastic. Hyun could barely contain his impatience. He wanted to try out this new gift immediately, and without hesitation, he decided to use the skill to strengthen his own body and test the limits of his strength. It was at this moment that he felt a new power begin to consume his body and consciousness. Layers of bone energy were superimposed on each other, as if forming an invisible shell that protected him from any threat. With each breath, he seemed to be getting closer to the image of a skeleton warrior, strong, cold, unbreakable. His defenses had grown so much that even imagination could not picture a blow capable of breaking through his new barriers. But the transformation did not only affect his body. His clothing, which had looked ordinary a few moments ago, began to change. The fabrics seemed to lose their flexibility and turned into heavy, dark armor, sewn together with invisible threads of power. Even the weapon he held trembled as if alive and began to change shape, becoming covered in shimmering symbols that glowed with a bone glow. His sword was no longer a simple blade. It was an extension of his will, heavy, powerful, capable of splitting the air until it cracked. The weapon radiated a sense of danger and power, and every movement left a trail of light like red-hot steel behind it. This was not just an improvement, it was an evolution of the very essence of his arsenal. Hyrkan, watching this incredible transformation, felt his heart beat faster. He had not even expected such a result. What he received surpassed all his dreams. A feeling of pride and confidence was born in his soul, because now he was truly ready to challenge any enemy. However, he understood perfectly well. One cannot stop there. The true path of a warrior goes only forward. With fire in his eyes, he reached for the next books, each of which was like a door to new horizons of power. He eagerly opened page after page, striving to absorb as much knowledge as possible. Opening one of the books, he felt darkness gather around him. A new skill was born in his mind, Lini's Curse. This dark gift was cold and seductive at the same time, like the icy breath of death. The book itself seemed to whisper to him that this ability could change the course of battle. He looked back at the skeleton standing motionless beside him and thought, "This dead man must know what this power means." But deep down, he felt that even someone born of bones and darkness did not understand the full depth of this dark magic. He himself remained ignorant of what lay behind the words, Curse of Sloth. To check, he decided to immediately try out his new gift. Having concentrated his power, he applied it to one of the controlled skeletons, and immediately saw how the creature became slow, lazy, its movements lost sharpness and speed. Hyrkan realized that this skill would be ideal in battle. He could make enemies weaker, helpless, easy targets. Then he eagerly opened the last book in his new collection. His heart pounded with excitement, for it contained the most precious secret he had ever sought. And indeed, the words flashed through his mind, Summon the golem. It was every necromancer's dream, a rare gift that put the power of an entire mountain into his hands. He couldn't wait to try this ability in practice. This skill was a real rarity. To get it meant going through dozens of trials, giving up countless resources, and even sacrificing a part of himself. And now, holding it in his hands, Hyrkan felt that his perseverance had been rewarded. As he uttered the spell, the ground beneath his feet shook. The ground began to split, and a massive figure emerged from the dark cracks. A stone spike, composed of boulders and fragments of rock, slowly rose from the ground. Hyrkan felt a surge of triumph. It was a moment of victory. He had finally summoned his first true golem. A fire of pride lit up his eyes, and the golem was indeed enormous. Its body was made of massive slabs of stone, glowing with an inner glow. Its silhouette blocked out the sun, and even the creature's breath sounded like thunder. For a necromancer, having such an ally meant gaining an absolute advantage. The golem was not just a defender, it was a whole wall, a living bastion, stronger than any tank. It was a real must-have, without which it is difficult to imagine battles of the highest level. But the most interesting thing was ahead. It turned out that this colossus hides another unique ability that only the Chosen Ones knew about. A mysterious copy mode was hidden inside the golem. This mode allowed him to replicate the strength, speed, and even fighting style of his master, creating the perfect tandem. If Hyrkan and the golem combined their actions, they became a single fighting organism that could attack and defend simultaneously. Their combined power was capable of wiping any enemy off the face of the earth. United, they looked invincible. Hyrkan imagination painted pictures of battles in which they together defeated enemy armies. This feature could truly be one of the most effective weapons at his disposal. However, his joy was short-lived. He quickly realized that the golem was not copying his movements at all. Frustrated and angry, he began tapping away at his magical clock interface, checking the settings and searching for why the system had failed. At first, he thought it was a simple bug, a technical error that ruined the whole moment. But suddenly the giant did begin to copy his movements. However, he did so incredibly slowly, as if he were in a viscous swamp. Yes, the movements were exact copies, but the delay was so noticeable that it looked comical. The golem's speed was negligible. It moved as if in a dream, which made it completely unsuitable for real combat. Seeing this, Hyrkan could not stand it, and began to laugh wildly, hysterically. His laughter echoed in the empty space, mixing with despair. And then he fell to his knees and cursed this game that had once again cruelly mocked his expectations. At this time, all the players had already gathered for the main meeting, which was to decide the fate of the guilds. And finally, the meeting began. Solemnly, loudly, with the feeling that it was here and now that the future history of the entire world would be decided. Guild leader Ares rose to his feet and spoke first. His voice was confident and authoritative, but at the same time, he did not forget about formal politeness. He thanked everyone who, despite their busy schedules, had found time to come to this extremely important meeting. Ares emphasized that he understood how tense the situation was for each of the guilds, and that was why their presence here became even more important. Representatives of the noble guilds gathered in the Great Hall. Among them, Matador Shev stood out in particular, the charismatic and ruthless leader of the Red Bulls Guild. His presence always reminded of the strength and aggression that his team displayed on the battlefield. Shev was known for being fearless and always going for the lead, but even he looked more reserved than usual today. Bereg stood nearby, the mysterious and silent leader of the Oskal Guild. His figure, as if carved from stone, radiated coldness and restrained menace. He did not like to talk much, but his every word always carried weight. Even his silence seemed like a sentence. And of course, it was impossible not to notice Queen Thunder Grey, the leader of the Storm Hunters Guild. She sat proudly and majestically, her presence alone inspiring respect and fear. Sparks seemed to fly in the air around her, and even the most courageous guild leaders did not dare to challenge her lightly. However, there was something strange and even disturbing about this gathering. Of the 30 leaders invited, only 4 showed up. Everyone was whispering in surprise because this had never happened before. It was a surprise that immediately gave rise to many suspicions. Someone present jokingly remarked that perhaps, in order for all 30 to actually gather, something incredible had to happen. Something so grandiose that the very existence of the world could be threatened. Indeed, in normal times, the top 30 guilds were always in a state of rivalry. They were at enmity with each other, fighting for resources and glory, and even the thought of their full gathering seemed almost utopian. But this time it was different. The leader of the meeting said that in such a situation, there was no need for all 30 to be present. Only a few key figures were enough to make decisions and develop a plan. The reason was that the Hydra Guild had unexpectedly been able to locate the infected count, and now they were openly announcing that they were planning a large-scale raid on this boss. A raid that was to take place exactly 1 month later. It seemed incredible because all the other guilds, despite their titanic efforts, had not even come close to solving the problem. They were stagnant, while Hydra had made a huge leap forward. If this turns out to be true, then the Hydra raid promises to be not just a victory, but a grand event that will overturn the balance of power in the entire game world. And everyone understood perfectly well. If they allowed Hydra to reach the Count first and defeat him, the main storyline would finally come under their control. From that moment on, the fate of the content would no longer belong to others. Moreover, even the profits from sponsors, support from donors, and all game bonuses would go into the hands of Hydra. They would become monopolists, and other guilds would risk being left with nothing. Hydra responded to this in a brazen and defiant manner. Its representatives stated that if anyone was afraid of competition, it was better for them to quietly step aside and not upset their plans. These words enraged Askal. He literally flared up with anger. His eyes lit up red, and he was ready to raise his hand against his rivals, starting a conflict right there. However, the Matador intervened in time. He stepped forward and sharply ordered both sides to stop, reminding them that they had not gathered to start senseless fights on the spot. The real truth was different. Ares proposed a plan that seemed logical to many. He proposed uniting against Hydra, to the very 4 guilds that had the courage and opportunity to show up for the meeting today. The proposal was to conclude a temporary non-aggression pact and agree to a full information exchange. All knowledge, clues, and materials related to the infected count were to be shared equally until the storyline was completed. After that, he asked directly, "Does anyone have any objections?" But despite the disgruntled murmurs and arguments, no real objections were heard. Only the Hydra representatives continued to hurl insults and threats. In the end, no open objections were raised, and so the decision was made to create a temporary alliance. This did not mean friendship, but it did mean a common goal. Hydra, however, took this turn extremely hostilely, their pride clearly hurt. After the meeting was over, Thunder Queen Syrah went to her chambers. She stepped into the shower, but even under the jets of water, her thoughts would not leave her alone. She understood that uniting with others was the right political move, but her heart did not desire such an alliance. Her pride did not allow her to fully trust these people. She was angry not only at herself for agreeing to such terms, but also at the other leaders for mistrusting her. She felt like she was being seen as a competitor rather than an ally, and this fueled even more fire in her soul. She understood a simple truth. Even the strongest guild leaders present could not cope with the boss of the first chapter on their own without outside help. Every victory had cost them losses and compromises, and now they were effectively forced, against their own pride, to unite among themselves. On the other hand, Syrah knew perfectly well that there was nothing she could do about it. She couldn't go against the strict logic of the game's plot. If she didn't adapt, she would be left behind and lose her chance. And most importantly, if they let Hydra go through the main storyline first, then all the other guilds will find themselves in an extremely difficult and humiliating situation. They will essentially remain on the sidelines of the story. So she decided to bite her tongue and keep her anger inside. She knew that the key was timing and the right opportunity. She had to wait for the right moment to strike. She immediately issued an order to her entire guild to keep an eye on Hydra for no moment and to report to her any, even the most insignificant and strange actions on their part. After all, she was determined. She intended to get this infected count at any cost, and no temporary alliances would stop her. Meanwhile, Hyrkan arrived at the majestic Bansu castle, the headquarters of the Raiders Association. The massive gates, guards, and symbols on the flags made it immediately clear that this place was the epicenter of power and authority. As soon as he entered, he heard unexpected news. The association administrators looked worried and informed him of an emergency task. He was asked to go to the Beaver Forest. The name itself was already frightening to many players, as it was associated with danger and death. An agent had disappeared there, and Hyrkan was asked to traverse the territory, bypass dangerous areas, and search for traces of the missing man. The mission was no less dangerous than it was strange, but Hyrkan knew perfectly well that the Beaver Forest was teeming with level 70th monsters. For him, a novice, it was an insanely dangerous place. That was why he was given the task as an alchemist student. It provided a formal reason for participation, but it did not make the journey itself any easier. But if he refuses, he risks losing his new status as a seeker of the infection, which would mean automatic exclusion from the main plot. He began to understand that he had fallen into a hopeless situation. It was like a trap, closed to him by the very rules of the game. If he loses this status, he will truly be simply thrown out of the main storyline. All previous efforts will be in vain. And it was at this moment that Hyrkan realized that he was to blame for his troubles. He jumped above his head when he dared to interfere in the main quest, although he was still too weak and inexperienced. Under normal circumstances, he would never have been able to complete these difficult tasks, as he remained a simple novice without resources or allies. And now he was presented with a quest designed for level 60th characters, and with a condition that required strength and skill from him that he did not possess. Hyrkan didn't know what to do. He couldn't just refuse, because that would mean the end of all his ambitions. Suddenly, he heard a conversation between several players sitting nearby. They were discussing rumors, whether a certain guild would be able to complete the main storyline first. According to them, even the top guilds had serious problems starting this line. This added to the intrigue, as no one was sure of their chances. Everyone was wondering, what would happen to the main story quests for the rest if one guild was able to defeat the infected count first? Would the content be closed? Would they be left with crumbs? Hearing this, Hyrkan sighed heavily. Cold fear, mixed with despair, settled in his heart again, and he realized that he had no other choice. The only way out for him was to go to the Beaver Forest, even if it seemed like suicide. While Hyrkan was preparing for his perilous journey into the Beaver Forest, the other players had already reached the outskirts of a mysterious castle, towering among the dark trees, where the infected count himself was rumored to be hiding. Their mission had been going on for weeks, and the players were exhausted. Day after day, they sat in their shelters, watching the dark walls of the castle, waiting for any movement. Their eyes were red from lack of sleep, and their patience was almost exhausted. But despite his fatigue, the Hydra Guild commander remained steadfast. He personally watched over the castle, not allowing his men to relax for a moment. His gaze was as cold as ice. He understood that any mistake could cost them everything. His companions were only interested in one thing: what reward would be offered for the head of the infected count? Gold, equipment, glory? All this was too tempting to think about caution, but the commander immediately tried to calm them down. He emphasized, "We are not finished yet. Our task is to monitor the castle and collect information. This is no less important than the battle itself." He added sternly that they could not afford to make even the slightest mistake. Any leak of information could ruin their plans. Professionalism is above all, he repeated like a mantra. And suddenly, the silence around was broken by a noise. A player ran out of the bushes, breaking branches. The Hydrivka people immediately became alert and grabbed their weapons. It was Kim's, a well-known member of the Red Bulls Guild. Seeing his old acquaintances, he smiled broadly and rushed towards them, greeting them happily as if nothing strange had happened. The Hydra commander, however, was shocked. He had not expected to encounter one of the Red Bulls in such a dangerous place. His heart clenched with suspicion. Why was Kim here? Kim himself explained that he had come to fight a boss who had supposedly appeared in the mountains. His level was quite high, so he was confident that he could help. Hearing this, the High Drive people just looked at each other. Their faces remained stony. They didn't even know what to answer him. Kim didn't understand why they were so serious. It seemed to him that they were exaggerating the danger too much. To him, it all looked like just another monster hunt. But as he was about to move on, the Hydra commander abruptly stopped him, almost grabbing his arm. He demanded that Kim return and not interfere in their business. But Kim wasn't even going to listen to him. He just laughed and waved his hand. "I know what I'm doing," he replied, and continued on into the mountains. Having moved a decent distance away, he raised his hand to his watch, a special communication interface, and quickly typed a message. He warned his commander that a Hydra commander was indeed on the mountain, and that the tip they had received had been confirmed. When this information was conveyed to Matador, the leader of the Red Bulls, he could not contain his joy. After all, this tip initially seemed like an ordinary divorce. It was given anonymously, for free, and it looked very suspicious. But now that the data was confirmed, they realized the opportunity was real. Although they still couldn't believe that someone would share such information for free. On the other hand, they knew full well that they were in no position to play on pride. If Hydra captured the infected Count, it would take everything away from them. The plot, the glory, the rewards. It was then that Kim proposed a risky plan. He could engage in battle with Hydra forces to buy some time for his allies. But the commander firmly refused. He explained that if this was indeed the castle of the infected Count, then the Hydra forces were only gathering. Now was not the time to waste soldiers. "We can't afford to lose a potential elite fighter at a time like this," he coldly concluded. His words made it clear to everyone that the real hunt was ahead, and it was just beginning. Kim walked confidently, confident that his guild, the Red Bulls, would do just fine without him. He didn't even notice something flash through the air behind him. The next moment, a shadow sprang from the darkness above him and struck him with all its might from above. Kim barely had time to react when the force of the blow crushed him to the ground. This sudden attack shocked the Matador so much that he forgot to breathe for a moment. "What the hell?" was all he managed to say. But in a second, everyone realized they weren't the only ones who had received a tip about the infected Count's location. They weren't the only hunters. Before them stood the Princess of the Thunder Hunters. Her eyes gleamed with cold fire, and in her hands shone a spear charged with electricity. She had clearly come here for the same purpose. Her intentions were harsh and direct. She demanded that Kim tell her everything he knew. Her voice was commanding, and even Kim felt a chill run down his spine. Meanwhile, Hyrkan was in a completely different place, continuing his training with his servants, skeletons, and a massive golem. He forced the golem to fight dangerous monsters again and again, to hone its skills in real-world conditions. Each battle was grueling. Although the golem grew stronger, it took a lot of damage, but every day his reactions became more precise. He not only hit, but also learned to take blows, defending his master. His ability to copy abilities was especially useful. Using Hyrkan' strength as an example, the golem gradually learned to employ new techniques, though its movements remained cumbersome. His speed was his weak point. In fast-paced combat, he often had no time to react, which irritated Hyrkan. The skeletons watched the training as if it were a spectacle in a movie theater, without interfering. But despite the intensive training, Hyrkan felt something strange. It was too quiet around him. He was sure he had sent out enough messages about the Count's whereabouts to have the guilds signed up for the event long ago, but there was still no response. His only hope was to force the game to complete the quest, even if he couldn't manage it himself. This meant only one thing. Someone, anyone, had to defeat the infected Count. If this boss were destroyed, the story chapter would automatically end, and his problems would temporarily disappear. The game was divided into numerous chapters. The first of them was called The Infected Count. As long as this boss remained alive, no one could move on. Hyrkan was well aware that he would not be able to defeat the Count on his own, especially not within the allotted time. But he didn't care who would do it. He just wanted someone to finish the quest and clear the way forward. It was for this reason that he sent out information to dozens of guilds, hoping that at least one of them would seize the opportunity. And suddenly, a message appeared on his interface screen. The official Hydra channel had started broadcasting. Hyrkanus didn't even stop training. The golem continued to practice his blows, crushing another monster. But within seconds, Hyrkanus fell to the ground. He had been hit while being distracted. The monster seized the moment and rushed to finish him off. Hyrkanus, gritting his teeth, struck the creature with all his strength right in the head. He didn't even look where he was hitting. The main thing was to get rid of the obstacle. He was too focused on the stream. Any movement on the screen now interested him more than the dangerous monster in front of him. Finally, he gathered his servants, and together they sat down to watch Hydra's live broadcast. The real show was beginning, on which the future of the game depended. At the beginning of the broadcast, the Hydra Guild appeared before the numerous viewers in all their glory. Their commander proudly greeted everyone and solemnly declared that they would be the first to be able to reveal the true identity of the infected Count and prove to the world their superiority over all other guilds. They announced their intention to launch a large-scale raid against this boss. Moreover, they announced that the date had already been clearly set, and this was not just a promise, but an official confirmation of their readiness for the decisive battle. Hyrkanus, at this point, was only praying in a whisper that the appointed date would be as late as possible. He hoped that he would have at least a month for additional preparation to solve his own problems. But his hopes were instantly dashed. It turned out that the date of the raid had been set just 3 days after this broadcast. It was much faster than Hyrkanus had expected, and the haste surprised him to the core. He was even momentarily confused, not knowing how to react now. After that, turning off the broadcast, he resumed training on monsters with his servants, trying to distract himself and at the same time prepare for the inevitable. However, one thing kept on his mind. 3 days was catastrophically short. He couldn't shake the feeling that Hydra's haste was connected to rumors about other guilds who also knew about the Count's whereabouts. But despite his own experiences, Hyrkanus understood that to know Hydra was to know their stubbornness. They had spent years of time and resources on the main plot. Their training, experience, and numerous battles gave reason to believe that their chances were indeed high. And if they really managed to defeat the Count, it would be the solution to a multitude of problems for Hyrkanus. He would no longer have to worry about time constraints and the forced search for a way out. However, the reality turned out to be completely different. When the raid began, the Hydra Guild suffered a crushing defeat. All of its members were knocked down one by one, as if swept away by a wave. Seeing this, Hyrkanus felt an incredible disappointment. He sincerely did not expect such an ending. It seemed as if fate was simply mocking him. He felt that his hopes had been cruelly trampled on again. Hyrkanus mentally rebuked them. If they were so eager to complete this quest as quickly as possible, they could at least prepare properly, instead of rushing into battle immediately after brief training. Realizing that he had overestimated their capabilities, he began to consider other options. He needed to look for new contenders who could see the matter through to the end, and it was at this moment that he received a new message. The Red Bulls had started their own live online broadcast. Hyrkanus was instantly filled with hope. He remembered that the commander of this guild was the well-known Matador, one of the most ambitious and courageous leaders. The location of the location where it all took place was soon confirmed. This meant only one thing. Hydra had indeed failed its raid, and now the Red Bulls had a chance to rewrite history in their favor. The Matador arrived at the scene in person and immediately asked his scouts about the situation. His face was serious and focused, as he understood who he would have to deal with. The scouts made it clear. They were facing an extremely dangerous enemy, so strong that even the mighty Hydra could not resist. This was not a boss that could be defeated by sheer numbers. The Red Bulls knew full well that their resources were far inferior to those of Hydra. The chances of victory seemed slim, but even that didn't dampen their enthusiasm. They made a courageous decision to accept this challenge. Even if the outcome is fatal, they will prove that they are worthy of fighting for the main plot. When the Matador made his speech, his voice was filled with steel and determination. His words so ignited the hearts of the players that they responded with loud shouts of support, ready to follow him even to the death. Hyrkanus was almost speechless at this moment. He couldn't believe that the Red Bulls were really ready to rush into battle right now. After all, even if they were strong guys, the danger was all too real. And suddenly, new words were heard off screen. Someone asked permission to join their raid as an ally, ready to fight side by side with the Matador. It turned out to be not just anyone, but the leader of the Thunder Hunters herself, one of the most respected and dangerous players in the entire game. The Thunder Queen Sire herself arrived at the scene. Her appearance stirred everyone. The atmosphere became tense to the point. Now events promised to become even more unpredictable. Hyrkan, expecting any development of events, came across a completely unexpected turn that disrupted his internal balance, like a bolt from the blue. What was strange was that, upon appearing on the battlefield, she decided to intervene and support them, violating all the laws of guild alliances. In the evening, the two guilds prepared for a decisive battle. The whispers of strategy mixed with the smell of metal and burning. The atmosphere hung with a heavy blanket of tension. The matador did not expect such a turn of events. His eyes widened in surprise, his heart beating faster than ever before. Even more incredible was that the Thunder Queen herself sought a meeting with him, her intentions remaining hidden behind the cold gleam of her eyes. He began to hesitate, suspecting that her appearance could mean the beginning of a war between the guilds, which was pressing upon him with an invisible hand. The news that a princess from another guild had recently beaten one of his subordinates added to the tension. But the situation proved to be tricky. Sira discovered that it was merely a greeting ritual, a kind of sign of respect between warriors, which contradicted the matador's original ideas. Without delay, she got down to business, the situation becoming tense, like a taut bowstring. Rumors that the matador had information about the infected count did not leave her indifferent, and her eyes shone with inner determination. The matador, trying to hide his understanding, pretended not to know what was being said. But the subtle tension in the air gave him away. Syria was aware that some representatives of the top guilds had received information about the Count's whereabouts, and this made her caution justified. They were far from the main quest plot, but only a fool could not understand that he was at the center of events, a magnet for fate. Oftador laughed, but even he couldn't say exactly who gave this hint. The shadow of uncertainty hung over everyone. The next question she asked was about whether he was confident the guild could handle the Hydra, and the silence after him wavered in the air. Even Matador doubted the strength of the allies. His experience suggested that unknown factors could always change the balance. They wanted to be the first, and while the Forcell raid was important, the Count remained the first story boss, incredibly difficult to defeat, and the chances only increased with joint action. Gamatador, however, sensed that the Queen had not come to boast of her successes or discuss the Hydra's chances. His instincts made him wary. At first, the Queen smiled, her smile light and mysterious, like a cool wind over an abyss. Suddenly, her hand crashed onto the table, the weapon hitting the wooden surface with a force that sent echoes through the room. She proposed joining forces in a raid on the Count. The prospect of a joint struggle sounded like a challenge to fate. She was even willing to concede the main blow, to let someone else take the glory of victory, demonstrating strategic wisdom. The Matador had been suspicious from the start, his experience telling him she wasn't being completely honest, but he remained alert. When it came to the fight itself, the tension turned to adrenaline, and every move weighed more than a word. She demonstrated remarkable negotiating skills, with persuasion and cunning intertwining, creating invisible threads of influence. The Count turned out to be the final boss of the first chapter of the main plot. His greatness and power put pressure on all participants. The Matador was aware of his incredible power. Defeating him required all resources, strength, and strategic ingenuity. There were many monsters around. They devoured and destroyed everything in their path, creating chaos and fear. They were already on the verge of exhaustion, their strength had almost left them, and their bodies were obediently obeying. They realized that there was no end in sight. An endless stream of dangers surrounded them from all sides. Someone jumped in front of the Queen, ready to become a shield and open the way forward. He decided to pave the way for her, pushing out her enemies so that it would be easier for her to advance. He asked to be killed, demonstrating his willingness to sacrifice himself for the sake of victory. Without wasting a second, the Queen rushed towards the boss, her movements quick, decisive, and precise. The boss was incredibly angry. The reaction to such impudent behavior filled him with anger. The Thunder Queen continued to attack, her blows precise and merciless, leaving the boss no room to retreat. She jumped high above the mountain to launch an attack from above, catching him by surprise and force. Already preparing for the decisive attack, the Queen felt that victory was close, that she had almost reached the final. Suddenly, the boss struck first, disrupting her rhythm and creating a new threat. In a moment, she was on his tentacles, turning the danger to her own advantage. The Matador shouted loudly, shocked by the unexpected turn of events and the Queen's courage. She silently hung on her tentacles, not saying a word, completely focused on the fight. Suddenly, tentacles began to fly in different directions, slicing through space and creating chaos for the boss. This was a Queen who seemed to cut her way through a crowd of enemies, demonstrating unquestionable determination. She was incredibly confident in herself and her abilities, every movement full of skill and control. She hit the main boss right in the face. The force of the attack was impressive and inevitable. Her blade traveled all over the boss's body, leaving wounds and demonstrating her absolute superiority. The matador couldn't believe what he was seeing, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and surprise. He became convinced that she was much more terrifying than he could have imagined, her strength exceeding all expectations. A message came that the Red Bulls and Thunder Hunters were able to defeat the Count, completing a dangerous quest. On the one hand, he was glad about this news because the war brought victory to any of the allies. He didn't care who exactly defeated the enemy. Only the completed victory was important. He was seriously set on the fact that this was the last boss who would be able to challenge the Queen. In any case, he was sure that in the end, he would emerge victorious. This battle greatly motivated him, reinforcing his sense of strength and the need to act decisively. The incredible Balkis Mountains towered above them, their peaks hiding secrets and dangers. The main character's name was Ji Hyun, and his in-game nickname was Hyrkan, a legendary warrior among the players. He was a War World player who was miraculously able to be reborn after death, receiving a second chance. He dreamed of becoming stronger in the game and taking revenge on those who deceived and betrayed him. One question haunted him, causing his thoughts to constantly return to him. Why do incredible adventures happen to him every day that change his life and test his skills? A few hours ago, they finally reached the right place, ready to enter a new phase of the adventure. They reached the blocked zone, the entrance to the Balkis Mountains. Silence and tension hung over them. This area remained closed until all conditions for opening were met. No further step without following the rules. Otherwise, it was impossible to get there, like a trap that guards itself. He already knew what to do to get there faster, thinking through every step, every trick. It was in these Balkis Mountains that the second chapter of the main quest, a new stage of the adventure, was to begin. As soon as the first chapter was completed, the passage opened automatically, as if behind the invisible scenes of the game. He was incredibly happy that, as he had predicted, he would be the first to arrive here. A feeling of victory warmed him. The skeletons nearby couldn't understand why he was so happy. Their eyes just stared blankly. He was certain that it was finally his time to act, that the moment he had been waiting for had arrived. As soon as he ran forward, he was surrounded by large, wild boars on all sides, creating a sense of being trapped. These were level 60 boars, fierce, furious monsters that hunted in groups and left no chance for the weak. And Hyrkan was only level 41. The feeling of inequality was growing, but he didn't stop. They continued to stare at each other, tension hanging in the air, ready to explode at any moment. We return to the present, when the boars began to chase Hyrkan and his skeletons, the roar of their growls echoing all around. Hyrkan could not understand what kind of bad luck this was, because just a few steps into the mountains, and he immediately came across wild boars. Someone might have guessed that this was a blocked area, opened unexpectedly. He could no longer waste time. The chances were small, but hope remained. He tried to think of something, ordered the skeletons to put on helmets and attack, or at least defend him, using all their resources. The boars were incredibly strong. There were many of them, and they roared loudly, threatening destruction. In just 1 second, they destroyed all the approaching skeletons, leaving no survivors. The skeleton warriors were completely defeated, suffering numerous injuries, and disappearing from the battlefield. But Hyrkan smiled. His plans worked. Even at the most critical moment, he sent the curse of Lenny through the skeletons on the boars, causing the enemies to temporarily lose control. Thanks to this spell, they could not move for even 5 seconds, which gave them the necessary time to act. This was enough to take out a weapon and launch an attack, changing the course of the battle in their favor. He decided that the boars should pay for breaking his skeletons. Every blow mattered. Suddenly, a banana skin appeared under his feet, an imperceptible trap waiting for him. He tripped and fell to the ground, instantly finding himself in an unforeseen situation. He couldn't understand where the banana skin had come from. A feeling of entrapment hung in the air. Behind him, he heard loud laughter mocking him, shattering his confidence with a cold ringing. It was a level 50 armored ape, a monster that liked to mock the weaker ones, demonstrating its superiority. Hyrkan quickly realized that the monkey develops very quickly and leaves no chance to the unprepared. While he was screaming, the curse effect ended, and the monkey was free to attack. He understood that the situation was very bad, and he did not know what to do in such a difficult trap. Suddenly, as if from the sky, an arrow began to fly, piercing the air with incredible speed. In an instant, she struck the boar, demonstrating precision and strength that seemed superhuman. Hyrkan could not understand where these arrows were coming from, or why there were so many of them. His eyes widened in surprise. He looked at this spectacular phenomenon and could not understand where such a force came from, which changed the course of the battle. Someone with incredible skill was sending arrows to a point that surpassed all human capabilities. The unknown person began to wonder if everything was okay with Hyrkan. carefully observing his actions. Looking back, he saw the silhouette of a man with a bow and arrows standing calmly in the distance, ready for battle. Meanwhile, life was bustling in Zuri Castle, with players completing quests and planning their next steps. One of the players noticed the newcomer. His appearance stood out among the others. It was a player in full white mamba armor, which surprised everyone, as the suit was extremely expensive. They were curious about who he was, because no one had seen him in this world before. After a moment, he began to speak, asking if the person who was leaking information to the guilds had been found. Michelle didn't know who it was, her eyes shining with surprise and doubt. It was clear that they were talking about a well-known person of the Count who had voluntarily shared information for free. They assumed it could be Mask Haho, but he only uploaded regular hunting videos. It couldn't be that a newcomer who had only just started going through the main storyline was behind all of this. After that, Michelle asked who he was helping now, and he went to support the guild in the cleanup. She had to focus on her helper's work and find the person they were looking for, using all resources. They didn't even know who he was, but he still had to respond to the challenges of the situation. In his opinion, he had upset the balance of this world, and this required correction. Meanwhile, it was incredibly quiet on Mount Balkus, only the wind whispering among the rocks. Hyrkan began to tell that he was a student of the alchemist, full of knowledge and determination. He was glad that he was lucky enough to meet Mavin, because he never thought he would encounter him in person. Mawan was a key NPC in the second chapter of the main storyline, on whom the further fate of the adventure depended. Although he had plenty of experience and was even once a fencing student of the prince, he had been expelled in the past due to an accident. After that, he became captain of the Rangers defending the Balkus Mountains, taking responsibility for the security of the area. He was the same NPC that Hyrkan was counting on meeting, as it would have saved him a lot of time searching. Mavoon didn't know what exactly had brought him here, but he understood that the place around him was completely filled with monsters. He believed that Hyrkan should return to where he came from before something worse happened to him. Hyrkan declared that the infected player was already dead, and it was useless to try. He didn't need to spend all his strength to get what he wanted, because he knew he would find a better way by the second chapter. He wanted to find out why his investigation had led him here, and wondered if Mawan knew anything about it. He had only one thought. He had no evidence, and this created additional tension. He offered to help collect all the necessary evidence. Working together seemed the only way out. After that, Hyrkan received 2 rare titles at once, which emphasized his growth in the game. The task was to study all the monsters in this area, which was the beginning of a new stage of the adventure. The hunt for monsters began, and the surrounding area turned into a testing ground. Hyrkan wanted to simultaneously improve his level and rest, combining training with recovery. He decided to leave high-level monsters like wild boars and bear warriors for later, starting with simpler enemies. After that, a thought flashed through his mind that made his heart beat faster. He immediately remembered that monkey that had mocked him earlier, and decided it was time to take revenge. Hyrkan headed into the forest towards this monkey, his steps cautious but determined. He was constantly falling down, moving through difficult terrain, and felt danger at every step. It was not only Hyrkan, but also the last participants of this quest, who also came to complete it. It is unknown whether they will survive. The monkey continued to mock the newcomers, laughing at their every mistake. She laughed out loud of each of them, frightening and demoralizing at the same time. Hyrkan saw the next victim, ready to fall under her ridicule. He was already preparing to throw banana skins, planning a counterattack. As soon as he swung, he felt a strange presence behind him, which made his heart beat faster. Turning around, he saw Hyrkan behind him, watching and preparing to intervene. Hyrkan threatened to take revenge for everything the monkey had done to him, his rage evident. In all his fury, he began to swing at the monkey, each blow carrying the force of revenge. The monkey could easily dodge each attack, demonstrating agility and skill. Still, she continued to mock him, her laughter sounding like a challenge and a provocation at the same time. Hyrkan continued to attack the monkey, each movement precise and decisive, as in a well-practiced technique. Despite all his efforts, he couldn't land even a single blow, which added to the irritation and tension. This annoyed him a lot because he was fast, but his opponent was also interfering with his every move. In such a situation, he decided to use one of the special techniques that could change the course of the battle. He aims his sword at the monkey like an arrow, choosing the point of impact with maximum precision. Then he threw it with all his strength, moving decisively and confidently. The monkey did not expect such speed from the sword. Its reaction was late. The blow sent shivers down her body. The tension increased, and she felt the dangerous power of her opponent. She didn't even have time to dodge. All her attention was captured by the attack. The monkey's cloak caught on the sword that was stuck in the tree, which momentarily changed the position of both of them. Despite this, she still laughed loudly, without losing her cheek and confidence. Hyrkan waved his hand and began to call the sword towards him, using his weapon control. It was just a distraction, after which he activated the Holm with the copy mode ability. He hit the monkey with all his strength, concentrating his energy into a decisive blow. A large pile of dust rose throughout the forest, obscuring the battlefield from prying eyes. A message came that he had been named one of the first to defeat an armored ape, marking his achievement. Hyrkan was incredibly happy with the new achievement and thought that now they could defeat other monkeys. Meanwhile, a conference was taking place where the press took photographs of those who had defeated the Count, celebrating their success. Everyone shouted loudly, showing the camera their victorious emotions and joy for their achievements. They congratulated Matador and Siri on their successful raid on the first chapter boss, emphasizing teamwork. After that, the Thunder Queen was asked to say a few words to express her own opinion. She noted that they were lucky, and that they would continue to work hard to show even better results in the future. After the conference, Syria was incredibly angry, her emotions boiling over the failures and shortcomings of her allies. The princess began to praise the queen, noting that she was the best, and that in that battle they had almost suffered defeat, which could have been the last. At the last moment, the queen was able to break forward and deal with the Count on her own, showing extraordinary strength and strategic thinking. She understood perfectly well that nothing would have worked if there weren't Red Bulls, allies who backed up the team. She also knew that for such a long and difficult battle, they only needed one player capable of changing the course of the battle. For an undisputed advantage, they needed Hyrkan' skills, his mastery, and strategic thinking. After that, she ordered the princess to contact Hatch to arrange further action and get support. She had only one matter to deal with him, a specific and important one that could change the course of events. Meanwhile, on the mountain, Hyrkan continued to train with the skeletons, improving their abilities and his own skills. They were increasing their ranks, but the durability of the skeletons' charges had dropped to 0, which added to the difficulty of training. Hyrkan was disappointed that their weapons had reached their limit and could no longer be of any use. The problem was also that he had absolutely no money to repair the equipment. Therefore, there was only one option left: to mine the gems needed to craft new items. Monster gems were crystals that could drop from monsters and grant weapons additional effects. These gems were used to craft items, and their properties depended on the monster they dropped from, providing unique bonuses. The gems that dropped from armored apes were perfect for crafting strong and rare gear. Hyrkan wanted to start making the tool immediately, having planned every stage of the craft. He needed even more of these monkeys to collect enough gems for new equipment. 9 hours passed, and he realized that not a single gem had fallen from them, even after many victories. Although he had defeated numerous monkeys, not a single gem had yet appeared, which greatly saddened him. He asked for at least one pebble, even the smallest one, hoping for luck. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him, which made him turn quickly. It was a knight in red armor, and he realized that before him was Mask Ho-Ho, a famous gambler. Hyrkan could not immediately understand who he was, so unexpected was his appearance. The knight was in the most expensive set of dragon armor, which emphasized his power and status. He also had the Orc hero's sword on him, and his level was obviously above at least 70. Hyrkan hoped he wasn't one of the city's players, who often showed up just for the noise. But most likely, he was just that kind of player, dangerous and ambitious. The knight in red armor introduced himself. His name was Quixote, confident and demonstrative. He began to walk in circles around Hyrkan, drawing attention to himself and demonstrating his courage. After that, he challenged him to a duel, testing Hyrkan' strength and skills. He had heard that Hyrkan was quite popular among players right now, which made his victory over him even more important. This meant that if Quixote defeated Hyrkan, he himself would become even more popular and famous in the game world. Hyrkan concluded that this was just an ordinary usurper who was seeking attention and glory for himself. He himself was not in the mood to prove anything to anyone. His calmness and concentration were more important than external ambitions. After that, the knight in red armor promised 5,000 gold if Hyrkan agreed to fight him. Hyrkan immediately stopped, hesitating for a moment, considering the proposal. Then he walked towards him with a confident, determined gait and agreed to a duel, demonstrating courage and readiness. The knight in red armor was called Quixote, and his name had already earned respect among the players. He was an incredible hero of justice, known for his courage and ability to resolve difficult situations. Thanks to his talent, he won the favor of all the players who watched his actions and victories. He was the same hero who always found himself in the spotlight when it came to big events in the game. But that was the case, at least before. Now the situation was changing, and he felt the competition. He could not win the Lord's favor, even by demonstrating his skills. No one paid attention to him because everyone was discussing the latest videos of Mask Ho-Ho. His name wasn't mentioned in all the discussions, as Musk's new videos constantly became the center of attention. Hearing the constant discussions, he decided to use it to his advantage and act strategically. At first, he posted videos at the same time as Musk, trying to get into trends and increase his own popularity. This brought him some effect, but the popularity remained limited and did not match his ambitions. He didn't understand the reason for his lower popularity, because his level was much lower and his equipment was worse. Raising his eyes upward, he could not understand where he was, for he ran wherever his eyes looked, without a clear reference point. Suddenly, he noticed the same ho-ho mask in front of him, which caused him unexpected emotions. Maska's voice laughed throughout the forest, and this laughter echoed through the trees, making the heart beat faster. The mask hid, watching him, and it seemed to him that this was happening in the blind city itself. After that, Hyrkan came to a realization and a clear idea about his next steps. He had an idea, or rather a desire, to post a video of him beating Musk to show off his own strength. He was sure that in this case, he would be able to take all the glory for himself, to become the center of attention. Then he decided to go to extreme measures to prove his determination and skill. Stripping down to his bare body, he decided to fight as honestly as possible, demonstrating his own strength without additional means. He did it sincerely, but Hyrkan could not understand why he took such a step, because it was risky and unexpected. He just heard that his weapon was broken, so he couldn't attack at full strength, limiting his actions. He himself cherished justice and wanted to fight honestly, one-on-one, so that no one would say that victory was achieved thanks to equipment. After that, he ordered him to use all his strength without holding back. The knight abruptly began to attack him, his movements quick and precise, aimed for maximum effect. Hyrkan was disgusted to even touch him because of his appearance, but at the same time, he easily dodged attacks. No matter how much the knight continued to attack, Hyrkan easily dodged, demonstrating his agility and experience. The knight asked him not to dodge and to fight honestly, without distracting tricks, to show true strength. Hyrkan believed that fighting in his underpants was normal, and that everything a knight did also fell within the framework of an honest duel. This angered the knight in red armor, and he decided to use his skill. His skill was called Stimulator, which briefly increased the speed and strength of movements. This greatly alarmed Hyrkan, for the effect was immediate and significant. The knight struck with all his strength, but Hyrkan was able to defend himself, demonstrating reflexes and control. After such a strong blow, the knight flew several meters away, losing his balance. Hyrkan couldn't immediately understand what had happened, because the warrior-class stimulator increased his speed and movement power for a second. Although he looked ordinary, the knight's level was much higher, making him a dangerous opponent. Hyrkan realized that a direct confrontation would leave him no chance of victory. In that case, he decided to use his trump card, a cunning and unexpected plan. He stood and began to tighten his things, preparing for a full-force battle. The knight in red armor was glad that Hyrkan was finally serious about the duel. He began to attack first, demonstrating strength and determination. Once again, the knight activated the stimulator skill, giving himself an advantage in speed and power. The moment he approached Hyrkan, dirt flew into his face, unexpected and irritating. The knight could not understand why the dirt, because it disrupted his concentration. Hyrkan seized this moment and threw it with all his strength in the other direction, gaining the upper hand. He said that if a knight's stats were higher, he should be stronger, but that didn't guarantee victory. After all, Hyrkan used excellence in mastery, relying on skill, experience, and accuracy, not just level or equipment. He punched the red knight in the face with all his strength, showing complete determination and skill. The knight flew a few meters in the other direction, crashing into the trees and losing his balance. He couldn't believe it was called skill, because Hyrkan strength and precision exceeded all expectations. Hyrkan was certain that the red knight had lost, for the concepts of victory and defeat did not concern him at all. After that, he activated his new skill, Every Plate, ready for the next stage of the battle. He also decided to use a fragment of armored monkey skin to enhance his attacks. His arms began to move like chains, and Hyrkan used the amplification from the armor fragment, making his blows even more powerful. The knight had not expected such a turn of events, and his body was sweating from tension and fear. He understood that if he missed a blow now, he would definitely be destroyed. The knight tried to stop Hyrkan by defending himself, but in vain, for his opponent's skill was impeccable. With tears in his eyes, he declared that he was surrendering, admitting defeat. Hyrkan struck anyway, demonstrating determination and strength, but it was a symbolic gesture. He struck not the knight, but the tree, to show his own power and to warn against reckless attacks. The force of the impact was so great that the tree collapsed, and a huge crater formed behind the knight. The knight was so scared that he even forgot that he was inside the game, feeling real fear. Hyrkan at this moment awaited his reward, knowing that he had fully deserved it. This feeling was much better than losing a few days of gameplay due to a character dying. The Red Knight took off his mask, and blood flowed from his nose, for he considered Hyrkanus to be incredibly strong. He couldn't believe his eyes that he had met such a strong opponent in the game. After that, he declared that he fully admitted defeat and gave Hyrkanus the gold he had promised for the duel. Additionally, he gave Hyrkanus his sword as a symbol of recognition and respect. When Hyrkanus took it in his arms, he realized that it was the sword of an orc hero, a rare and powerful artifact. The sword added 66 to strength and stamina and also ignored enemy armor, making it extremely valuable even at auction. Hyrkanus did not understand why he was being given such a rare gift, but the Red Knight simply showed a sign of sincere gratitude and respect. He admitted that he was blinded by his thirst for fame, completely forgetting the need to become stronger himself. And this is what made him realize his own mistakes. Then he asked to take the sword because it was worthy of his possession and the strength he had gained in battle. He also acknowledged that the knight was worthy of being considered his brother in the game. Hyrkanus thought this reason was somewhat silly, but he understood that there was something more behind it. It didn't change the fact that he thought the knight was a bit stupid, but he sensed potential and strength in him. After that, Hyrkanus punched him in the stomach with all his strength, demonstrating control and precision. He ordered the skeletons to grab the knight and tie him to a tree, showing a symbolic victory. Throughout the forest, only the Red Knight's loud cry could be heard, indicating his defeat and sense of respect. The knight promised that he would return when he was worthy of calling Hyrkanus his brother. He looked forward to the next meeting, promising himself to become stronger and more worthy. Hyrkanus smiled sincerely, observing this moment of mutual recognition. Even though he thought he was a complete jerk, he praised him for his desperate dedication to the game and his courage. Hyrkanus got an awesome sword, which meant he no longer had to hunt armored apes. This sword should have been enough for him to confidently move on to the next task. After that, he stopped abruptly, contemplating the next steps in his development. He suggested that the skeletons finish off a few more armored monkeys, hoping that at least one gem would fall out of them. It was a kind of addiction to excitement, and the skeletons tried to stop it, warning of its futility. But now he had the sword of an orc hero, extremely rare and valuable, which made any risks justified. After that, he returned to the mountain, showing cards about completing tasks and his achievements. It listed 950 armored monkeys, 104 saber-toothed wolves, and 76 venomous lizards. It was an excellent job for a first time, a testament to Hyrkanus' efficiency and perseverance. This made the investigation go very smoothly, and he felt he was moving in the right direction. After that, he wondered what happened to Ogre Khan and his face, following further events in the game. Hyrkanus simply understood what he would spend his earned money on, planning his next steps. But his next mission was extremely dangerous, and he was aware of the risk. A warrior bear was spotted near a mountain peak. This monster was huge, about 4 meters tall, equipped with armor that resembled human armor. If he can find out where they're getting the ammunition from, it will help the investigation a lot. Hyrkanus realized that, in other words, he needed to kill one of them and bring his belongings as proof. But it was almost impossible to cope on your own, because even experienced rangers had a hard time doing it. However, Hyrkanus already knew how to defeat them and developed a plan. He set off and was almost at the place where he would meet the monster. Together with the skeleton, he stopped abruptly, assessing the situation and possible threats. Hyrkanus declared that it was time to have a little fun and test his strength. He opened an auction window where you could compete for slots with other users. At his current level, this was the best option, and he chose the Snake Skeleton set. He bought a set consisting of bracers, boots, and gloves to improve his equipment. After that, a message came that mana consumption is reduced by 10% when the equipment is fully worn. Hyrkanus was incredibly pleased and could barely hold back his laughter with joy. He was happy because he had a real taste of money, and with the remaining funds, he bought all the available skill books for his level. Although his level was still not equal to that of the Bear Warrior, with this set, he was confident in his strength. The skeletons began poking him on the shoulder, reminding him that they too needed to acquire armor and equipment. Hyrkanus began to look at what might be suitable for the skeletons, but received a message that there was not enough money. He was shocked, because he had spent everything he had and had no resources left. Upon returning, he awkwardly informed the skeletons of the situation. They immediately became angry with him, grumbling and threatening consequences. While he was trying to justify himself, large wild boars appeared behind him, ready to attack. The skeletons immediately realized that if they started hunting these boars, they could make money. Hyrkanus was pleased with the appearance of the boars, because this was exactly the moment when they were needed. Several hours passed after their battle. Only the last surviving boar remained. The skeletons had no intention of sparing even him. Hyrkanus did not understand why they were dragging their feet, and promised to buy them new equipment on the way. But the skeletons didn't have time to do anything when an unknown person appeared behind them and killed the boar. Hyrkanus turned around and tried to understand who had done it. They asked who Hyrkanus was and why he was a hunter here without permission. After all, this closed area belonged to the Apollo Guild. guild. Hyrkanus realized that this was another batch of problems. The three guys introduced themselves as the big trio of the Apollo Guild. At first, Hyrkanus just looked at them and smiled. In a moment, he attacked them all. After that, he asked me not to get involved in such complicated matters with my little skills. He didn't understand if he was a magnet for all the bad boys, and he already wanted to go to the priest. Realizing that they were only wasting time, they and the skeletons moved forward. They didn't understand how he dared to offend any of their guild members. After that, they signaled to one of their leaders. They reported that someone had attacked them, and even heard the name of the perpetrator. With this report, they came to the main point. He ordered Hyrkanus to be brought at any cost. After all, he had to pay for disrespect. Meanwhile, Hyrkanus moved forward. After a while, he found himself in the zone of the glorious warrior bear. He ordered the skeletons to move forward. The skeletons were just bragging about their new gear. Hyrkanus began to scold them so that they would not boast too much. By this time, they were already level 70 Phase 3 warrior bear hunters, so preparation for battle was necessary. Once he can defeat him, they will leave the top 30 guilds as part of the main quest. They had no chance of losing. They were required to do everything the way they practiced. After that, they heard loud footsteps behind them. A bear warrior appeared before them with a fierce mana. Hyrkanus used his watch with a smile. He put on all the gear he had. Full of determination, he was ready to take on this major quest on his own. Meanwhile, Michelle arrived at Mount Balkis. She was looking for Haha's mask and hoped to find it here. She stopped abruptly, not understanding why she had to listen to orders. She was also an important person in the guild. Not only that, it was also a punishment for disobedience. She didn't understand that it was a crime. Suddenly, a level 65 wild boar king appeared behind her. She directed a large amount of fire from her weapon at him. After that, she moved forward, leaving the boar to burn. She was thinking of getting away from the Thunder Hunters. She begged for the mask of Haha to appear. This incredible woman was ranked 5th in the magic rankings. Meanwhile, Hyrkanus himself began to fight the giant bear monster. He remembered that when they went with the guild members to fight this beast in their past life, it took them 6 tries to defeat it. He understood that if he dared, someone would definitely take over the lead in the main quest. To effectively wound a warrior bear, it was necessary to first knock down its armor and strike accurately at its joints. Hyrkanus was confident in himself, because for this, he had learned new skills. He ordered the skeletons to attack together at his signal. He decided to use his new passive skill, muscle modification. Hyrkanus began to attack the bear, but unexpectedly, even for himself, he flew over it. He couldn't understand what was happening and tried to stop the skill. The skeletons, along with the monster, watched this. In an instant, all the skeleton warriors were destroyed by the monster's critical strike. A message opened about a muscle modification that made legs stronger and increased jumping power and speed. Hyrkanus, looking at the circumstances, came up with a plan in his head. He decided to use his speed to power up his punch. Without calculating the force, he slammed his whole body into the monster. The monster thought he was just mocking him. Bumping into the bear, he felt its soft fur. With all his strength, he pushed away from the bear and crashed into the wall. He realized that this modification was too strong for him and was not yet under control. Hyrkanus took a deep breath. However, he managed to at least break the armor on one side. But he considered it nothing, because the skill seemed useless. He understood that he would not be able to hit exactly the right spot. While he was thinking, the bear had already begun to attack. Hyrkanus was not confused, and jumped at full speed in the other direction, dodging the blow. He decided to use a bone bomb, which causes a magical disruption. He threw it at the bear with all his strength, and there was a big explosion. This had no effect on the bear, and he began to attack the gherkin. Hyrkanus realized that he couldn't be taken by simple damage. He decided to activate his skeleton warriors with mana. I wanted to deal with the bear, as a necromancer would. The skeletons looked at him in disbelief, but Hyrkanus assured them that this time everything would work out. He began to summon his golem. The golem crawled out of the ground. He sharply attacked the bear and began to crush it with his mass. The bear hit the golem with all its strength. Thus, he fell into Hyrkanus' trap. Hyrkanus used the golem as a trap and strengthened its body with a fragment of armor. He ordered the skeletons to attack the bear. The skeletons began to attack him all at once. They struck him with their swords with all their might. The bear began to lose his temper, but Hyrkanus ordered him to wait a while. He still had a trump card up his sleeve. He began to fire fireballs at the bear. Hyrkanus at first simply watched silently. Then he began shouting at his skeleton mage to follow orders. The warrior bear used his battle cry and recovered 50% health. After that, he rushed to attack Hyrkanus. Hyrkanus jumped in the other direction and realized that strategy would not help here. Smiling slyly, he decided to crush the monster with more skeletons. There was a big skeleton boom. The skeletons were sad and angry with Hyrkanus. The battle between Hyrkanus and the monster bear began. The battle lasted several minutes. The bear warrior was killed, and experience points were gained. The ranger's task was completed, and Hyrkanus received many rewards. He was pleased with himself because he had destroyed the beast that had trampled his entire guild into regression in his past life. Hyrkanus was incredibly proud of himself. He went down to the skeletons and praised them, then stated that they would return to Mavan with a report and take the next quest. He proudly announced that the hunt for the warrior bear was complete. The skeletons believed the battle was unfair, but Hyrkanus believed that in a fair fight, they would only become fertilizer 6 times over. At that time, Michelle arrived at the Western Tavern in the Balkis Mountains. She sat there, listening to the other players laughing loudly. She wanted to rest in a peaceful atmosphere, but she couldn't. She was tormented by one problem. Not only could she not rest, but she also could not find Haho's mask. Every day she went around every inch of the mountains, but after Hyrkan's recent videos, it was full of people, which made the search much more difficult. She really wanted to go back, but she was worried that she would be severely punished for everything. She didn't understand what Ciri was counting on when she sent her to look for the mask alone. Annoyed, Michelle began to curse the Thunder Hunters. At this moment, she received a call from Mistress Ciri. She picked up the phone and shouted loudly to the entire tavern. She began to excuse herself with her hands, explaining that she had been diligently looking for a mask, but Ciri only thanked her for her hard work. This surprised Michelle a lot because Ciri had never done anything like this before. Ciri realized that she was putting a lot of pressure on Michelle, because searching the mountains every day was very difficult even for her. Ciri's words made Michelle forget about her resentment and anger at everyone around her. She hoped to return home, but Ciri stopped her. Ciri sent Hachi to help her, and at that moment, a large explosion occurred in the tavern. A moment later, a large hole appeared in the wall behind Michelle. Ciri ordered Michelle to work with Haho to find the Haho mask. At this moment, everyone turned their attention to a little girl who had entered the tavern through a hole in the wall. It was Hahi, the Thunder Princess of the Thunder Hunters Guild. Michelle sweated and started to get nervous, realizing she was in big trouble. At that moment, she realized she had no choice and screamed to the top of the mountain. At that time, Hyrkanus stood on the top of the mountain and watched over the city. He noticed that the city had become very crowded, apparently due to the continuation of the main quest. There was no time to think, because we had to hurry to Mavan. He started jumping from one point to another to get there faster. While doing so, he saw 3 young men jumping towards him. Their faces seemed familiar. Hyrkanus remembered that they looked like those he had once taught, and thought they had come for revenge. He was ready to take the hit, but they jumped over him, ignoring him. Then they started screaming loudly, asking for help. Hyrkanus thought they were talking about him, but did nothing. Suddenly, these 3 boys were wounded and fell to the ground. Those who struck them considered asking for help from the enemy shameful. Hyrkanus turned around and saw Michelle and Hachi in front of him. Without recognizing their faces, he noticed the badges on their clothing that indicated their status as hunters. While Hyrkanus was trying to understand what was happening, Hahi pointed her sword at him. She wondered if he was a Haho mask. Hahi was the top 2 in the Thunder Hunters, known as the Thunder Princess. Psychotic. She was hysterical, ready to do Ciri's bidding without a doubt. Michelle was a top 3 Thunder Hunter, known as Ballista. She was the one from whom Hyrkanus had repeatedly fled, even in his past life. Their paths crossed again, and he couldn't believe it had happened. If they were looking for Haho's mask, it meant they wanted to recruit him to their guild. If he could, he would have knocked them both out, but that was impossible right now. He decided to pretend he knew nothing about Kahu's mask. After all, they had no evidence, and they couldn't do anything then. However, Hahi approached him in a second, sensing that he was lying to her. After all, it was strange to Hahi that he knew anything about Haho's mask while he was in the mountains. For her, it was unbelievable. The cloak he wore was the same as Haho's mask, and she assumed it was him. Michelle began to stop her from making assumptions without evidence. She scolded her, but not only because of that. She was angry because Hahi had destroyed the entire tavern, hurt many people unnecessarily, and she didn't know how to pay for it all now. After all, they had a famous guild, and it was unlikely that they would be able to avoid punishment. She started apologizing to people before the guild's reputation was damaged. Gritting her teeth, Hahi apologized and walked away. Michelle didn't understand why she had this attitude towards people, but they sincerely apologized and the girls left together. Hyrkanus calmed down because at least they had left, and he had fewer problems. As soon as he calmed down, he didn't notice the quick punch to the face. It was a blow with incredible force. Hyrkanus flew a few meters to the side. Michelle didn't understand what he was doing, and Hahi thought he would be able to dodge. For Hyrkanus, this was unacceptable, to just attack a player like that. He believed that an attack without permission was unacceptable. Michelle and Hahi tensed. Hyrkan only stated that he would file an official complaint against them in the game. He decided to write about it on his blog. The Thunder Hunters are a vicious guild that attacks newcomers for fun. Michelle tried to stop him and even offered money. Hyrkan replied that this time he was standing his ground, and Michelle thanked him. She took Hahi's hand and they walked away. To be honest, for Hyrkan, it was the best thing he could do at that moment. He should not draw attention to himself now and just bide his time. At that time, Michelle felt like a princess. She didn't understand why she always caused trouble, and that in a large guild it was important to maintain a reputation. She found it strange that Hyrkan didn't dodge. Players instinctively avoid blows. She noticed something strange in this blow, namely, his face just before the blow. She immediately suspected that something was wrong with him. At that time, Hyrkan headed to the mountains to deliver a completely new armored bear. Mavoon was surprised, but thanked him. If it weren't for Hyrkan, a lot of bad things would have happened. Hyrkan was very worried, because any delay could give the guilds a chance to overtake him. Mavoon took out a chest with a reward. He told Hyrkan to choose one thing from the chest. There were maps of dungeons and monsters found while working in the Balkis Mountains. One thing occurred to Hyrkan. Most likely, there was a treasure map there. It marked a dungeon where you can get many rewards. Manhwa asked him to fulfill another request. A lot of armored monsters have been appearing in the Balkis Mountains recently, and he was asked to investigate. Hyrkan wondered where exactly this place was. It was the Parung Forest. When he wanted to object, he realized that he had no other choice. He took a deep breath and walked away from the tavern. Parung Forest was a zone for level 90 players, and it needed to be leveled up again. He remembered Sura Canyon and thought it was a perfect place to hunt in its current state. After all, he coped with the armored bear, which means that other monsters will not cause him any difficulties. At first, he was very motivated, but then he suddenly froze in place because the matador appeared before him. At that time, Michelle called Madame Siri with tears in her eyes. She said she couldn't do it anymore, but Siri, without even listening, started thanking them for their hard work. Michelle cried again when she learned that the Red Bulls had already taken Sura Canyon, and thought that they too might as well focus on the main quest. She didn't understand why she would run after a boy who clearly had no intention of joining their guild and seemed to pay no attention to their orders or requests. After that, Queen Sire gave a new, more specific order: to abandon the search for the Haho mask and focus entirely on completing the main quest, because the future position of the guild and its reputation among all other large associations depended on it. After this conversation, the participants ended the conversation, exchanged final instructions, and went to their places, trying to make sense of the information they had received. Queen Sire fell onto the heavy leather sofa and took a deep, heavy breath, feeling tired not only physically but also morally, because she realized that the stronger guild members would sooner or later meet anyway, and conflict was inevitable. She was curious and at the same time worried how long the Haho mask would be able to avoid meeting the guild, because his endurance and cunning made him an extremely dangerous opponent. Meanwhile, Hyrkan continued to actively develop his combat skills, improve his tactics, and test new passive and active abilities, seeking to prepare for the even more difficult battles that lay ahead. A level 75 goat suddenly appeared before him, huge and aggressive, with dark fur streaked with fiery veins, glowing with red light from the magic that was embedded in its body. Together with the skeletons, Hyrkan was able to easily defeat this monster, applying the new skills and tactics he had developed over the past days and nights. As he battled, he gained experience, and his skeletons became increasingly effective, honing their coordination and synchronization of attacks, making them even more deadly on the battlefield. Thanks to this, Hyrkan not only increased his level, but also gained additional rewards that helped him level up his skills faster and prepare for the next quests. After the battle ended, Hyrkan level rose to 62, significantly increasing his strength, endurance, and confidence in his own abilities. All his actions were watched by numerous fans who could not hide their admiration for his achievements, watching him single-handedly cope with dangerous monsters and complete difficult tasks. They considered him extremely strong and tried to attract his attention, hoping to receive confirmation of their affection and admiration with at least one glance. But Hyrkan had no time to consider this. The constant stream of fans and outside observers only irritated him, as it distracted him from his main goal: developing his skills and preparing for the next dangerous task. He sharply accelerated his movement along with the skeletons, trying to move away from the crowd and avoid unnecessary attention, realizing that every second was worth its weight in gold for the implementation of his plans. However, from all sides they shouted at him and tried to stop him, but Hyrkan did not react, moving on and focusing only on strategy and calculations that could provide him with an advantage in the future. After the video of the fight against the warrior bear, he had many new fans who followed him, trying in any way to attract his attention and achieve interaction. but Hyrkan was focused only on the financial reward and preparation for the next quest. The video with the warrior bear became popular, received a large number of views and comments, but this did not distract Hyrkan from his main goal, because it was important for him to know how much he would receive in reward for his success. With fame came problems. No matter where he went, he was constantly harassed by players, new and old enemies, making it difficult to train and complete tasks. He could not concentrate on training and hunting because of the constant pressure from others and the need to move forward quickly. Then the Haho Mask changed tactics. They decided to retreat to Sura Canyon, where there were high-level monsters, to avoid persecution by fans and those who could hinder Hyrkanus' development. Raising his head, he saw the matador in front of him. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly, along with the skeletons, not expecting his appearance. The matador greeted him with a smile and a calm voice, which further confused Hyrkanus. Hyrkanus could not understand where the matador had appeared before him again, and how he had managed to get to this place so quickly. The matador remembered that Hyrkanus was at the rookie location, and noted that he was uncomfortable because Hyrkanus ran away without saying a word about his decision. He noticed that Hyrkan had improved his level very quickly. In a few months, the novice had become strong enough to reach the Sura Canyon on his own. Hyrkanus did not answer the matador's question, who asked what brought him here and why this particular place was suitable for a ranker of this level. The matador noted that the Red Bulls had taken control of Sura Canyon the day before to justify their presence near the main quest location. He had hoped to meet the Haho Mask here, as he had seen a video of Hyrkanus participating in the raid on the Bear Warrior, and assumed he was somewhere in this area, so he often hung out here. The matador asked who could be hiding behind the Haho Mask, but Hyrkanus, without listening to the end, abruptly said goodbye and ran on with the skeletons. They ran for several kilometers, trying to outrun all pursuers, staying calm and concealing their whereabouts. Hyrkanus didn't understand why everyone was so against him. First Chisolian, then Matador, and then 2 guilds from the top 30 were already pursuing him. He realized that at this pace, he wouldn't even be able to level up to complete the quest, and didn't know where to go next, because there wasn't a suitable location nearby for training and fighting. Then he remembered the map Manhwa had given him, and decided to check it again. If his memory served him right, there must have been a rare dungeon somewhere nearby. Hyrkanus took out a map from his backpack and began to examine it carefully, trying to find the exact location of this dungeon. He found a mark on the map, a place hidden under a waterfall, difficult to access and rare, but potentially extremely profitable for rewards and resources. He realized that getting to this dungeon would be very difficult, requiring endurance and proper timing, but the risk could fully pay off. Together with the skeletons, Hyrkanus headed deeper into the waterfall, slowly making his way through the streams of water and rocks, carefully assessing each step. If the map was accurate, then it was under the waterfall that the entrance to the hiding place he had been searching for so long was located. Hyrkanus really hoped that he would have enough air, strength, and patience to reach this place and began exploring the dungeon. Suddenly, he noticed a narrow opening in the wall of the waterfall that looked like a tunnel. This meant he had almost reached his goal. The last 5 seconds of the struggle for air were critical, and Hyrkanus felt tension in every muscle, because he needed to concentrate as much as possible. However, he was able to cover the distance and reach the dungeon, ready for the new trials and adventures that awaited within. Together with the skeletons, he cautiously stepped into the darkness of the dungeon, feeling tension and excitement, realizing that every step brought him closer to great discoveries and potentially rare rewards. The dungeon proved to be much more difficult than he had imagined, with narrow passages, traps, and hidden mechanisms. But Hyrkanus was ready for any challenge. He carefully scanned the space around him, checking every corner and wall, because a small mistake could be costly. Ahead lay a vast stone hall, filled with magical light falling from cracks in the ceiling, and there, perhaps, lay the bulk of the treasure and reward. Hyrkanus took a deep breath, gathered all his strength, and confidently moved deeper into the dungeon, ready for any dangers that awaited him on this path. After that, he was awarded the honorary title of the first explorer and discoverer of dungeons, recognizing his courage, curiosity, and ability to uncover the secrets of places where no one had ever dared to set foot. He found himself in an incredibly beautiful place that seemed like it was made for adventure. He had a clear motivation. If anyone started chasing him, he just had to go where there were no people. He was curious about what monsters might be lurking in this secret dungeon, as he had heard rumors of powerful creatures inhabiting these depths. Suddenly, a strange, incomprehensible sound was heard behind them. They turned around, trying to figure out who it could be. Seeing the creature, Hyrkanus held his breath. He had never seen anything like it before. However, he still could not understand its nature. After all, even in books about fantastic creatures, they didn't write about such things. They looked at each other in silence, exchanging fear and surprise. Hyrkanus began to get nervous. He realized that he was facing a slime, and he couldn't understand why he had come here to fight it. However, he soon noticed that fire had begun to appear inside the slime. At that moment, it began to dawn on him. This was the monster of the Reboot Garden. Monsters with this attribute are rare and valuable in the game. The items they leave behind can be used to enchant items of the same element, which is why they are incredibly popular. In other words, Hyrkanus could have become very rich thanks to this slime. He immediately ordered his skeletons to destroy every single monster. Slime became alert, sensing danger. The entire cave began to shake violently from the tension. Hyrkanus instantly understood what was going on. A huge level 70 salamander appeared before him, a mid-rank fire-type monster. He didn't expect to see her here at all. The salamander began to form a huge sphere of fire in its mouth, and immediately threw it at Hyrkanus and his skeletons. They were shocked. The creature was literally spitting fire, but they had no other choice until she became a serious threat. Hyrkanus decided to use his ace up his sleeve. It was a helmet of madness for one of the skeletons. The set also included a large bone armor. He could finally use the red orc skull to strengthen the skeletons, and in a moment, the skeleton was fully equipped, ready for battle. Even the lizard and the slime were scared of that sight. The skeleton looked really scary. In a moment, he was out of their sight. The lizard also disappeared without a trace. The skeleton was extremely strong and incredible in combat. Hyrkanus was pleased with the effectiveness of his skeleton knight. Soon they were attacked by a whole flock of salamanders. The fight was unequal against the crowd. Hyrkanus sighed calmly, not panicking. He chose a skeleton knight who successfully dealt with the enemies. There was no trace of the salamanders left. He dealt with them one by one, gaining experience. The skeletons worked faithfully under his command. Hyrkan was already imagining his vacation in the Maldives. After leveling up the skeletons, they could hunt on their own. Although the salamander essence turned out to be less than he expected, he easily made up for the loss of experience. However, he decided to continue working in the same pattern until he activated all the skeletons. He ordered them to continue in the same vein until they defeated the boss. After that, they would go to the Parung Forest. A few hours later, what he expected happened. They discovered an instant dungeon, the throne room. But you can't just get out of there. If he fails, he won't be able to log into the game for 2 whole days. Enough time for other hunters and bulls to beat him to the main quest. There were also no normal places left to farm in the district, so there was almost no choice. Although he had doubts, he still decided to go inside. He left all his possessions on the surface, relying only on his own strength. And so, he entered the throne room. There were many statues of knights there. It seemed to be an abandoned temple. Blade marks were clearly visible on the floor. When he turned his head forward, surprise seized him. Before him stood a creature with an incredible aura of magic. Her look literally screamed, "Don't come any closer." Hyrkanus immediately understood who this monster was. He ordered the skeleton to take a defensive stance, but the skeletons didn't have time to do anything. They were destroyed in 1 second. The skeleton warriors suffered extremely heavy damage and were completely destroyed. This became a great nuisance for Hyrkanus. No one even guessed that the spirit of a level 80 knight was here. Whether it was a monster or artificial intelligence is unknown. He had already encountered him in a past life. Back then, he was at about the same level as he is now, but without the support of the entire guild. He dealt with all his enemies, leaving them no chance of salvation, and their attempts to resist proved futile and helpless before his relentless power. Then he could have simply stumbled, taken a few steps back, and conserved his strength. But now that was a luxury he couldn't afford, even for a moment. He was well aware that any pause could be fatal, so even the slightest rest seemed like an unattainable luxury. So he focused all his magical energy and summoned his skeleton warriors again, filling them with mana so they could fight on the front lines and protect him from the enemy's inevitable strike. Then he loudly ordered them to attack with all their might, leaving the enemy no chance to retreat or maneuver, starting the battle from the very beginning with maximum aggression. The spirit of one of the warriors raised a sword wrapped in mana, and the light of magic shimmered along its blade, ready to cut through any defense. But the skeletons again had no time to do anything. The enemy mercilessly destroyed them before they could strike. And this seemed an impossible task for anyone but a true hero. For Hyrkanus, this already seemed like a hopeless situation. No strategy was working, and the enemy constantly outnumbered him in strength and speed. But he did not even think of surrendering. Despair only pushed him to new attacks and continuous maneuvers, because retreat was not an option. They used a variety of techniques and tricks, trying to at least slightly hurt the enemy and find a weak spot in his armor or defense. And suddenly one of the skeletons was able to make his transit. A momentary, unexpected strike that seemed likely to earn Hyrkanus praise for his precision and agility. He expected praise and approval from Hyrkanus for his success, preparing to feel support and approval from his leader. But Hyrkanus only shouted sharply at him, "Get out of here, quickly!" showing that the situation was much more serious than one might have thought. And at this very moment, a huge green sphere suddenly appeared in front of the skeleton, the light of which blinded the eyes, filling the space with terrible energy. The sphere exploded right in front of him, and the impact was so powerful that the skeleton warrior was instantly destroyed before he had time to realize what had happened. Before disappearing, he managed to warn the other skeletons. A blow to the heart is not always critical for this knight, trying to convey important information about the enemy's weaknesses and strengths. Destroying him was not easy at all. The enemy had incredible endurance and strength that ordinary skeletons or golems could not penetrate. Hyrkanus was perplexed. Ordinary magical creatures offered no chance of victory, and it seemed to him that all his efforts were in vain. At that moment, his mind was immersed in memories of the past, when, still young and inexperienced, he had tried to fight more powerful monsters. One of his guild members once asked him, "Why are you climbing a monster that's 4 times bigger than you?" And the question seemed absurd to him at the time, but Hyrkanus himself could not answer why he felt the need to fight such a dangerous enemy. It was something deep inside, like an inner calling. He thought of only one thing. Until he was finished with him, he would not receive any reward or food. And this thought kept him in constant tension and battle. This answer surprised his former friend, because they had never seen such determination and stubbornness in him. Everyone thought he was a bit crazy, but looking for complex strategies was not his style. He always relied on strength and endurance. If simple attacks didn't work, he would simply continue to beat his opponent until he exhausted him to the last drop of strength, even if it was endless. And most importantly, it worked. If a certain method worked, Hyrkanus continued to use it without changing his strategy. Then he noticed that the monster's spirit began to speed up, and its movements became increasingly dangerous, filled with powerful energy. The enemy was charging with great power, his every movement radiating magical energy, ready to destroy everything in its path. Hyrkanus was already on the verge, his body was wounded, but his spirit remained unwavering, and his heart beat in the rhythm of battle. The monster charged its sword attack straight into his stomach, giving the impression of an imminent blow and disaster. But it was only a trap. While the enemy focused on him, Hyrkanus prepared a surprise counterattack. Behind the monster, a skeleton knight was already standing, ready to attack and strike from an unexpected direction. Unexpected for the enemy, the skeleton severed the monster's limb. The arm flew several meters away, and the enemy was left shocked by the unexpected turn of events. The monster had not expected this development of the battle, and his concentration wavered, opening up an opportunity for Hyrkanus. Hyrkanus still insisted that he would not eat until he had destroyed the enemy, and this determination gave him strength in battle. At this time, the village of Sura Canyon was very bustling, with people going about their business, unaware that a fierce battle was taking place nearby. The matador walked through the narrow streets with the woman, discussing the large number of people in the village and their hustle and bustle. This was understandable. They were responsible for the improvement of the village, and all the routes were broken and chaotic, which made movement and control over the territory difficult. The matador sought a meeting with the same masked adversary known as Aha, and his thoughts were focused only on that. The woman considered him possessed and could not understand his behavior because everyone around him were just hunters of low-level monsters. To most, these monsters were weak and predictable, but for the mask of Aha, things were different. Only a few people dared to challenge beings much stronger than themselves. They were either crazy or born warriors, capable of incredible feats and desperate acts. And the matador believed that the mask of Aha combined both of these qualities at once, the strength of a warrior and the desperate determination of a madman.